simulator game. He's like very simple, kind of like, it had like a cult following. And so he's like, I'm going to make my version of Harvest Moon, which was like kind of was popular when I was a kid, like 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So he spends basically 4 years in solitude just building this game by himself before he releases it. For 4 years.
Was job? Was that job?
He lived off his girlfriend. His girlfriend had a grad degree stipend, and he had a part-time job as an usher. It was amazing. I mean, an usher is a terrible, unless you're literally trying to be like a cover artist covering the artist usher. Like you never want to be an usher. That's not your career's not going the right direction when you're doing that. So anyways, he launches this thing. Stardew Valley has sold 20 million copies. It sells for $13 a pop. And so he sold this thing. I think over time it has done 150 million in sales or revenue, and he's the only guy who built it by himself, which is honestly not that uncommon. Minecraft was largely built the same way. There's this guy Notch, who was the developer behind Minecraft. If you've ever seen it, he'll get on Twitch and he'll just code Minecraft. Like he'll just stream himself for like 12 hours just building the game. And like I think Minecraft had more people overall, but like one guy was really the driving force and the driving energy around it for many years. But Stardew Valley is my pick for biggest, 150 million off of one game dev.
The guy Notch, when he sold, I think he sold for like multiple billions, right?
3 billion, like that.
And I think he bought like he outbid Beyonce for like an $80 million mansion in LA, and he was tweeting out or sharing how everyone hates him now. He was like, I'm so lonely, this sucks, but he's still in this like fancy $80 million mansion. Do you remember that whole like ordeal where he was talking about how he like didn't get back with people until some of the people he hired hated him, and he was lonely, but he didn't come to these huge parties and he was lost and all that stuff. Do you remember all that?
No, I missed all that.
Dude, he like went through this whole spiel on Twitter about how like he hates his life, but
you know, I'm looking at this house is insane.
Was it 80 million?
70 million.
It was a fat. I remember
I would love to see Beyonce getting the news. It's like, oh, who did it? Who outbid me? Was it Spielberg? Who was it? Oh no, it must have been Lenny Kravitz. Who was it? Who outbid me on this? Like, Notch.
Yeah, I got him. All right, mine is StreamYard. So StreamYard, I'll have to remember when they launched, but I think they launched in 2019, right before the pandemic hit. And it was basically it was a way to stream events online and stream interviews and things like that online. These two guys scaled it to $30 million in revenue in 1 year for 18 months or so. And this mostly happened because of the pandemic. They ended up selling it to Hopin for $250 million. It was a mix of cash and stock. And Hopin ended up laying off a bunch of people like last year. But I've heard rumors that it's killing it. Have you heard these rumors?
Hopin?
Yeah.
No, I have not. I've heard the opposite of those rumors, but I don't know.
What have you heard?
Well, just like when the layoffs happened, it was basically post-COVID, events came back online like in person. So that's naturally going to hurt the business. Then they had massive layoffs. And I heard that the founders are taking a ton of secondary or something like that. So
I heard like 100 million plus in secondary.
Yeah, but maybe the business will. I have no idea. I just heard kind of like generally when you hear those three things, it's like massive layoffs, market, the crazy event that was driving your growth stopped, and the founders took. And people start talking about how much secondary the founders took. It's usually because the business is going in the wrong direction. Usually people don't bitch about secondaries when the thing is exploding.
I don't know. I heard the other way. I also thought that. And I heard the other way around. We talked about StreamYard like right when they were getting going, and then we talked about it again when they were acquired. Did you say you knew these guys?
I think I'd met. Back when I was doing Livestream, I met like kind of everyone in this space. I don't know. I gotta look up who these guys are, but I do know that they got to 14 million in ARR when it was just the two of them, and then they got to 30 million when by that time they hired up a team. So this is kind of like a hybrid. They got really far with just a couple people, and then they hired up, from as they scaled it before they sold.
And I remember going to the website when it was just them, and there was like the founder, and he was on the homepage. He was giving like a tutorial video on how to use the product. It was just him, like this camera on his lap practically, and he looked exhausted. He looked so worn out. I remember this during the pandemic when we were thinking about using them for something, and he looked like super haggard. But it was very impressive that these two guys have built this to sell for $250 million. And although it was cash and stock, so I don't know if the stock is worth anything. I heard it might be. So that might be one of the biggest ones that I've heard of, at least recent big ones. Another big one that it happened a long time ago, so I have no connection. It was Plenty of Fish. How much did Plenty of Fish get acquired for? Like $550 million.
Yes, hundreds, yeah.
And that was started by one guy named Marcus, who now I see online, and he seems like he lives the most lavish life and just does crazy shit. And so Plenty of Fish was basically one of the early dating websites. It was a marketplace. It was like OkCupid, but I think it was predominantly Canadian, and that had to be probably the biggest exit that I've ever heard of for a really small team.
Yeah, Plenty of Fish was unbelievable. That guy, isn't he like a nut? Plenty of Fish founder? I feel like that's a whole another story we should do one day.
I think it's a whole. I don't know. I haven't researched it enough to actually like verify the claims, but I've heard like a little like rumbling, like little stories that something weird is going on, but I don't know the truth.
Also, I love the fact that you met the streamer guys and they look haggard, and you're like, it's like in Silicon Valley when you see something like that, you put your arm around them and you're like, hey, you all right? Is it because of too much traction or not enough? I just need to know how I'm. It was too much. Yeah, it was too much traction. Okay, come here. You sleep on my couch. Let me feed you. Just take this check. Put me on the cap table. Like there's really 1 out of 10 of the haggard people. They're going to be down by too much demand, and 9 out of 10.
Who like that? Who like that? Who else have you met? I
remember talking to a guy Abder, and he was with. I met him after the fact. He told me the story, and I always remember after hearing the story, I was like, I should look at that. So what happened was Twitter started taking off in popularity right when it kind of got going in Silicon Valley, like it became like a thing. And Abder was him and his team were like kind of like data science people, and so they were like, all right, what can we build that makes Twitter work better? Because Twitter was such a simplistic product, and at the time it was like almost like a protocol. Like anyone can build apps on top of it or use the data for something. So he's trying to build something. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's sitting on a train. He starts coding this thing. He's like, I've done this research on sentiment analysis. And he's like, I was like, okay, so the story sounds a little bit boring. Who cares about sentiment analysis? He's like, yeah, you can figure out like how people are feeling about a certain topic because they're talking about it in a certain way. So he thought his story was boring. Well, my chin started to drift. I was like, is there anyone else in the car I can talk to? I was in a car with him in Ethiopia 4 hours straight. There's nowhere to run. So I'm hearing, I'm like, all right, let me hear the story. Yeah, go ahead. Tell me more about your PhD in sentiment analysis. What did this do? And he's like, so I was on a train and I'm building this thing. I'm trying to analyze what people are saying on Twitter to see if I could get the sentiment, the current mood or whatever. He's like, but then I realized actually what I'll do is instead of figuring out their mood, I'll just figure out what are they talking about a lot more than usual. That's kind of interesting. And he basically created trending for Twitter off of Twitter.
Oh, cool.
So he's like, oh, I can figure out that the word Olympics normally is only said this much, but it's being said 10 standard deviations more. So that means Olympics is trending, but it's above its par. And he's like, this is super cool. Like I basically have the 10 things that people are talking about on Twitter. I can kind of get that signal in a way that you couldn't really get at the time on Twitter. And so he created a separate website off of Twitter called Twitter Trending. I forgot what it was called. No website. And they started getting millions of hits on this thing. And they're just trying to, and he's trying to keep it up. He's basically drinking from the Twitter fire hose and he's got all the traffic. And they're trying to keep both of them working. Eventually Twitter buys them. So they become like employees 10 through 20 or something of Twitter.
Oh, sick.
And at the time, Twitter had the fail whale. It was just like constantly Twitter, the service was going down. It had so much usage. It was like this web 2.0. Like, it wasn't like scalable yet. They didn't figure out how to scale it. And he told me, he's like, for 6 months, he's like, I just woke up every day with like an imprint of my keyboard on my forehead. Like I had just passed out. I was working, trying to keep this damn side up, pass out, wake up. Oh, where was I? And I just kept going. He's like, that was 6 months straight of my life. He's like, I've never experienced anything like it. And at the time, I remember thinking, oh, there's levels to this thing. Like, that's what it feels like when you really have one of the winners. Like, and if you talk to people early at Facebook, and they talk about like what it was like working early at Facebook, it's like when people talk about living in New York, they're like, just the energy was, you can't explain it. And it's like, that's what you get when you're inside one of these generational companies at the early stage when they're scaling too fast.
Dude, that's exciting. I love that one. I like hearing those old stories like that. I always read those old books, like the hatching Twitter and all that shit. I love that shit.
Yeah, me too. All right,
let's go to highest degree of difficulty. Let's skip a category and come back to it.
Okay, so this is the hardest example, the one that we're like, how the hell did you even do that? And there's no way anyone else would have done this. You go first.
All right, I have one. It's called TinyWow. So I think the URL is just tinywow.com. So do you have that pulled up? TinyWow?
Yeah, got it.
All right, so I met this guy. He's a member of Hampton. So I met him. His name's Evan Gower. He had another website called Tech Junkie. Maybe you heard of Tech Junkie, but they like just talk about like tech topics, whatever. It's a pretty normal website, but he ended up selling for 8 figures. And on the side, he started this thing called TinyWow, which is a bunch of tools that include like how to convert a PDF, but then image editing tools that use AI. And it's one of those websites where you Google like convert this file to PDF. It is able to come up first. Right now, it has 6.6 million visits a month. And the reason it's insane. The reason it's interesting is right now it only does 20,000 a month in revenue because he says I just haven't turned on any of the monetization. It just has like little ads. He goes, I'm going to turn it on eventually. But right now, I'm just enjoying the summer and time with my family. So I haven't really like dug deep and like built it. And so basically, this guy Evan, he was.
You talking about the weather? Put on ads then. What are you doing? This is insane.
Dude, that's the cool part about these small businesses. And this is another guy I'm going to tell the story about. Has said the same thing. He goes, I felt like taking the summer off, so I just let it ride for a little while. So this guy Evan, he basically had a history as a developer. He says he doesn't do any development now, but he has a team of 3 people who are helping him, or one contractor who helps him with overseas, who's helping him actually like build it, implement. He basically just draws it, designs it. But the reason why this thing has taken off is if you Google, or do you remember like you ever see those videos on TikTok that say like here's 5 websites that should be illegal but aren't?
Yeah, so good that they should be illegal.
Yeah, it's like a shtick. So that is basically how the website got popular. It's got popular from those videos. And so the reason why this is really hard to create because getting traffic to like a content site or into a website like this is very challenging. Oftentimes, building the product is not the hard part. It's getting users and getting 6.6 million visits a month, mostly from social, quite challenging. We'll see if he's able to turn this. But I asked him, I was like, how big can this get? He's like, well, like I think of like Canva, so I'm like, I think it can make tens of millions of dollars a year in revenue because we're gonna ultimately we have this traffic. We can have like a feature that says, hey, you can edit this picture using our platform, and we'll charge a small fee. I think this actually could be a big business, but right now it's really tiny. He told me it costs $10,000 a month to run. And it's making $20,000 a month in revenue.
Wow. Yeah. Do you know how much remove.bg makes?
Who?
Did you ever use remove.bg?
No, what is that?
Oh, that was the old way. It's like if you need to remove a background from an image, like you need to just cut out the object and remove the background. Remove.bg was this website that was like just to go traffic. Yeah, it was just a go-to, and oh my god, 50 to 60 million and monthly visits. So it's just like insane. And remove.bg, it just had a stranglehold for me at least on doing this. It was like super quick. You just drag your image in, it just removes the background, boom, there you go. And then they charge for like you want it like 1080p or whatever. They started charging for like little things like remove this watermark. I'm sure this thing crushes. You know, I don't know how much revenue they do now, but I'm sure this is one of these like mighty businesses where it's a very small team.
Canva acquired them. It says that they had at least 100 million people come to their website last year. That's crazy. So it's acquired by Canva. So you can probably, I don't know if Canva has gone public yet. Maybe they have. I think actually they just did it last month. You might be able to dig through their numbers and see if they got acquired for how much. But that's crazy. That's so much traffic. This site TinyWow definitely could be something like that.
They started this in 2019. This is a company called Kaleido. And then they started in 2019. They sold it. This was 2021. So 2 years later for roughly $100 million.
Wow. Do they have funding?
I think the parent company, it looks like it's a side project of the parent company.
The reason why I said these are the hardest to make is getting that scale traffic that fast is so challenging. You know, like there's a lot of like software products that work in the name as one person companies. And that's challenging in the sense of like you have to put in a ton of hours and you actually have to like invent stuff. And that's very challenging. But getting traffic to me is more of an intellectual challenge. Where it's like, I have no idea like where to start. Like whereas I'm starting with software, like I'm gonna make one feature, then I'm gonna do this other feature, I'll talk to my users. It's a little bit, it involves a little bit of luck, a little bit of skill. But getting a lot of traffic to your website early on, I think there's less people that know how to do that. And so that's why I think that this is one of the harder things to start.
So here's my answer for highest degree of difficulty, Photopea. So Photopea is very, very similar. Basically, it's one guy who recreated the entirety of Photoshop in a web browser for free. So
oh my God.
Like, Photoshop is one of the most complicated products in the world. He recreated it by himself, gives it away for free, and made it work in a browser, which Photoshop doesn't. Photoshop is you have to download the app in order to make it work. It's just remarkable. The guy barely monetizes it, doesn't want to sell it. And if you go just search Photopea Reddit or like founder of Reddit, he goes and he talks about like why he built it, how he built it, and what how he thinks about it or whatever. It's pretty insane. And I think how much traffic does it get? Traffic-wise, like 13 million according to SimilarWeb per month. And he does at the time. This was a couple years ago. He said that he was doing 100,000 a month off this thing. And it was like literally from the most basic. Absolutely most basic of like ads. Like this is one guy Ivan who made it, and he's just like puts like a very simple banner ad on the site and makes like $100,000 a month. He did a post on Hacker News on April 11, 2021. He goes, hey guys, I'm Ivan. I'm the creator of Photopea. I made almost $1 million in the last 12 months, 90% from ads. The rest is from premium, which is users who pay to hide ads. That's not even much for premium. When you start your own project, you never know if you'll make $250,000. But if you get hired, you can be quite sure that you'll never make more than $250,000. So that's why I started it. And so this company, Photopea, I don't know how big it is, but depending on how many users it has, I can see it's getting sold for 9 figures, over $100 million. So he did an AMA on Reddit, and they said, hey, have you hired your first employee yet? This was a year ago. And he says, oh, yeah, I did my first AMA on Reddit. Lots of great people got in touch. I did end up hiring one guy from Prague who went to my university. But it'll take some time for him to get familiar with code. He hasn't done it. He hasn't done it yet. It's pretty crazy how this guy operates.
So why do you think this is the most challenging?
Just like, technically recreating Photoshop feature for feature is absolutely insane. Like I think that's just an insane endeavor. And then making it work in the browser, like making it performant in a browser is not easy either. So like for one person to do this, I think it's crazy.
That's insane. Yeah, the cool thing about these, like, I think the downside of these one-person companies is that everything relies on you, and that you don't have like anyone else to ask for help, and you can't hire anyone. You can't have anyone better than you doing something because you're the only person. And so in order to do this, I think a lot of these people they have a handful of traits I'll talk about in the end. But I don't understand how he could grind that hard for that long with all this pressure on him.
By the way, this guy says he put 7,000 hours into it before he made any money from it.
That's insane. So I think that just takes so much will. Do you remember Viral Nova? There was a guy named Scott DeLong. So Viral Nova was basically an Upworthy clone. It says like they're like, here's a list of 10 reasons why you don't want to go swimming after eating. You're not going to believe number 7. And so this guy would talk about like how it was just him writing 10 articles a day, and he was like, the pressure of all this traffic and all of this success is killing me. I feel so worn out all the time, and I don't understand how some people can sustain that for a really long time, like this Photopea guy.
Yeah, this is like when you go to someone's house and they're like, oh, do you want to see my model train set I'm building? You're like, what? Yeah, sure, why not? I'm here. And they take it out of the basement, and then it's just like they've recreated like the city of Vienna through their like they're just tinkering on this like one thing like I mean how long have you been doing this? And they're like, I just come here every night, I love it, and this is what I do. It makes me feel so good. And you're like, holy shit, this is like the most intense hobby. That's how I feel.
I'm not that type of person. Are you? You're definitely not, I think, right?
Come on. I'm not. Yeah, I envy those people. That's an amazing willpower. All right, let's do another one. Let's do on the other end. Easiest to recreate. So which of these 1% or 2% businesses do you think are easiest to recreate that is the opposite of the highest degree of difficulty? Go ahead.
So mine would be anything that sells information or service. So I put just any course creator, but you and I know a bunch of these people, of which you and I are both of those people. You know, we make hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year from like a course or two. And I think they're fairly easy to recreate. Another one is there's a company called Design Joy. You know what they do? I believe that.
Design subscription, basically. It's him.
Yeah, but the way that he positions it, it seems really hard to imagine that that's the truth. But basically, it's just this designer that you pay thousands of dollars a month for, and you have to make small changes to different design-related stuff. And he claims that it's just him, but I believe he claims that.
Yeah,
but
he says
that sounds like
he does $100,000 a month, so he does 1.2 million a year or so, around that range.
This
and it's basically you buy a
amazing.
subscription plan. So you pay and you buy like it's like 4 or 5,000 a month, and then you basically get one request at a time. And that's it. You can simply say, I'd like a design done, and he turns around in some, I don't know what his SLA is or how long it takes to do this, but it's like, it's cheaper than hiring a full-time designer, probably, unless like in the US. But yeah, that's
I think that's the easiest to recreate, but also the worst to run, which we'll talk about later. But that's probably the easiest one. Is like, do you know any other course people that do like I know Sam Ovens does 10 million revenue, 5 million profit, and for a while it was just him.
I met these guys. I met a guy recently who does like a product management course, and I was like, oh my god, who's taking a product management course? He goes, no, it's how to base your job interview as a product manager. Like how to get a job as a PM at one of these tech companies. And I think he was doing, what was he doing, like 2 million a year or something like that? I think they were doing like 2.5, yeah, 2.5 million a year roughly in revenue. I think with like 80% margins. And what they would do is they would basically say, they would give away free content that was like, how to get a job as a PM, how to interview as a PM, how to prep for this interview, what it was like talking to a Facebook PM, blah, blah, blah. They give away free content to get you kind of on the email list and get you to a website. And then they're like, hey, do you want to like get a job as a PM, which will pay you, let's call it $120,000 a year. If you want that job, buy this course and join this cohort course or whatever. And they basically sell this course for a couple $1,000s. That's going to help you get this job that's going to pay you over $100,000. And that's just like a very simple value proposition for somebody who wants to do that with their career. It was just him. It was him and three of them, three PMs that kind of like got together and made this thing.
Another example of an easy one to start, I think I told you about this, it's called Cyber Leads. So you go to getcyberleads.com. So it's CYBER leads. So getcyberleads.com. It's this guy named Alex West. And basically it's a newsletter where I think it costs $400 to $1,000 a month. So $400 to $1,000 a month, depending on what you do. But basically he goes and he handpicks different companies that have recently raised money, and based off a bunch of attributes he thinks are about to hire an agency. And then he gets all these agency owners to sign up to his service, and he emails this list out once a month along with like the contact information, the hiring decision, or the hiring, like whoever's managing ads and whatever. And you just contact him on.
You got your Facebook quote as a testimonial. Do you use this?
No, I don't use this. I talked about it on the pod. I talked about it on the pod like 2 years ago. I've never used it. You've
never used it, but he sure used you.
He used it at the beginning. I don't know. Is there anything? Can you say anything about these people who do this? I talked about it on the pod. I said it's so freaking simple. The value's so clear. I guess I said that on the podcast. I used that as a quote.
Yeah.
Is there anything I can do?
You can tell that. Take it down. You can always say that.
Oh, sorry. Let me wrap up. My thing, selling information. So anything that you sell information, that's the easiest thing to start.
Yeah, I think so. I went the same route, but I'm going to give more detail because I think when you tell somebody selling information is the easiest way, they're like, cool. What? So what do I do?
It's like give 3 examples.
Yeah, but I think you have to break it down a little further. So you know this guy Lenny, Russian last name.
I like Lenny. Rogowski or
something along those lines.
I like Lenny.
So Lenny, I think, used to work at Airbnb or something. He was like a growth / like product guy, and so he's got Lenny's newsletter. He's got Lenny's community. He's got Lenny's job board. And basically, he was like, I'm going to put out tons of free thought leader content on a specific super niche topic that only certain people are going to care about, but they're going to care a lot. And that's kind of the key with this stuff is how do you put out free content to establish yourself as an authority in a niche so that you can then monetize that through either consulting services, job board, paid community, or paid content, paid newsletter. Right? That's the formula. And you can look at the Design Joy guy. He does exactly this. He puts out free content, examples of design work, and then says you can hire me for design work. Lenny does the same thing. He puts out free content. He's got really good stuff like, how did these 10 huge marketplaces, how did they get their first 1,000 users? And he goes deep, and he's like, I'm going to interview them. I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to get the real answer on the specific 0 to 1 question that's going to be highly relevant to other people going through that same challenge.
I think it's a podcast too.
He's got a podcast. Like at one point, his job board was doing a couple $100,000. I'm sure the newsletter does a couple $100,000 in sponsorships.
Are you talking about monthly or annually?
Annually. At least
way more.
Like, I know at the beginning his job board, I don't know what they're doing now, but like I would bet his entire roll up of job board, content, sponsorships, so podcast plus newsletter, and then he's got a paid thing, right? He's got like paid community. What do you think Lenny's total thing is? 2 million, 3 million?
Yeah, for sure.
It's about 2 to 3 million a year. And he did that, I would say, in a period of like 2.5, 3 years. It seemed like I think. For years, it seems like. I think
it's a fun too.
He kind of put his foot down on the content side. He kind of appeared on the scene, I would say, like 2 years ago. Obviously, you kind of know your stuff, right? So he's like, spent time learning, a decade being awesome inside these companies in order to do so. So I don't mean to make it sound overly simplistic, but there are people who did it without that too. So another example is Harry Dry, one of my favorite content creators in the whole world. The guy I tried to recruit like 100 times to do something with me because I feel like
me too.
Something great.
Me too.
He keeps bullshitting and not saying yes, but he's gonna say yes eventually. So he's got marketing examples. He does a great job with his blog called Marketing Examples. Now, I don't know how much marketing examples makes. I would guess $250,000 to $500,000 as just him making content.
I think he's young.
He's very young. He didn't do the put in 10 to 15 years, become an industry, like do the job, cut your teeth, and then go make content. He's like, no, I'm pretty sure I can just look at what's out there and like give my opinion on it and it'll work. I'll study the shit. And that's how I feel like a lot of people also can do it. You can be the curious novice approaching these topics and become an expert just by studying them intensely. And so I think Harry Dry would also be one of the easiest to recreate. Not because he's not talented. He's super talented, but I think that's kind of stuff that anyone can do. Anybody can just say, I'm going to study what makes TikToks go viral. And I'm going to put out content about viral TikToks. I'm going to become the expert breaking down content TikToks going viral. And then brands are going to know me as the guy that they should talk to about TikTok consulting, right? Like, or like advertising on TikTok. And like, you can just build your niche audience and your niche authority in that space. A lot of people are trying to do AI right now.
And the thing about Lenny and Harry was people were doing, so first of all, like a newsletters, community podcast, that's existed since forever. So it's not a unique business model. And also people have been talking about that type of stuff for a long time. But what's interesting is that they were both early-ish, where there was only maybe, I don't know how many, but they felt like they were early-ish talking about it to this customer, to this community on this platform. So both of those guys, I think, got popular on Twitter right before the pandemic started. I think I remember seeing Harry in 2018, 2019, which I wasn't even really using Twitter as a power user back then. But they all seem a little bit early. So I think timing matters for a lot of these things. Speaking of which, that Facebook Threads thing, no idea if that's going to be a thing or not. But that's an example of like, hey, there's this new thing right now. If you want
nothing to lose, you better be there. Yeah, just go be around there, see what's going on.
Yeah, that's what I was like. People did with Clubhouse. I don't know if that worked out or not. But
the way I say it is like most entrepreneurs, we're actually surfing waves. You don't get to create the wave, but you do have to paddle out. You got to be on your board out there in the water. You got to paddle out, and, which is a big effort. And then you got to wait. And sometimes it's a dud. Sometimes it's just a small wave. You got to paddle back out again. But when you catch a good one, that's what you got. And we'll see how good you are at surfing. You might wipe out the first couple times you try it, but like that's your job as an entrepreneur is to paddle out, be out there, and start trying to surf these waves and get a sense for where are the big waves and how do I not wipe out when I do find one.
So this episode, you're giving a really in-depth surf analogy. Last episode, you gave us a baseball. What did you say? A slow swing? Fat pitches. It was fat pitches. Have you ever played baseball? Have you ever played baseball or surf in your life?
Bro, I was starting right fielder for my high school team, which anybody who knows baseball knows that means you're the biggest scrub on the team because that's who they put in right field. Is the guy who's the ball never comes to right field. And,
did you play baseball in China? Like they were just learning.
I might have been in China.
You went to high school. You went to high school in China, or Australia. Like it was,
hey, bro, there's like we play the ball as it lies. There, I got a golf analogy for you too. I was in China, but that's where I'm gonna be. All right, so let's go to the next one.
All right, listen up. One of the greatest things I ever did at my old company, The Hustle, was I hired this woman named Steph Smith. Steph is amazing. She is so good at breaking down company.
A few of my friends who have been on it, how it works. So basically, they told me that it's Jamie who produces it, and it's Joe. And then they have one other guy named Matt, I think. And I forget his name exactly. I think it was Matt. And basically, Matt sends Joe a list of like 30 people. They're like, hey, I can get these 30 people, these 30, let me know who you want. And sometimes he just ignores it. Every once in a while, I'll say that person and that person. And that's all he says. And I've heard that's just those 3 people.
That's amazing. So I think most people just think, oh, Joe Rogan, he's just a podcaster. Yeah, he is a podcaster, but that thing is a juggernaut. It is a media juggernaut. So the Spotify obviously paid him hundreds of millions to be there for a couple of years. But even before that, just off the sponsorships, off of the Alpha Brain, a product that they built off of it, Joe Rogan, I think, has the most fun probably of anyone on the planet. This is my sense. He took all of his hobbies. He's like, oh, I like UFC. He gets to be the UFC commentator, doing exactly what he would want. He gets to go sit ringside, commentate for these fights, and analyze the fights. But he only does it for the ones in Vegas that are an hour flight away from him. He doesn't do any of the ones that require a bunch of travel. And so he does all the best ones. He does none of the worst ones. He was like, I want to do stand-up comedy. So he does stand-up comedy, sells out theaters all around the country, and gets to make people laugh for a living. That's his podcast where he's like, I'm going to have conversations with the people I want. And people are like, oh, Joe, 3 hours is too long. He's like, that's the type of conversation I want to have. So I'm going to do it my way. And it worked. And so I just think he just dictated how he wants to live life on his terms. I think he has the most fun. I think his business is absolutely a mighty business, and that it's just, let's say, 1, 2 to 3 people that is building a thing that does over $100 million in revenue, which if you just value something like that traditionally, which is not apples to apples, but if you have a thing that can do $100 million a year in revenue
for multiple years,
typically that's $1 billion property. Obviously it's weird. You can't really sell Joe Rogan Experience because you need him as tightly branded with him. But let's say at least he's built something worth $100 million. I think we can agree on that because generated $100 million profit for him. And so he's built, with a very small team, a multi-$100 million business at the middle.
And he has this new thing called the Comedy Mothership. It's like a mile from my house in Austin, and there's always a line out the door to get into that place.
Yeah,
if you drive by at 6 o'clock, there's every single night there's been a line out the door to go there, and it looks awesome.
Right. So yeah, most fun.
All right. It sounds like I'm trying to promote Hampton. I'm not. It's just that when I had to prepare this episode, I just looked through our database and picked out people, and we just written a blog post about this guy. His name's Joseph Mambre, and he started this company called Gym Streak. And this guy's super fascinating because he has all the attributes of what a lot of these thinkers have. But basically, he's from Zimbabwe, moved to England when he was 12 or 13. That was the first time that he experienced the internet. He taught himself how to code. He taught himself design, and then he launched this thing called Gym Streak. At first, it was just an app for tracking your workouts, and then what he did was he went and got his buddy to wear one of these suits, and that way he could do 3D visualizations of all the exercises and what they need to look like. So he has hundreds of them, and so his app, it's free to use, and they have some premium thing, and basically you track your workouts. He uses AI to suggest which weights you should do for the next workout, and if you don't know what the exercise does, and they'll suggest workouts and exercises to do. He has hundreds of these 3D models of what a proper bicep curl or what this other type of exercise looks like. In year 1, he did $300,000. That was in year 2021. In year 2, he did $2.5 million. And his goal, he says, by in the next 2 years, I want to get to $15 to $20 million a year in revenue. And he's the only employee. I don't believe he has any contractors. I think he told me that he got most of his users from Facebook and TikTok ads, and he hired a consultant in an agency to help him learn how to do that. And right now he said, I'm taking the summer off, so our growth this year might still only be 2.5 or 3 million a year in revenue. But I don't feel like buying ads or staying on top of that, so I'm taking the summer off because we just had a kid. But super fascinating to see a guy who basically came from Zimbabwe, didn't use the internet until he was 12, 13, and taught himself how to do all this. He's like one of those really cool tinkers. And on that blog post, you can see pictures of him arriving from Africa and learning how to work the computer. It's super fascinating. You'll see pictures of him with his iPhone and a laptop at the gym, filming people doing the curls so he can use his AI or whatever to get the 3D imaging. Really fascinating company. I think Gym Streak is awesome. If this could get to 15 or 20 million in revenue like he thinks, that would be a monster business for one person.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. Wow, love that. Good for him. That's really, really cool. Next category. Business we most want to own. So I think this is specifically a good question because for us, a business we want to own would be the lowest maintenance business because neither of us want to really run an extra business right now. So it's which business would you want to own because it is very much autopilot. So it's not design joy. It's not people are paying you, you're providing a subscription. It's not one of those content of course businesses where you constantly have to create new content in order to stay relevant and get more customers. I think we both have the same one. Let's do the same one that we both are really interested in. You explain it.
No, you go first.
All right, Milled.com. So most people don't know Milled.com is MILLED.com. And it's a really, really simple website. It's just a compilation of email marketing that different companies do. So if you want to see what are my competitors sending for their 4th of July sale, you just go to Milled.com, you search the brand, and you'll see, okay, here's what Ridge Wallet sent for their 4th of July. It's top one on the site right now. So it says, you just click and it shows you the exact email that they sent. So you can see the design, you can see the offer, you can see the copy, and you can use that to get inspiration for what you should be doing for your email marketing. And this guy built this site, I don't know how long ago now, but he's posted on Hacker News a little bit about it. And it's one person, it's a side project. He does $1 million a year on it. And he said, I was doing email marketing for a brand. I noticed two things. One, it took us several days to create each email blast. And two, I had to subscribe to like dozens of other competitor emails just to do research for them. So my hypothesis was I could create a site that would just sign up for all the brands, email newsletters, and then make it easier for anybody who's trying to do email marketing. Right? That's the core pitch for it. And he's just been running it as a side project. Doesn't take much maintenance. Doesn't, he can just do nothing on it for a little while.
And it makes money through ads.
Yeah. So they use ads on the website here. You can see like I have it open, and he basically got like a link to the brand itself, and then he's got like a cybersecurity like ad here popped up below. He's got like a skincare ad. Yeah, it's display ads.
So, but here's another way how he makes money. So basically, you're a marketer. You go to Mill and you want to see like it looks like some shoe brand. They ran this campaign, and you want to check out the email and you read it and get inspired, whatever. You click that ad, and it takes you to the shoe company, and it's using an affiliate link if you buy some of the shoes. Right. This is a horrible way to monetize. This is a really amazing product, under monetized website for sure. But good for him for getting the traffic in the first place. But that's a horrible way to monetize.
Yeah, I agree. But I think the guy doesn't care. It's just like this is easy,
cool.
low maintenance, which is why I put it in my one I want to own because it's low maintenance and I think it still has a lot of upside left.
I'll do one for one I want to own. So I said anything that is like marketplacey, sort of like marketplaces. Sometimes if you do it right, those they don't run themselves entirely, but the community kind of handles business. BuiltWith. So BuiltWith was started in 2015 or 16 probably. BuiltWith is like the most niche shit ever, but it's a really big niche. So you go to BuiltWith in order to see which plugins a website is using if they are using WordPress. And the reason why that's important is you go to a website you like and go, oh, I love this feature they have. Let's go to
WordPress, Shopify also.
That's new. It started with just WordPress, I think. And so you like just tell me like the plugins and tell me the everything that they're using. Shopify and BuiltWith, Shopify and WordPress. It has something like tens of millions of people going there a month, and does at the time when I first found them, I think in 2020, I think they're doing 14-15 million revenue with just one person. So I think that would be a really cool company to own. So I think it's super valuable. Once you get all that traffic, those people come back to you all the time. I think it's a really valuable site. Do you know anything about BuiltWith?
Yeah, just what you said there. I've been using it for a long time. Basically, if you see a website, you want to know what they use for whatever they use, just go to BuiltWith. It's pretty great. It's kind of like a data. It's almost like a data index, right? It's like more like a database than it is a marketplace in a way. But I agree, it's kind of amazing. All right, let's keep going. We got a couple categories left. We have Rookie of the Year. So a new one that we found. I think you might have already covered yours in here. But
dude, it's boring. I didn't want to say the same thing twice. But this guy Joseph Mambre, like I love his story. I think that this guy's gonna be a big deal, and I take a lot of pride in trying to find people before they're like really popular. I think read the blog post that I've linked up there from the Hampton site. It's really good. I think this guy's gonna be a winner. So that's my Rookie of the Year. What's OnlyFinders?
OnlyFinders is mine. So this is one that I don't know how old it is, maybe a couple years old now. So OnlyFinders is a search engine for OnlyFans. So if you want to find a type of model on OnlyFans, so you're into blonde Asians or like whatever good-looking midgets, whatever you're into. So you can search on OnlyFinders, and it will give you a list of top-ranked profiles for that thing. So as you know, I've been down the OnlyFans rabbit hole where I'm like, I think there's a lot of potential in the OnlyFans world of like businesses, and this was one of them that I found. And OnlyFinders is run by one guy. He's awesome. He listens to the pod, and he crushes it. So he crushes the SEO game for OnlyFans. If you search for a bunch of different popular searches, and in fact, actually, what he did was smart, which is he didn't want to just rank for like the general searches, like best OnlyFans or something like that. Like he wants the high-intent ones. So he wants the person who's searching for like whatever. I don't know if people search for like
redhead.
Yeah, redhead.
So if you go to a site, you click the button on the right hand, and it says like what the top searches are. So it's like Indian.
Girls with boyfriends.
I don't want to read half of this stuff.
But yeah. So it's categories. What he did was he ranks really high for the categories that that's like clearly people's thing. And it's like, I don't know what the thing is, but if you got a thing, I got it for you. And because of that, those are really, really high intent searches. And what he does on the other side is he goes to OnlyFans models and agencies and he says, hey, if you want more traffic, I have tons of people searching for your exact thing. Pay me per click for every person I send to you. So he's basically recreated Google. It's a search engine where you get paid per click to send somebody with intent to your site. And it does a really, really good job. And OnlyFans does not have a discovery section on purpose. They decided they don't want to be in the discovery business. They want to only be in the like the kind of the underlying tools underneath these creator profiles. And so he does this. And this site OnlyFinders generates like $1 million a month. This is an incredibly lucrative business that he has. And so and it's just been surfing the growth of OnlyFans, which has grown like exponentially. Like OnlyFans a few years ago was very small. 4 or 5 years ago was very small, and then it got bigger and bigger. It's like sort of like, I mean, the curve looks unreal. OnlyFans is bigger than Twitch. It's bigger than like some of these massive websites now, and it generates a lot of money. Like they pay out billions to creators on the platform. And so if you can be part of that ecosystem, it's valuable.
That's insane.
I have now met multiple people on OnlyFans that you've never heard of, girls that are doing between 1 and 2 million a month on their profile.
No way.
It's all profit, but their body is the cogs. So it's all profit basically. They have like, usually they have like they'll have like some of them as you get bigger, you have like an agency that manages it. And the funny part is, by the way, like the way OnlyFans works is like, okay, so the money is made in basically like the chatting. So it's not you pay for a picture. It's actually you pay to like kind of like have some personal connection with them, somebody come chat with them. And it's like the conversation and the stuff that happens when they're upselling them in the conversation is where it happens. And so they just have like a call center. They have like a farm of people in the Philippines that are doing the chatting for them. And they pay them like a rev share for the revenue that they generate during the chats.
Hey,
and so it's lonely dudes in America talking to lonely dudes in the Philippines. It's like that's what OnlyFans, sort of like boils down to in many cases for these like really popular accounts. No one person can handle the amount of volume that they get.
So what are they doing with this money? They have huge income, and how long do you think they do it for? 5 years, 3 years?
Yeah. It's funny, they kind of exit, they burn out, and they'll just sell their name, likeness, and photo library, but you run it and just give me a rev share, give me 50%.
It's like Bruce Springsteen. That's what he did. The same thing. The boss. This is insane. I don't know much. I don't know much about this shit. This is absolutely insane. The engagement on these things are wide.
If you have an OnlyFans business, reach out to me. Sean@seanpuri.com. I want to invest in OnlyFans businesses that are just cash flow.
Are they cool? Like when you met these?
They're cool. The problem is they're very hard to sell and they're very easy to be killed. And so they need kind of like strategy on like how.
No, I mean the girls.
Oh, I don't know.
You said you hung out with them, a couple of them.
I hang out with them. I just talk to them. Yeah, they're nice people. I don't know.
That's insane. How did you get in touch with them?
Internet, bro. What do you mean? How many times on here have I talked about OnlyFans and then people basically like, oh, you're into that, so they email you.
Well, they probably have a million Indian guys like DMing them. I mean, that's insane. This is insane.
I don't go through. When you see a big line at the front door, you don't go wait in that line. You have to go find a side door, and the side door is generally, some dude who listens to our podcast that runs their business or their manager, and that's kind of like the way it is.
All right, if we do. All right, last category is worst of the best. I have a different one, but I'd have to say OnlyFans would be up there. But I have another.
So worst businesses. These are all cool businesses, but which ones are our least favorite? So yours gonna be OnlyFans?
No, I mean, it would be, but I already have something else. Kevin Van Trump. So Kevin Van Trump, I met this guy. Sean likes him a lot now. I met him in 2018. I was at a conference, and Kevin Van Trump is like 6 feet tall, and he's like really big. He's like a very, very large, overweight guy. And he walks up to me, and he's got this super thick accent. He goes, "Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?" Like he just starts talking to me, and I'm like, this guy's so confident. And he starts talking about all my newsletters and the hustle and all this stuff. And he's got this thick accent. He's wearing a Ramones t-shirt, and he's got like Converse on. He just looks like a Walmart guy. And then like he dropped he drops like 1 or 2 lines where for some reason we talked about art. He's like, oh yeah, that Picasso, I got one of them some bitches. Like he said something like that. I was like, what? So I let it slide. And then I go, how many subscribers are on your newsletter? And he goes like, oh, 60,000. And he goes, hey, how much do you guys charge for yours? And I go, oh, it's free. We make money on ads. You charge? He goes, yeah, we charge like $300 a month. I forget exactly what it was. And I'm like, do the math in my head. And I'm like, wait, that's $20 million a year. He goes, yeah, something like that. I don't even know. And I started hanging out with him. And basically, this guy's kind of man Trump. He's got this newsletter where he talks about agriculture and like how it impacts commodity prices. And he's brilliant. And I get to know him a little bit more. And you're like, oh no, you just have a Southern accent. He like was a Wall Street like trader. The guy's brilliant. He's amazing. And he lives in Kansas City. And I've done a Zoom call with him. And you see like he's got like these custom built motorcycles in the back of his like house. And he's got like all these Picassos and shit. The guy's killing it. But that same day when I hung out with him, I was like, hey, do you want to go get dinner? He's like, yeah, I can go get dinner. We hang out at 8:30. He goes, hey man, I gotta run. I gotta write tomorrow's newsletter. And I was like, what? He goes, I do it every day. I've done it every day for 10 years. I go, what do you mean every day? He goes, 6 days a week. I send a newsletter and it's 2,000 plus words. It's really long. He does it every day. And he was making all this money. I don't think I would trade life with him though, just to have all that money.
I had the same answer. I think he's amazing. You put me on to him. I met him and his son. Such awesome people. Like
They're awesome.
super fun.
So awesome.
Just fun to be around. Smart. Really nice, just kind. People don't like, no pretense about them. And same thing. He was hosting FarmCon. I went because you had told me about him and introduced me to him. And when I go there, we're
getting a conference called FarmCon.
Yeah, FarmCon, which is like the biggest farming conference together. So I go to Kansas and it was awesome. Yeah, it was amazing. And I'm there and we're talking. It's like 11 at night. It's like the whole event's done. Everyone's at the bar. Every single person is drinking a beer. Every single person is drinking a beer. And he's like, I gotta go to the bedroom. I gotta go back to my room real quick, write tomorrow's edition. And I was like, hey, you write it yourself still? And he's like, yeah, I write it. I've written it myself by hand every night. And he started this thing more than 10 years ago. Like I think he'd said like, that was like 20 years basically. He's been writing this like 18 years or something insane.
Every day almost.
Yeah, and it's long too. It's not like just some cookie cutter like here's 3 links that are interesting. It's like Jerome Powell came down, said this, and he said this, said that. Here's how this is going to affect corn futures, and here's what I'm betting over here. And and there's a bunch of memes. It's basically his market analysis for like crop commodities, and there's a bunch of memes underneath it. He's like, nope, never do ads. I was like, I just want to build as much trust as I can in this community, so I never advertise. I charge for it. That's why we have FarmCon. That's why everybody shows up. Is because I built a lot of trust over the years. And I learned more about business from that guy in like 1 hour than I did in my entire like 4-year education at Duke. Like he said to me, he said a bunch of things that I love. I put this in my newsletter. I did a feature on him. I wrote a bunch of lessons, but one of them that he said was, he goes, yeah, content's cool, but he's like, being an investor is the best job in the world. You kidding me? He's like, and he just said it so matter of fact. He's like, there is no better job in the world than being an investor. It is the best. And you sort of think about that, you're like, all right, well, that sounds, whatever, I guess kind of obvious. And it's like, okay, if that's true, then how do you get into that job? Like, if that is true for you, how do you architect your life to get there? Because he was basically just like, look, these are great. Yeah, I personally make a lot of money, but I wish I was just an investor. I would have been a better choice. And he talks about investing because I think he was on Wall Street before he started doing what he was doing.
Yeah.
And he goes, I was early into Bitcoin. I was early into Facebook. I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I wasn't as early as I could have been. He's like, I got into Bitcoin like in 20. He's like, we started hearing about it at FarmCon like in 2013, 2014. I didn't buy it until 2015, 2016. I should have been in it right when I first heard it. It's the same thing with Facebook. He goes, 2 lessons for you in investing. Number 1, the best trades are gonna be ones where you buy them, you put them in the drawer, you never think about them again. He's like, that was the best thing I did about Bitcoin. I bought Bitcoin, put it in the drawer, never thought about it again. Heard all the news, didn't care, it's in the drawer. And I was like, damn, it's in the drawer. That's a cool concept of like, what investments can you just have the conviction and you put in the drawer? You say, I'm not gonna react to the daily news cycle about this investment. I'm gonna let the 10 years play out on this investment because it was let's see what happens on the long term type of bet. Second thing he said was, he goes, you always get a second chance to get on the train. With the best investments, there's always a second chance on the train. He's like with Bitcoin, you think you missed it, and then the price will come down. That's your chance to get back on the train. And most people by that time, they spend the whole way up wishing they got on the train. Train comes back around and they get scared. They don't get back on.
Yeah.
Same thing happened with Facebook. Facebook, we had our chances when it was private, and it goes public. It goes up, crashed back down to $19. I got back on the train. That train came around. I got right back on. And he's like, yo, that will happen for the best investments. And I sort of look for this now, like, how do you override the psychology that most people have, which is when it's going up, you wish you had gotten in earlier. Then when it crashes down, you're too afraid to buy in because you feel like, oh shit, is it over? Did it pop? Did I miss it? Was I wrong? And it's like, well, then you lose. You want to buy on the way up, and you don't want to buy on the way down. That's a recipe for being poor, right? Like, buy high, don't buy low, right? That's not gonna work. And so those 2 little lessons were one that stuck out for me. But this guy's business is amazing.
He's an amazing guy, and the reason he's amazing, among other things, is he breaks all the stereotypes. You'll think that he's just this like hippie guy, just like people used to think about me. And like I grew up around people just like him. Turns out he's like brilliant. He'll like you're talking about Facebook, and he knows way more about it than you do. He'll probably knows all about Bitcoin. I mean, the guy's brilliant, and I love hanging out with him and his friends because it teaches you like I'm a fucking idiot for judging people a certain way. These guys are all badass, and they're fun as shit.
I did a call the other day with another guy, from FarmCon, same sort of guy. He's this white guy, maybe I don't know, his 50s-ish, something like that.
But he's super rich because so many
super rich. And like, I think this guy, I don't know how rich this guy is.
Private jet rich.
I don't know how rich this guy is, but the guy who introduced me to him was just like, yeah, this guy's worth, $300, $500 million personally. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. And I was like, do his deals, like he's so excited about these deals. Like, does he actually make money on these? Like, he had a record of success? He's like, yeah, he has. So this guy's got phrases for days. I have this doc that I keep on my phone that I call phrases. Anytime somebody says something that's just like funny or worded well, it just sticks out to me. It's a punchy phrase. I write it down. At FarmCon, I filled out my phrases thing, like, because there were so many. So this one guy, I don't want to say his name, put him on blast, but he was at a dinner with us. So Kevin Van Trump and this guy was at a dinner. It was like a private dinner at FarmCon. And he stands up and he goes, everyone was doing introductions. And so I'm like, oh, hi, I'm John. And yeah, I work in tech. And just fucking kill me. I guess I'm boring. Like, that's like introductions. This guy stands up. He goes, yeah, my name's so-and-so. He goes, exactly what he said. He starts, I don't know who won the World Series. I can't tell you how to get 6-pack abs. Hell, I don't even know where the remote is in my house. But I know one thing. I know how to structure deals. And today I'm talking about a deal that I'm doing. And he gave this intro, and I was like, what an incredible way to introduce yourself. I don't know where the remote is, but I know one thing. I know deals. And I was like, that is incredible. Then he's talking about how old he is. He goes, you cut me in half. There's gonna be a lot of rings. So that's nice. And then he goes, and then I did a call with him the other day, and I get on the Zoom call, and I just finished my workout, and my trainer was like insisting. I was like, dude, I gotta run. I gotta get on this call. He's like, all right, just take your call, but let's do your like, kind of like we try to do like this like mild fashion, like kind of like you're rolling like a foam roller type of thing, like you're kind of like foam rolling out at the end. So we were doing it, and he's like, just do it while you're on the call.
Foam rolled with this guy on a call.
So I get on the call, I turn on the video, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna show him what's going on. I'm like, sorry, let's wait, I'm doing like some stretching. And he goes, he's a big dude. He goes, okay, cool. If it looks like I'm stretching, call 911 because I'm having a stroke.
Dude, why would you take a call like that?
Incredible wit. Like to have that line immediately ready when I say that I'm stretching. If it's sorry for looking I'm stretching, I was like, wow, that was literally so fucking funny to me. I was blown away. I was like, I don't even care what else happens on this call. That was so impressive, so good.
What state did he live in?
He's in Tennessee, I think.
What the hell is a deal structure? I don't even know what that means. Like he
does basically private equity, so he buys companies. But he's like, I just know how to find a great deal, how to put the finance together, and how to structure it so that like I get the maximum value out of these deals. It's kind of like what he does. And like, I'm like, have you done any deals like I would have heard of? And he's like, Disneyland? I was like, he's like, a lot of windows in Disneyland. We do all the windows at Disneyland.
Oh my God.
The window company got him a Disney contract. We do all the windows at Disney. Do what with the windows? Like, clean them?
We got to have
Tear
him
them?
on the pod.
This guy's incredible.
What's yours for world's worst of the best?
I had both Design Joy and Kevin Van Trump just because of the time thing. So I love that Kevin Van Trump has built like this amazing power niche in the farming industry, but I would not want to be the guy who has to write the newsletter every night because the pressure is got to watch more morning. I felt that during Milk Road for a month, and I was like, nope, not doing it this way.
Yeah.
Although I think if I was him, I would just find a way to hire somebody to do that. I can't believe he hasn't done that yet.
Does Ben Thompson still do?
Yeah, so Ben Thompson is my version of that. So he does Stratechery, and every day he writes a newsletter about basically the same 4 things. I don't even know how he does that. Like he talks about Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and like what's like kind of the business and strategy of what they're doing.
These are so long. These are so long.
He does this daily, long form. His audience is like has the highest bar. His audience is like the smartest people in the tech industry. Like VCs, all that. That's who reads him every morning. So he's got to come with like original content that's super smart about the same topics. He's been doing this for like a decade, and he makes $3 million a year roughly doing this. Off his paid.
He only charges $120 a year.
Yeah, I think he upped his price. I don't know what it is now, but he like did raise his prices at some point.
120. I'm at $12.
I think it was 100 and now it's 120.
Oh my God.
Like, he's
Like,
like $1,000 a month for this thing, but he's good. I think Ben's awesome, so I don't read it as an knock for him. I think I would hate the pressure of the daily, super insightful thing that I have to write every morning, original content about like the same kind of like 10 companies is, I literally don't know how he does it. Somebody told me they're going to do that. I'd be like, what are you saying? This makes no sense. He does it every day sitting in Taiwan.
This is the worst. This is the worst. It is amazing, but yeah, I would never want to do this. So what do we think? I want to know the listener if they think that these all in depth on one topic, they dig this. They dig the award category style or the award style. What do you think?
Yeah, this is an experiment for us of like doing a few focused episodes, themed episodes. So today's theme was these 1 or 2 person businesses that crush it. Do you like this or do you like the freestyle? Freestyle's a lot easier. This one takes a lot of work. But if people love this, you got to go in the YouTube comments and show us if we should do more of these or no. We're cool either way, but this is an experiment. So let us know in the YouTube comments. I think we should do takeaways. All right, so here's my quick takeaways. The most common industries you see these 1 or 2 person businesses that crush are just like thought leader on social media, just putting out free content on social media. E-commerce, we didn't do any e-com ones in this, but like there's a bunch of e-commerce businesses that could do like, $1 million a year in profit that are run with 1 or 2 people, and then you can do agencies for everything else. Games, so we talked about Stardew Valley, Minecraft, there's a bunch of games that are built like this. Apps and plugins, so plugins on top of things like a Figma plugin, a Google Sheets plugin, a Gmail plugin, that sort of thing. And then data aggregators like Built With, which basically compiling data like mill.com, compiling a bunch of things that are of the same thing. So it's, you go search and you find what you want because they've aggregated and only find the same thing. It's a data aggregator. Strategy. So here's a couple strategy points. You need to be either amazing, 100% awesome at distribution, meaning you're the influencer, you're the content creator, or you need to be 100% awesome on product. You're the guy coding the game, and you'll hire a publisher to do the publishing. And so I think that if I was going to do this, if I was going to try to make this happen, I would say, where can I be either incredible at distribution or incredible at product? And I want to just like put all of my emphasis on that in order to make this happen. The next one, you need attributes. So a lot of these we made sound simple, but you got to have some attributes, some skill, copywriting, design, the ability, like investment judgment, market analysis. Like you got to be expert on one of these things if you're going to make this happen. And so you got to get to that expert master of your craft level if you're going to do this. The last one, it's all about leverage. So the way you can get a 1 or 2 person company to get to millions, tens of millions, or even some of the examples we gave were hundreds of millions of dollars was leverage. So you need to be using code, build it once and then it runs as software. You need to use media like podcasts or newsletters or whatever, or you need to use capital because you're not going to use labor, right? Like most companies use labor. That's why they have hundreds of people working for them. But if you're going to not have hundreds of people working, you got to use these other forms of leverage. Code, capital, so money, or media are your tools of choice. You got to figure out which of those 3 can I use, and that's how I'm going to do it. And the beauty of it is because of the internet, if you're the best at X, you now get to sell to the whole world. So like we didn't give an example, Miss Excel. So Miss Excel is this girl who goes on TikTok and she in a high energy way dances and teaches you how to use Excel, like Microsoft Excel better. And she's the best in the world at teaching Excel. Turns out the best in the world at teaching Excel is you know how to do the populating of the useful stuff and you can dance. Turns out that's what the best teacher of Excel looks like. And she now gets to teach the entire world Excel. Like the best of anything gets to provide that product, service, or education to everybody. That's the beauty of the internet. And so you need to figure out how to become the best of X and then just make it available to everybody.
And the last thing I was going to say was it's fucking lonely. Like the best times that I have in work is when I'm, whether it's in the trenches and like it's a shitty day or the great day, it's celebrating with coworkers. These jobs are lonely. I'm actually surprised when I hear about this, about like how they're able to push. I push myself because, I have mouths to feed, or I want to be held accountable by these other people, make them proud. It's really hard to push yourself this hard and to think big when you're by yourself. And it's just hard to do this every day alone. So hopefully you have like a good spouse or a significant other or something. This is just challenging.
100% agree. I mean, when I started this, I was like, I want to be a solopreneur. I want to be a solopreneur, or they call it a solo capitalist. I raised a fund and it's like, I want to be a solo capitalist. And I was like, oh, this isn't fun at all to do this by yourself. Yeah. And not only is it not that good to do things by yourself, because a little bit of help can go along with a complimentary person who's good at the things you're not good at. It's really, really useful. But on top of it, it ain't no fun. And like most of life is the journey, not the destination. And you don't want to have the shitty journey for this awesome destination. And so very quickly I was like, yeah, this is a duopreneur. This is me and Ben doing this, or in the fun, it's me and Ramin doing this. And I basically immediately was like, I'm going to do this. Even my e-com business, I gave a chunk of it to a guy who was smarter than me and had done this before and gave me some money. And I was like, why? It's because like I don't want to be reporting into myself and only like have myself as a thought partner to be sparring with on ideas about this. I want to have somebody awesome to do some idea jousting on this. And so I think doing it by yourself is honestly a terrible idea. And you should definitely try to get one other person to do this. I think 2 people is the sweet spot where you get sort of the most autonomy and the least like management headaches, and you still get the most shit done and have a lot of fun along the way.
All right, that's a pod. Whether you're listening on iTunes or Spotify or whatever, go to search My First Million on YouTube and go to the comments on this video and actually let us know what we're going to do. We keep doing these. That's it.
I feel like I can rule the world. I know I can be what I want to. I put my all in it like a day's off. On the road, let's travel, never looking back.
All right, everyone, that's the end of My First Million. However, I've got good news. You see, if you liked this episode,
I feel like I do that because in most places you can't really talk about money. Money's sort of this tacky, taboo thing. You're not supposed to, everybody has to pretend they don't care about money, but we all do, which is weird. You just have to treat it like this silent fart in the room. You have to pretend you didn't care about it, pretend it's not there, but it's there. And this channel, luckily, is different. This is a channel we talk about business, talk about money, talk about mindset, we talk about a bunch of different things that are interesting to us. And really, the only people who click on this channel are people that care about those things. And so it's like when you go to the gym, you can flex and talk about your pecs because the other people there care about that sort of stuff. So it's interesting. So this is the Money Wisdom channel. I think in the next 15 minutes, I don't think this will be long, I'll be able to go through a bunch of the nuggets I call golden nuggets that I've written down in this. The first one, I'll start with this. The rich aren't just lucky. So pretend we took all the money that existed and we redistributed it out. Everybody got the same, let's say $100,000 to start with. 10 years later, I think that most of the rich people would be rich again because wealth building is a skill and it can be learned. for most people, you want to learn the skill, but you don't really know where to start. And I write down these sort of 3 shifts, these big small shifts that you can make. What is a big small shift? So I'll give you a quick story. A man wants to learn golf. So he goes out and he buys some golf clubs and he goes to the driving range, starts hitting the balls. And he goes to go left, go right, some go in the center. He can't really control it. Doesn't know how to do it. He just started. And so he's like, okay, I need to build the skill, but I don't know how, I don't know what I'm doing, to be honest. And so he sees, right next to the driving range, there's a coach teaching a kid. So he walks over, he tells the coach, hey, I'd love to learn. Coach says, happy to work with you. First lesson tomorrow morning. Okay, so he shows up again tomorrow morning. This coach teaches him a few things. And the coach, he's sort of he's maybe 24 years old. He himself just graduated from college. He's not the best in the world. He's just a guy standing next to him, but still it helps. He's hitting it a bit better, but not much. The ball's still going left and right. And the man thinks to himself, hey, this coach sucks. I don't know this crappy. This guy's a kid's coach. I need a real coach. And so he says, you know what? I'm gonna hire the best. Who's the best coach? He goes and finds a professional golfer to be his coach. And this coach gives him some instructions. Within a few minutes, he's hitting the ball straight. It's going great. And so he says, all right, I'm ready to go play. Tomorrow I'm playing full 18 holes of golf. Let's do this. Shows up the next day and he's ready to hit the ball straight again. But today, things are going different. Today, he's slicing left, he's slicing right. And he's getting frustrated. And the worst part, the thing that's frustrating him the most is that the coach's not saying anything. He sort of expects the coach to jump in and fix it, but the coach is just watching. So finally he turns around and says, hey coach, are you gonna do something or are you just gonna stand there? All right, like look at me, I'm way off. I gotta change something. And the coach just smiles. The coach says, you think you're way off, but you're really only 2 millimeters off. He said, coach, no offense, I know you're the expert here, but pretty sure I'm off by more than 2 millimeters. The ball's gone 100 yards into the lake here. And the coach says, yeah, I understand that. The outcome might be far off. But you're only off by 2 millimeters. You just need a 2 millimeter shift. You see, because when your golf club hits the ball, if it's 2 millimeters angled in the wrong direction, it will completely change the trajectory of where a ball is going. Right? A small shift in the angle here is going to take us in a completely different direction. And so he just shows him a couple of tweaks. Watch where you're hitting the ball, look at the face of the club. So he makes the adjustment, takes a swing, nails it. I heard this story first from Tony Robbins, and I don't know if it's real or fake or whatever, but I love the idea because it really rang true to me. Most things in life, even if you're far off in your outcome, you're actually just only a small shift in your approach away because that's what changes your trajectory. And so here's the small 2 millimeter shifts that I think most people need to make. This is after all the money wisdom I collected, they all kind of bucket into these 3 shifts that you can make. Shift number 1, hard work to smart work. Growing up, we're all pretty much told hard work is the key to success. Our teachers tell us this, our parents tell us this, but we gotta ask, is this really true? Because I look outside, I see the lawn guy mowing the lawn and working in the summer heat. He's working hard. Or you go into any restaurant, go to the back of the kitchen, look at the line cooks. Those guys are working hard, they're working crazy hours. It's hot out there, it's difficult. They're on their feet all day. They work, Saturdays and Sundays because the restaurant doesn't stop. They work hard. And you start to think about well, if hard work equals success, then why isn't my janitor driving a Bentley, right? Because what you work on and who you work with is what matters. It matters a lot more than how hard you work. So again, what you work on, thing you actually choose to do, and who you work with will make a far bigger impact in your trajectory than just hard work. In fact, hard work does help, but it's maybe the 5th or 6th most important factor in my opinion. I do think there's sort of a minimum, like you need to work hard enough, but beyond hard enough, there's not really like a maximum you should be chasing. The goal is not to work as hard as you possibly can. Okay, so what should you actually work on, right? I said that's the most important thing. Well, Naval Ravikant says it best. He says you want to find the thing that feels like play to you and work to others. And you should keep dabbling until you find that, because at first you might say, well, what feels like play to me is watching Netflix. Okay, cool, that feels like play to you, but it doesn't look like work to others. And so you have to find the thing that is play to you, work to others. For me, for example, it's business stuff. So I am a nerd. I love reading about, learning about business. I like to go, if a company's going to go public, I'll go read the S1. I want to read all about the inner workings of the business. To most people, they see this 100-page PDF. It's like you're digging through to find the balance sheet or the P&L statement for what? Your boss telling you to do this? No, I actually enjoy doing that. But to others, it would seem like work. And so that's a kind of a sweet spot you want to identify and really lean into those types of moments. Or this podcast. Some people get really nervous about public speaking. It seems like a lot of work. Or, wow, you gotta come up with something, an hour worth of stuff to say every 2 days about business. And don't you feel a lot of pressure? No, this feels like play to me. And so if it feels like work to others, but it feels like play to you, that's the sweet spot. That's what you're looking for. For some people, that's programming. Programming can be, a joy to some people and it's a pain to others. For some people, it's writing. Like I love writing. Other people hate writing. They think writing is still trauma from school. They can't stand writing. For my trainer, it's exercise. After he trains me and 4 other people, he's been in the gym for 6 hours straight. Where does he go when he's done? To the gym. He wants to get his workout in. It's crazy. Like for him, exercise and being in the gym feels like play, whereas to others it would feel exhausting. It feel like work. Hell, Marie Kondo loves cleaning. She made that her thing. She loves cleaning, but that feels like work to me and then the others. So you gotta find that thing. Why does this matter? Because when it feels like play, you'll do it a lot. Not just 9 to 5. You'll do it from 5 to 9 too. You'll just do it all the time. Any available moment you have, your brain will go in that direction because it's something you enjoy doing so much. And because you enjoy doing it, you'll keep doing it. You can do it for a long period of time, even if you're not getting immediate results. Right? There's many things that we will do if we get immediate results. It's the things you're willing to do even without immediate results that lead to these big wins in the end. And you know what they call the guy who practices all the time and never gives up, right? That's somebody who does it all the time and can do it for a long period of time. The best. That's what they call the guy. They call him the best. And the best always gets paid in any field. The best plumber gets paid. The best nanny gets paid. The best whatever you are gets paid. And so you want to find the thing that feels like play to you because it will help you become the best. Shift number 2. So we've gone from hard work to smart work, and that's finding the thing that feels like play to you and work to others. Now shift number 2 is you want to go from being far away from money to hanging out with money. So let's say you want to get a 6-pack. To get a 6-pack, you get abs. You need to start thinking and acting like somebody who already has a 6-pack, right? Like they make certain choices about how they eat. They make certain choices about, if you travel with somebody who's fit, they got in their bags some protein powder, resistance bands. They'll pick a hotel based on the gym. They make decisions you don't make because they have a certain set of priorities and habits that you don't have. So you got to sort of think like a fit person to act like a fit person, then you become a fit person. Same goes for wealth. You got to think like a wealthy person, act like a wealthy person, and then you become a wealthy person. Most people get this wrong. They laugh about this, like, oh, so that's just that guy, rich guys buy Ferrari, so I should go buy a Ferrari. Not really. You want to find their habits, not their extravagances, right? Not their indulgences. You want to find their habits. You want to hang around with them so that you understand what their habits are, the small things they do on a day-to-day basis that make them who they are, and you need to start doing them. So you need to shift your way of thinking to match the type of person that you want to become. All right, so how do you start thinking like a wealthy person? Well, you got to hang out with them. But how do you hang out with them, right? Like, they may not be around you. What if you don't know anybody? So there's 3 ways. The first is peers. So you want to find 5 people with the same dream as you, right? Do you know 5 people who have the same dream as you, who are taking it as seriously as you, or more seriously? You want to find those people. You need to create a group chat. You need to create a weekly dinner. Hell, move into a house together. Do whatever it takes. When I wanted to get good at poker, I literally lived with a bunch of other people who are trying to get good at poker. And all day, we're all playing poker, we're all talking poker over our meals, we're thinking about poker, we're asking each other questions, we're getting inspired by somebody else's success, we're getting bitter about that guy's success, but it makes us work harder. You want to immerse yourself in an immersive environment where you're going to get better. And so get as close to it as you can. Living together is the best. If you can't do living together, get dinner together. Get dinner together, get a group chat together, do whatever it takes. The second one is mentors. So you got your peers, now you want your mentors. This is somebody who's already done it. You can learn from them. The trick here is really simple. What most people do wrong is they go and ask for you to be the mentor. Here's what you actually want to do. You want to find somebody who's already done it. You want to ask them a specific question. Hey, I'm dealing with this situation right now. I need to decide between A and B. Here's what I'm thinking. Could you give me any advice on this decision between A and B? How would you think about this? Then whatever they say, you go take massive action on it. Then you follow up. You say, hey, you told me that thing. Here's what happened. It either really worked or really didn't work. Here's what I'm doing next. You repeat it. You do that 3 times with somebody. They're kind of informally your mentor anyways. You never need to ask them sort of like, be in a relationship with you. It'll just happen naturally by being somebody who asks specific questions. So don't ask them for their time. Ask them for their specific advice. then actually take action on it, and then the key, follow up. If you repeat that, you'll have mentors. Okay, the next way you hang out with money, you got to change your information diet. So if you're already listening to this podcast, watching this video on YouTube, congratulations, you're already doing it. But you need to ask people who have achieved what you want. What do you listen to? What do you follow? What do you read? What are your favorite YouTube channels? My greatest teachers are people I've never met. Just people that I follow from Twitter, books, and podcasts, and YouTube. They made the biggest impact on me. You don't need to actually physically necessarily hang out with everybody for them to make an impact. But like, let's say you listen to this podcast. We release 2, maybe 3 episodes a week. Each episode's about an hour. So you're hearing us for 2 or 3 hours a week. That's more than most people talk to their mom. That's more than most people talk to their friends. That's more than most people talk to anybody. So you bring this conversation into your world is changing the type of conversations that you're having. You start to change conversations, it'll change your thinking, it'll change your actions, you change your results. That's how it goes. So these are the 3 ways that you can start to hang out with wealth. There's one other one I didn't mention here, which is when you hang out with wealth, literally you get around people who've done what you did, it gives your imagination more food. So when you, like, I remember the first time I went to some really rich person's house, and I'm like, oh, he's got a chef, and he's got like, whoever just did that for them. Oh, interesting. Oh, they're saying that they travel once a month to go do this thing, and this charity thing that they do. That sounds really fulfilling. The story sounded awesome. It taught me like how to figure out what to even want and what's possible, what's achievable. Because when you see it, it's a lot more realistic to just think about it or hearing about it. Like, beliefs are good, but an experience is always better. And so just hanging out with people who already have wealth gives you all these like subconscious cues. It makes things feel more realistic. It gives you different things that you dream about. Maybe you don't care about a car. Like for me, I don't care about cars, but maybe I wanted I always thought I wanted courtside seats at an NBA game. Then I saw a rich person with a chef, and I was like, screw the game, I want a chef. That seems awesome, right? Healthy, tasty food that's being made by somebody else. Saves you time. That's unbelievable. So that's that's one other thing about hanging out with money. All right, shift number 3. Going from small swings to fat pitches. I love saying fat pitches. All right, so common mistake most people make. They take small swings, like they take the first good offer that comes their way, the first good job, the first good deal. They start too many projects at once. I've definitely been guilty of that before. They chase shiny objects. So, oh, I'm doing this thing. Oh, there's a new thing. Go over there. You can do anything, but you just can't do everything. This is a hard lesson to learn in life. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. And the beauty of this is you don't have to do everything. So Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest men in the world, one of the best investors in the world, he missed the whole internet wave. Like the last 20 years basically been dominated by the tech industry. He missed it. That's all right. He still ended up doing great. Why? Because he understands Coke and Geico. His fat pitch was companies like that were in his zone of competence, things he understood that he was able to act on. And you can get rich anyway, right? The beauty of it is you only got to get rich one way. You don't have to get everything right. You just got to get one thing right to be rich. Ted Williams, one of the greatest baseball hitters ever. He was famous for waiting for the fat pitch. He would sort of map out the strike zone. He'd say, all right, all these are strikes. But you notice that when it's dead center, I hit 400. But if I try to hit on the edge of the strike zone, I'm only hitting 230. And so what made the difference between Ted, the greatest hitter ever, and the average or even above average hitter was that they would swing at the pitches where they would average 230, whereas he would only swing at the pitches where he averaged 400. Right? That was his attempt to just wait for the fat pitch and only focus on hitting those. And Warren Buffett takes us even further for investing. So he says, unlike baseball, there's no called strikes in investing. You can literally sit there and pass on 50 opportunities straight just waiting for your fat pitch. And somebody asked him, what does the fat pitch look like? Here's what Warren had to say about that. He says, if you look at the stock exchange, it's high. For the last 12 months will be maybe 150% higher than the low. The low is the low part of the stock market. He says, all you have to do is sit there and wait until there's something really attractive that you understand. And you can forget about everything else. That's a wonderful game to play in. There's almost nothing where the game is stacked in your favor, like the stock market. But the problem is, people start listening to everybody on TV or whatever, talking, or they may read the paper or whatever, and they take this advantage that you can wait for something you really like, that you really understand and pounce, and they turn it into a disadvantage. There's no easier game than stocks, but you just have to be sure you don't play it too often. And that's the mistake that people make. They play too often. They swing too many times. They don't wait for the fat pitch, and that's why the returns go down. The first 10 years of your career, you probably don't even know what fat pitch looks like, even if it was hit you in the face. So my advice for most people, the first 10 years, just go work with the smartest, highest energy, most resourceful people you can find. Go into emerging markets or exciting fields and just try to do exciting work with exciting people. Because doing that is what's going to train your gut to actually notice fat pitches. If you're doing that, you're reflecting consistently. You're looking back, you're saying, all right, what did I learn last year? Looking back, what should I have actually been focused on last year? You'll start to learn, oh wow, there was all these opportunities that were coming my way that I actually didn't recognize to be as good of opportunities as they were. And so you got to spend those first 10 years like that to hone your gut, and then after that, you'll be able to notice those fat pitches. Some common things about what is a fat pitch? What does that mean? So like a platform shift. Like when the iPhone first came out, there's an app store. All of a sudden, there was a new computer in everyone's pocket, and nobody had built apps yet. That was a fat pitch waiting to happen. Anybody who jumped on that, like Instagram back then, they were able to do very well. Law changes. Anytime there's a rule or regulatory change, that creates opportunity. If there's new technological breakthrough, like AI right now, what people are doing, building on top of ChatGPT or GPT-4, that's a fat pitch. Market panics. So anytime the market just panics and sells everything, everything's on sale. That's a good opportunity to buy great companies. Another one is working at a generational company early on. So if you saw Facebook in 2004 to 2008, you could go in and be like, look, it doesn't even matter that this is how much I'm going to make off this. You just want to be on that rocket ship. And so there's one of these, 1 or 2 of these every decade, and a big part of them is that's a fat pitch. The other one is when somebody owns something, but they don't realize what it's worth. They have an asset, but they don't really understand it fully, or they don't have the right lens, but you do. And you know what you can do with it. This happens in real estate all the time. Somebody's sitting on a building, oh, it's only rents out for this much. They sell it at a fair price for what it's worth. But another guy comes in and says, I know that I can get a new permit to zone this for multifamily. I can build more units on top. And so he's selling it at what he thinks is a fair price, but to me, it's actually a steal because I have asymmetric information. I think that word asymmetric matters. Asymmetric information is when you know things that others don't. Asymmetric upside is when, let's say you invest in a startup. You invest $100. The most they can lose is your $100. But startups, when they win, they can be 100x, 1,000x returns. That's asymmetric upside. You can win a lot more than you can lose. If you want to look for opportunities where you have either asymmetric information or asymmetric upside as a general rule of thumb for how you invest. Now, of course, the likelihood of success matters, right? Like every startup's not going to 100x upside. So you want to find those where the probability of them working and the upside makes it worth doing. Okay, another part about fat pitches, you got to swing hard. Most people take weak half swings. They make a couple of calls, or they send you one email, they don't follow up, or you even give them an opportunity, they don't follow through. Don't just sit there and just look or just bunt. Right? You got to really swing. And so winners follow up. Winners double down on what's working. Winners get on the next flight out to go meet you in person. And the way I say it is, intensity is the strategy. Most people want the magic strategy, the magic formula. But unfortunately, the hard thing to understand is actually intensity is the strategy. Most of the time, strategy is pretty obvious. It's pretty cut and clear. It's the intensity you take to it that makes a big difference. And so once you find a good strategy, you want to execute it just violently versus trying to wait for the perfect magic formula, perfect magic solution, perfect strategy that doesn't exist. Here's an example of hard swing. So there's a guy, Taylor Offer. I don't know why it's but this is the first one that came to mind. Taylor, he's the founder of a clothing company called Feet now, but back then he had a merch business. I think he was trying to sell socks or something. And it was like, okay, we wanted to double down. So turns out the intensity. He's like, I'm selling merch, I need distribution. What if I had the distribution of some of the most famous Vine and YouTube stars that existed? And the top Vine and YouTube stars at the time were guys like Logan Paul and King Batch and stuff like that. He says, how do I get them to work with me? Right? I don't know these guys. How do I get them to work with me? So he's watching their videos and he notices that all the doors in the background of the videos, like the apartment doors, had the same handle. He's like, 3 of the Viners had the same, they must live in the same building. So he hunts down, he finds the building, moves across the country, moves into the building, and he knows that they like to work out, so he starts just working out twice a day. He's like, this increases my odds of crossing past him. And they do cross paths, he tells them what he's doing, they get to know each other, eventually they become friends, they partner with him, he becomes the first guy to do merch with Logan Paul, sells millions of dollars of merch, right off the bat. He basically leapfrogged where he would have been with lower intensity without being willing to double down. And so I love that story, because it's an example of all the things I mentioned, right? Working smarter, not harder, of moving towards the people you want, being near the people you want versus being far away. And when you see that pitch, double down, swing hard. Winners don't usually have a better strategy, and they do the obvious things with more intensity than you do. And the reality is, you don't even know what max intensity looks like until you see it. You need to go work with people who are real winners just to see, oh, that's how they attack when they see an opportunity or they have a problem, how they go and approach things. You guys kind of say what I would say is like, you think the knob of the volume goes only up to 10, and then you beat somebody, they actually the volume theirs turned up to 15. Your brain, and so those.
Maybe a tutorial to get this pandas code to export it somewhere and also make charts more accessible. Beautiful. Yeah. That could be interesting.
Put my all in it like days off on the road.
All right, we're live here. We have a guest, Jack Smith, one of my best friends in my wedding. An amazing person. I don't even know how to describe you, Jack. But I guess like the top line is you started a company that you sold for like $800 million when you were 29. That's like the headline impressive stuff. But we have you here because you're just like one of the more interesting people I know.
Okay, well, thanks for having me. I also thought kind of an interesting contrast coming after Rob, because like he was describing himself as like the pinnacle of human optimization, right? Like he plans how long it takes him to go to the toilet each day. And I was thinking, I'm making an interesting contrast. So I'm like human procrastination, like the exact opposite of that. So
yeah, but you do optimize stuff. Like Sean, I don't know if you know this, but like Jack, I went to his birthday party and his wife made him a cake and it was in the shape of an Amazon box because he had this like it was like a walk-in closet, but it was basically a room in his home and it was full of Amazon boxes. And you're like, Jack, what is that? And he has this list, this Excel spreadsheet that he keeps, and anything that he buys, ranging from a book bag to baby apparel or baby accessories, or one time he was obsessed with chocolate, he would literally buy 50 versions and test all of them and then rank them on this like attribute system and then and so he has these huge lists of everything that he's tested. And he's done this so much that haven't you been banned from Amazon like multiple times?
yeah, and then also Bonobos had this policy for I don't know if they still have, I think for many years they had a policy where you could return any item even if it was used up to 365 days after. So I had a spreadsheet tracking when I bought everything. Basically, I got a new wardrobe every year because I just sent all my clothes back on 340 days and then just got it all as like credit and just bought an entire new wardrobe every year. So yeah, I got banned from Amazon a few times and Bonobos.
So you and Rob have more in common than you think. He's planning his poops and you're planning your returns in a giant spreadsheet. You have this like Sam said, this kind of like personal wire cutter you create for yourself.
Sure.
Have you always done that, or was that like I got too much time on my hands, I'm gonna come up with a new hobby, like figuring out the best of everything? Were you doing that kind of when you were 21 also?
Well, I didn't have any money when I was 21. I still bought stuff from Amazon. But I think it probably would connect, like Sean, you've talked on the pod about having an inquisitive mindset. I think for me, I like to go deep on something. So as Sam said about chocolate. When I was interested in chocolate, I want to go deep. So I'm like, I bought my own beans, I roasted them in my house. I wanted to learn what's the entire process because I think it's kind of interesting, these crafts that go back centuries. And some people dedicate their whole life, right? Like 50 years, they're an expert chocolatier. And then for me, it's just kind of interesting to have a glimpse into that and keeping that mindset about craft, but also maybe challenging the way things are done sometimes. Because if you've done chocolate for 50 years, you may be like, that's the way it's always been done. And if you come from a fresh angle, you may be like, wait, what if you did it this way or something? I think it's just interesting general to go deep into topics.
I call you, when I describe you to other friends, I said, I think Jack is the most interesting man in the world. And I think there's this great quote, like, to be interesting, you need to be interested. And to me, that's the perfect picture for you. You're the most interesting man in the world because you're interested in the most things at the most depth, in the highest variety. And so I've talked to you about 5 different things, and you've gone down a rabbit hole of each one of them, it turns out. And because of that, you always have like a really interesting point of view. What's been the best find? Like you have this chocolate rabbit hole you went down, and you're like, you may come out with a different conclusion than the experts or the people who've done this for a long time. What's an example where you came to a different conclusion yourself?
Well, it was actually, I was listening back to our last episode, or maybe one of the previous episodes, and it was what we talked about there, where it was like, I just looked, me and my co-founder just researched how ad networks work for a week. And then we were like, all right, we think this is how it works. And Tomas, who runs AngelPad, was like, dude, you're thinking you come to totally different conclusions in a week. I was working at Google for a decade, and the people with decades of experience in this. We just thought from the principle of just very basics. And so the first bit, similar with AppLovin, is we were like, why are these ad networks charging based on how many times someone watches a video? We built a video ad network. We were like, apps, they actually just care about the end action. So they actually only care how many people install their app or how much money these users are going to spend in their app. They don't actually care how many people watch the video. So why is it that the industry charges that way? And so we kind of made a bet and said, we will charge, it doesn't matter how many people watch your video, we'll just only charge you based on how many people install it. It was a bet. Luckily, it worked out. Sometimes you have to kind of make a gamble, right? Like, especially with an ad network, we have no idea if the business will work because the unit economics are out of our hands, right? We don't know if these ad networks, if it's going to work.
Which, by the way, would you like to give a background? So basically, your company was called Bungle. How old were you? 22?
21, 20.
So basically, like the story that you always
Wow.
tell is you had like, you got into an accelerator, an incubator. I think you had one idea, but it wasn't working out. And then you just like mocked up like a PowerPoint. You went, and it was like on a mobile ad network. So basically, you would see an ad in between levels of games. You brought it to developers and they're like, oh yeah, this is way better. If you could actually build this, we're in. And you did that a bunch of times where you got maybe $1 or I think $1 million of commitments of like, yeah, I guess if you build this, we would spend like this much money. And then you took that and you actually hired a developer, Brian, who's now the co-founder of Webflow. And you built that business, and then it like spiraled into this thing where I think you'd only raised 10 or 15 million, maybe 17 million. And within 7 years, I think whatever it was when you sold, you guys were doing $1 million a day in revenue. Is that like
It could be in that region, yeah, maybe. Yeah, about hundreds of millions in revenue.
It was absolutely crazy. And then you sold it for, I forget, what, 800?
Yeah, kind of in that region. I mean, what's interesting as well is, obviously, Sean talks about having worked with Furquan. AppLovin launched about 6 to 12 months after us. So I think there's another example. You don't have to be the first to market. Everyone's jumping on the AI train, right? You're first to market. But actually, you don't have to be the first to market to be the biggest. AppLovin was one of the slower movers. And to give context, they, at their peak, have been multiple times bigger than Bungle. They went public and probably at their peak in the region of 10 billion market cap. Now they're a bit lower market cap.
They're 9 billion now. They were 20 billion at its peak. Something like 25 billion at its peak. What do you think they did? Why did they have kind of a, let's call it 10 to 20x bigger outcome if they started a year later? When you look back, what did you learn from that?
And it was also interesting because one of our investors,
Besides for kind of big a beast.
one of our investors came to us and said like, oh yeah, we're investing in this company. They do like video advertisements inside of mobile apps, etc. Called AppLovin. Like, you're describing our company. What are you talking about? You're investing in? That's what we do. And actually, so they're called Web Investment Network. They invested in, I think they're the only invested in Bungle and AppLovin. They're great guys, but at the time we were like, fuck. So they have massive wins there. One thing we observed is actually AppLovin, Bungle, we thought that like, at the time before Bungle, mobile ads were monetized through like banner ads. Like kind of on the internet, you know, but the internet was crappy banner ads. We were like, well, they obviously suck. So we're going to do video ads, which is 10x better. The difference that AppLovin did is they didn't only do video ads, they did everything. They were like, we don't care what you want to spend money on, we'll just take your money. So they're like, one platform to do banner ads, video ads, everything. And so I think that enabled them to capture a bit more market share. And perhaps the founding team being more technical. Like I'm saying, I'm a crappy engineer. Like I could not build Bungle from scratch. And Sean, listening to your story on one of the more recent episodes, you described Furquan making that dashboard for Adam, that he could just look at apps and post them. We did similar bits, but theirs perhaps more technical. One of our hacks we did is we actually had a team of people, about 10 people in Pakistan. And Pakistan's so cheap, so we had an entire office. And they had one job to, and that's why it was really easy to recruit there. We'd say just play mobile games all day. Where we just got them all on an iPhone and we just play games all day. And whenever you see an ad, write down what the ad was advertising and what ad network was using it. And so they basically built us our lead gen database by playing all the games. So maybe we did it manually, they did it by looking at this SDK source code.
Yeah, that's amazing. You're like, last night someone was asking me, I was at dinner, they're like, have you ever met anyone who created a business and sold it and was wealthy enough and they just retired? And I was like, not really. Basically, everyone I know who's started a company and had some type of success, usually after some amount of time, 6 months or 3 years, they usually get to something. Sometimes it's more intense, sometimes less intense. They usually do something. You're actually the only person I think I know who was incredibly successful at a very young age, so 30 years old or whenever you sold it, and you actually have not ever started another business before. You do a lot of odd stuff. Like, for example, I'll be like, Jack, what are you doing now? What do you got any projects? You're like, yeah, I have like a ton of pen pals in prison, and I like set up this thing where it's this website where inmates can order any book they want to, and I like ask them to create like a book report on it. And I'm like, that's so interesting. Do you think you'll ever get back into business? And is the reason, do you just spend all your days just like seeking out all these interesting topics? Is that what you're doing now?
So I would not say that I'm retired at the moment, because when I think of being retired, I think about having no stress and just like sitting around reading books all day or something like that. You know, actually, I am.
I know I can be what I want to. Put my all in it like days off.
We're live. What's going on?
What up?
How are you?
I'm thriving.
All right, good. So I've been thinking about this conversation you and I had. We talked about outsourcing. And I'm actually going to put a lot of words in your mouth. I'm implying that you said a lot of stuff, which you didn't exactly say. So you're kind of more of a representation. But Rob Dyrdek said something amazing a few pods ago. He said 2 amazing things. One, he goes, I was looking for these $20, $30 million wins, and I would do like 12 of them. He said, he goes, instead I'm actually only going to do 1 or 2 things, and I'm going to hope that they're going to be big. And then he also said he has this thing called Forever Estates. You remember we talked about Forever Estates? So afterwards, he sent me mock-ups of this. And I like Googled the architect and everything, and there was this really cool article that Rob and the architect worked together. So Forever Estates, Rob said, I want to build this home. So basically, he said he had $12 million liquid at the time. $10 million, he went and bought this plot of land. And then he goes, to build the home I want, it's going to cost $30 million. At the time, I didn't have that. And it sounds like maybe he has it now. But he was like, basically, I want to build this home where the Dyrdek family from many generations can meet at this home to discuss family planning and family issues and things like that. And so I'm going to build this home exactly how I want it. We're going to call it Forever Estates because hopefully it lives forever. I found that very inspiring. Did you find that inspiring?
Loved it. Loved it. I love when people take an absurdly long view. And more than anything, I love when people have a vision for their life and what they're doing. When somebody's got a clear and compelling vision for their life, that is like one of the most attractive traits to me. It doesn't even matter if I agree with that vision. It's that they have that vision, and that they agree with that vision is what matters.
I thought it was awesome. And he sent me mock-ups of the home, and I was like, dude, this is so inspiring. So I got all hot bothered about this. It was awesome to me. And so I started thinking about companies that can last a long time. I've been a little bit obsessed with this because with Hampton, things are going well. We're not a success yet, but it's very clear that, like, I always tell our team, physics will allow this to work. There's demand. I've got a good audience for this. We've got a good team. Physics allows us to exist. There's nothing that gets in the way of this. We're already somewhat successful. The only question is, how great will it become? And I'm starting to think, how do you create something that lasts 50 or 100 years, whatever it is? And the word brand is something that I've been thinking about a lot. And I think you and I, as well as our audience, we get in these like short-term thinking, and we use like the A word, the arbitrage word, or we use these certain words that people actually don't think about branding. They don't think about soul. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately. And there's this book that I'm reading where it's called Lessons from the Century Companies Club. So it's like this one woman studied like companies that lasted 100 years, and she's like, what do they all have in common? And I've been thinking a lot about that. And you brought up something. You said you invested in this company Shepherd, which I think is awesome. Actually, I'm starting to use them. I'll give you a plug. Is it Grow Shepherd or Support Shepherd?
Shepherd.com, yeah.
SupportShepherd.com. You talked about that investment in the company, and you're talking about outsourcing. It's basically you hire people in the Philippines, I think also Latin America, and they do a bunch of odd jobs. But you said something like, I want to hire tons of these people. And I started thinking about that. I started thinking, should I do that? And then I realized I shouldn't do that. I actually should do that for some roles. But I had this like offsite, this like Hampton retreat with like a bunch of our employees, and I realized you have to build a real strong company culture, and you have to figure out how you keep employees for a long time. And that's one of the keys to building a brand that can last a long time. And I wanted to hear, how are you? And this, by the way, this topic is not that exciting for anyone who's in survival mode. This topic is more exciting for people who are in like thrive mode, where it's like, I got this thing working.
To be clear, the first phase of the company is just build something that people want and figure out if you can get it to them.
Right.
Don't worry about culture. Don't worry about brand. Don't worry about the forever plan. Don't worry about the 25-year vision. None of it's going to matter if you can't do the first thing. Sam has done the first thing with Hampton. He has proven that he can create something that people actually want and he can sell it to them. So now he's thinking, and now you get what I call progressive ambition. I want to do a whole video on progressive ambition. I'm going to show people. You go back and you watch Mark Zuckerberg's early interviews, and people are like, where does this go from? You're on 8 campuses now. Where are you going to open this up to everybody, high schoolers, everything? He goes,
He's like 50 schools.
Like, our goal is to get to all the major colleges. I'm not sure. Everyone keeps saying, why expand. Some things are cooler when you don't expand. And I don't think we have to open up to everybody. I'm not sure. I mean, we can build something really, really useful for college students. Maybe we should just do that. And then now the guy's like created hot air balloons that give internet to farmers in India so that they can use Facebook. Right? It's like he got progressively more ambitious as he went along. And
which is a crazy story in itself, by the way. Facebook, I think Sarah helped organize something on Facebook. Facebook basically puts these planes over India so any Indian can access internet, because the issue with growth of Facebook is they literally have everyone on the internet, so they have to create more internet for people.
They got to create a bit more TAM. We're TAMing it up right now. Hold on. We have to get more people the internet so they can use our app.
But that's cool that it started where, that's a great phrase, progressive ambition.
Very common for different companies. You can go back. I'm a forensic, I'm an archaeologist. I go back to go study the early origins of these companies, and you find this very, very commonly that they start with a sort of humble ambition. Then as things start to work, they snowball their ambition. They become more and more ambitious as they go, realizing the opportunity is wider and bigger than they had initially planned for, and that one step of success earns the right to go for the next step of success, and that it is okay to ladder up. Because what most people do, they look at them today, they say, well, now they're trying to do A, B, C, and D. So when I start, need to also plan for A, B, C, and D. And it's actually like, no, you actually start with A. You don't actually have to do anything else. Of course, there are exceptions. There's Elon Musk saying we're going to, see the screen here, because it's going to be a lot better. I have little creations, and like, I just feel like we need to go all in on the only podcast featuring 2 trillionaires, the Manifest Cowboys, the men who never age, haven't seen a wrinkle in my life, same body fat as your milk, 2%. Like, that's how we need to go. And then we say, hey, iTunes, play that back. Go back 15 seconds, play that again.
Did you pick up that 2% nonsense? That's beautiful.
Again, off the top, I told you, I'm good early in the morning. We moved our podcast to an early morning recording, and I just have like an extra 10% juice early in the morning where I'm a little crazy.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I can roll out of bed, and these are the thoughts in my head.
Dude, you're like a rapper right now. You keep rhyming.
I saw this hilarious clip of, it's actually my favorite form of marketing, is you take a clip from something else. So you've seen this one where it's a bar, and the whole bar is watching something on a big screen, and it's like the original clip was like from the World Cup, and like the guy scores a goal in the corner.
Something on there, yeah.
You just put whatever on there, right? Like I'll put like the Milk Road like shows up in your inbox, like the email pops up, and then the crowd just goes crazy. And so I saw a version of that somebody did with Joe Rogan. Is Joe Rogan talking to somebody? And he's like, "Have you seen this?" And the guy's like, "No." He's like, "Pull that up." And then they just replace it with this TikTok of this young chubby white boy rapping, and he's really horrible, but it's hilarious. So he's like dancing and rapping at the same time. And Joe's like, "God, how do they do it?" And like they show the reaction, but they splice it together. And I saw one of those, and so that just really made my morning.
I spend so many hours in the morning and at night just scrolling through Instagram and TikTok and just laughing constantly at all these. Young people are so funny now. I don't think when I was younger and like that age doing stuff like this, no one was this funny. Like the amount of funny people, it's like way higher now.
Me and my sister, we sent each other. Maybe she sent me like 25 TikToks a day. I sent back maybe 10. And like the caption on each one isn't like, it's not like, oh, you gotta watch this. Oh, this is really funny. Or that's so true. It's every like 7 lines. She's just like, people are too good. Like how are they so talented? Like because TikTok is the greatest talent show ever created. It's America's Funniest Home Video every hour on the hour, right? It's like it is this giant talent show, and when you watch it, you're like, I am nothing compared to these people. I am the dirt on their shoe. They scrape me off before they walk into their house. Like you feel so dumb. And I just like I don't understand how they come up with these, how they film them, like where the inspiration comes from. It's too good.
It's so good. And the subreddit, The Fighter and the Kid, that you and I like, just like the commenters are so funny. It's like every top comic, it's like one of the best jokes done by a comedian that I like. You know what I mean? Like that's how high caliber it is. And it's almost like the way that I describe it. It's like it doesn't matter if you're into the outdoors or not. When you see a big mountain, you're like, oh wow, that's epic. You know, like you appreciate the epicness. That's how I feel like when I watch TikTok. I'm like, I don't even like this thing that they're talking about, but how on earth did someone come up with this? And it's just that over and over and over again. And I'm in awe. I'm in awe constantly.
Yeah, people talk about how these things are a waste of time. I don't know what their TikTok feed is like. My TikTok feed is incredible. It is the most entertainment per second I've ever experienced in my life. It is funny. It is like insightful. I'll learn stuff all the time, little life hacks, how stuff works. I'll watch a TikTok about like, how a farmer like, farms squash. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that, right? Like I'm just learning stuff that I didn't even know I wanted to know because I would never click the YouTube video. But bro, if I go on YouTube now, it's like, you go to a city and they're like, there's like by the tourist destination, they're like, oh, you want to get on this horse carriage? Go big for a funny picture, and like, it's a romantic date. And you gotta like do this old, slow, uncomfortable thing because I might as well, you gotta do something different. Life's too good now. That's how I feel when I go on YouTube. Like I'm getting back on the horse carriage after I've experienced like an F1 car, and I don't know how YouTube's gonna survive.
Dude, speaking of like this type of stuff, speaking of like entertainment and like doing epic shit, I'm reading this book about this woman named Elspeth Beard. That's an interesting name. And in 1979 or 1980, I think she was 22 years old, and she just like says, "Fuck it, I'm gonna ride my motorcycle around the country, or sorry, around the world, around the globe." So like you like get on a ship and go to America, right across America, get on a ship on the other side, go to whichever continent is on the other side of California.
Is this your pen name?
Dude, I did it across America, which is soft. That's soft. Like, go to McDonald's every 50 miles. She did it like in Iran and shit. You know what I mean? Like there's levels to this game. And she did it in 1979. And so like she was like, couldn't even get maps. But anyway, I was reading it and I was like, I'm such a pussy. Like, why don't we live more? Do we need to live more epic, adventurous lives? She did this thing at age 22, and now she's like 65. She's still giving talks about it and making money because we are all so weak and refuse to feel like these interesting. It's not that hard nowadays to ride a motorcycle across the world. It's not that hard. You take 6 months, you buy a $20,000 BMW, you ain't gonna break, you use your iPhone, it ain't hard. But I just thought it was interesting that she did this thing at age 22. It's kind of like whenever I like see people like whenever I see the Rolling Stones perform, I'm like, this motherfucker's 80 years old and he's playing a song that he wrote when he was 18. That's longevity. That's good. That's kind of what she's doing. So I'm like, amazed that you can do one thing at a young age and live off of it forever. And B, we're soft, man. We gotta do more epic stuff. Like we're just sitting in our houses all the time doing this lame stuff all the time. We gotta be more adventurous, right?
What would you do?
I've always wanted to walk across America, so I would do that. I've already ridden my motorcycle across America. I've driven across America a bunch of times. I think I could drive my motorcycle across.
What was genuinely hard? So not like sounds hard, but what genuinely was hard?
With riding a motorcycle across country,
just in general, other stuff you've done. Anything you've done. What's the actual thing that you've like that's been really hard?
Doing an Ironman, that was like legitimately hard. Like I felt pain. I think it'd be fun like ride a bicycle or something like that across America. And I think that would be genuinely tough, like physically and emotionally tough. I did an Ironman and that was like legitimately hard. I felt like I was in pain for almost the entire time. It sucked.
So Ramon and Sully, they texted me. Ramon was like, guys, we got to do this Ironman in Hawaii next year. I'm signing us up. And like he caught me when I was in that, when I had that billionaire 2% body fat energy, and I just 2 words, all caps, I'm in.
Did you really say that?
He literally
was
was
how to ride a bike.
No, he was typing his speech bubbles, and I just responded. I go, Ramon, say no more. And he stopped typing in the iMessage. Okay, 3 hours pass.
He booked it, didn't it?
3 hours pass. Yeah, he starts sending me like PDF ticket reservations. He starts sending me stuff. I'm like, and I now realize what I have done. And I realize your boy's not as hard as he thinks. He's not as tough as he thinks. He's not as in as he thought he was in. And
you even know how to swim? Have you ever swam before?
I have a 15-foot pool and I can swim in it, but I've never. It's like a 1 mile free, like an ocean freestyle swim, just to start the race. and so I go, and so then I had to backtrack. So I just think back. I go, hey, I've seen the first one, but can't wait for the second one. I go, what? Iron Man, right? That's what we're talking about. The movie. He goes, no, bro, you're not getting out of this. And I go, no, I am. And then so then every day he's been texting me like, hey, here's this cool link to how to train. And I'm like, I'm not opening that link. Because if I open that link, I know what it entails. There's no way I'm gonna do this.
So I was guilty to do this by him. And I trained for 6 months. And I did pretty good. I did all right. And he got last.
And you're very, very fit. And you're saying it's hard. If I trained my hardest for a year, I would not be as fit as you were before you trained for your Ironman. I would be the before photo. And so it doesn't make sense. And so then I just told him, I go, if I don't talk to you anymore, I don't have to do it. And so I just talking to him. And we'll see if this.
Just for the listeners, so they know how stupid. Like it was like the Three Stooges. We went down there and I trained. I was a Division 1 athlete. I trained. I did fine. I was great. But I hired a coach. I did everything the right way. These freaking idiots who we went with, they bought the bike the day before when they were down there. And like the night before, you set your bike up at the place and they leave it there. And Sully and Ramon were like, hey, so how do we use those pedals with that attached to your feet? We bought them. How do we use them? They were like sending it up there. And Sully, this other guy we went with, he did a swim. He did the entire thing in backstroke because he didn't know how to swim with his head underneath the water. And they assigned a kayaker, lifeguard, to him because they were so afraid that he was going to drown. I swear to God. And of all the 9,000 people there, I'm not exaggerating, they got literally last place. Last. It was like 9,000. Yeah, and they were miserable. And the next day they're like, this is sick, bro. You want to do it again? It was the craziest shit on earth. These guys are idiots. They also asked me if I wanted to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro with them. And I was like, no, I'm out. No, I do not want to do that.
The problem is they're like, I don't know, 7 to 10 years older than us. So they're like in a midlife crisis. And we're getting dragged into their midlife fighting against Father Time, thing. And now we are doing these things as well. So
I have a confession. So I'm Sam Parr. I founded The Hustle. Hopefully you know that by now. Maybe you don't. But here's the deal. HubSpot bought my company like 2 years ago. And when they bought us, I actually didn't really know what HubSpot did. And the reason I didn't know what they did is basically because they did everything. And I started tinkering it when they howled at me. And I'm amazed at this platform. It's really, really good. And it works for all types of stuff. And basically transforms customer data into usable insight. What does that really mean? So basically you can figure out really quickly and very easily what the average time it takes to close a sale from your sales team. And then you can figure out how to really fun. That's why I do it from Friday at 5 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Oh, really?
2 hours.
So if they just turned off the money, you do it? Is that fun?
No, I'm doing it because it's fun and I get paid $3,000 an hour.
I've seen amount of money.
Yeah, so both. It's fun money, envelope money. And I've been doing this. And a question that I ask people constantly, and they never really have answers to. And they act like I'm like profound for asking this. This is like table stakes, which is what does success look like in 5 years? Like specifically, like if this is a money thing, like how much money do you want, how much revenue, how many users, whatever. And what I've learned, and then I've worked with some family members, and they're like, want to get their finances in order. And I'm like, all right, well, how much do you spend every month? How much do you want to spend every month? And let's work back for how much income you think you need. And I think the vast majority of people, they don't write shit down. And so I did this one intro call with this guy, and I was like, hey, so here's this app that I use for a long time. It's called My Weekly Budget. You just every time you spend a cent, just write it down and just do it for 4 weeks, and then just look back at how much you spend. And like, oh, I never thought about that. And he messaged me and he goes, I've been writing this down for like 2 weeks. I had no idea I was spending this and that, and this. I've been saving thousands of dollars now that I know. And I do the same thing with weight loss. I say, I want to weigh this much weight, therefore I have to burn. I can only eat 2,100 calories. And I'm just going to write down whatever I eat. Just writing things down, both goals as well as like the things that you're doing, so you kind of like have an idea, is the easiest way to get to where you want to go without really changing a significant amount of your behavior. Have you noticed that?
I have noticed that, yes, and I do that. I think a lot of people think they do that, but let me go into a little more detail on some stuff I do that I think is maybe a little bit different. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple bullet points. Here is how I set goals so that I can actually hit them. And this is coming from some guy who is, frankly, pretty lazy. And, I'm not like you. Like, I'm not like, oh, I need to lose weight. I must have a 500 calorie deficit. Therefore, it is done. I will now track this thing. That always felt like too much for me. But let me tell you what does work for me.
By the way, it's the exact opposite. It's less work to do it that way because then you don't think. You just like do. You just do.
It's a classic thing that somebody who has discipline and willpower says. Like, it's easier to just do it right the first time. Yeah, we know, bro. If we know that that's true. We just don't live like that way. Like, it's okay. You know, I speak from the procrastinator's perspective. All right, so here's some things that I do that do work for me. First is, and you tell me if you do this or not. I set picture goals or movie scene goals, not just written goals. So for example, sometimes it's hard for me to figure out, like, let's say it's a financial goal. Okay, how much money do I want and when? And then I kind of like, I'll pick a number, like, is that too high, is that too low? And I got to make it real in some way. So sometimes what I'll do is, if it's a number goal, I'll do the math to add it up. I'll be like, okay, here's how I want to live. I want to spend this, 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 and this. What does it actually come out to? And I'll go bottoms up to create the goal. Or I'll just simplify it. I'll be like, I don't know, numbers and logic is a little too hard to understand. I'll go on Zillow and I'll just find the picture of the house I want. I'll be like, this is my goal. And I can just look at that picture of that house and it has a whole feeling and a whole like set of assumptions that if I was living in that house, like life is pretty good. That is my motivating goal. Like I'm more motivated by a picture or a little movie scene in my head than I am by just this like kind of written text that it requires my brain to do a bunch of like work to try to like make life out of this.
Like a vision board.
Text.
Yeah, I do it.
Yeah, I guess I just described vision board. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's the first.
Pinterest. Yeah, great idea.
All right,
It's like an Uber, but
let's have one.
Yeah,
Okay, let's keep going. Second thing I do. Floor goals and ceiling goals. So I don't set one goal, I set a range. The floor goal that I'll set for any project is like, all right, at a minimum, this is like the minimum that it would take for it to feel like a win. And so I just would write that down. Like, all right, this is the minimum goal. And what was happening was normally I was writing a goal, then I'd be like, kind of beat myself up, like I'm not ambitious enough. So I need to set a more audacious goal. So I set a bigger goal, bigger goal, bigger goal. And then I would like, inevitably like sort of under deliver on that. And I would have to like, basically I'd either be disappointed because I didn't reach my like super ambitious goal, but still clearly a good thing happened. Or I would have my super ambitious goal and secretly in my head I have like my backup goal that like I wouldn't tell anybody because it wasn't so cool. But like I knew logically that was good. So then I started writing it down. Here's the floor, here's the ceiling. Ceiling is the F yeah. Like what would make me say F yeah, that really worked out. And so like I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example after this. But all right, floor to ceiling goal. That's the next one. Do you do anything like that, like a range?
No, but that's a good idea. I just like put maybe I kind of do. I say, here's what I think will happen. But then I say, in the best case scenario, I think this might happen, but I'm not expecting that.
Right. That's how I started this podcast. I was like, the floor goal is if I just invite a bunch of cool guests on, well, I'll probably like, I do one of these a week, 52 guests. Let's say half of them are cool. Let's say half of those cool people become kind of like buddies or friends or, you know, we like each other. Cool. So I'll make like maybe 12, 15 new friends that are like kind of heavy hitters enough where I can invite them on a podcast. I was like, that's a win. That alone is a win. It's enough to like do this podcast for you know, once a week. And so that was my floor goal. My ceiling goal was, well, what if people actually listen to this? Wouldn't that be sweet if people would, you know, on their commutes and they would listen to this and you know, we have this big audience of people who like, listen and trust us. That would be amazing, right?
Well, I use that methodology for risk taking. So I say, should I quit my job and start this company? Well, the worst case scenario is that it's going to take me 6 months to find a new job. Therefore, I'll have 6 months of savings lined up. And if I just so happen to build a successful company, that's gravy. That's awesome. But I just basically I'm taking the risk that I'm assuming that I'm going to find a new job and have 6 months of savings. Great. That's my baseline. I'm fine with that.
So floor and ceiling, that's the second part. Okay, goals and anti-goals. So I stole this from Andrew Wilkinson, who stole it from somebody else probably. But it's really easy to set a goal and not acknowledge some of the common trappings you could get even if you accomplish your goal. Simple example. In college, my buddy dated this girl. Her dad was like a partner at a consulting firm. And he was a partner. He got to make $1 million, $2 million a year probably. He made it to the top of his like top of that ladder. But also he was, you know, every single week he would fly out Monday through Thursday. He would come back Friday, be there Friday, Saturday, Sunday. He would leave again Sunday night. And he was just gone for like half of her life growing up. And so that's an example of achieving your goal, but maybe hitting an anti-goal as well, which was he probably didn't plan and set out to say, I don't want to see my family. You know, my kid growing up for the first 18 years left, I'm only going to be there half the time. But it just kind of came as a byproduct of trying to hit the goal. So now I set out specific anti-goals. Like, oh yeah, I want to do this podcast, but I don't want it to feel like a bunch of work every week, right? Like I'm not trying to make this my job. I want this to be a fun hobby, right? And so an anti-goal might be all of a sudden I'm drowning in work trying to edit this thing and upload this thumbnail and write the show notes and do all this stuff. That would be an anti-goal. Is just if the afterpod recording took 5 hours a week or 10 hours a week to go to produce it. And so identifying the anti-goal up front, you can make a game plan that solves it. Do you do that?
I do it a little bit differently. I don't call it an anti-goal. No, I say here's the price I'm willing to pay to achieve the thing I want to achieve. So for example, when I said when I'm gonna start this company, The Hustle, I told my wife, I go, when we're dating, I go, just so you know, the business is gonna come first for the next handful of years because then when we get married and have kids, I'll have more time for that. But like right now, business is first, and I'm going to give up vacations. I'm going to give up the price I'm willing to pay is we're just not gonna have that much time together unless if the business gets in the way. Right. Hey, tell me again, who's number one on my priority list? Yeah,
that's right.
Say it again. Say it again. Say it again. Yeah, tell me.
It's Valentine's Day. Who's my date? The Hustle. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
You got it. You understand. I have to confirm. You got to double opt into this shit.
So I always say, here's the thing I'm willing to. This is the price I'm paying. You know what I'm saying? You want to look good? The price you want to look good in the nude. The price you got to pay is you got to eat this crap chicken and like not have fun there. You know, you got to pay a price.
Right. I like that. All right, the next one, in your face daily. So now we're on before. We painted the picture, that's kind of the mood board, the movie scene, the floor and ceiling method, the goal and anti-goal method, and now in your face daily. This is one where I think a lot of people make a mistake. They write down the goal at the moment they're motivated and inspired, and they read that book, they watched that video, you know, they got their pen and paper out, they write it down, and they close the book, and then they just go back on the autopilot for the next like 17 days, and they can't even revisit their goal. So my big thing is I need to see it daily, right? The goal is like the barista. You know, if I'm going to get coffee before work every day, I'm going to see this face. I'm going to see my goals face every single day. And so I will set this up in Slack. I'll just use the remind function. I'll say, remind me every day that my goal this week is for Milk Road to add this many subscribers, or to go viral with one post on Twitter, or to, to chase down that investment that I'm really bullish about and make sure we get in this round. And I will set that reminder so that it pops up every single day. And it's only me who sees that, but now I do that with my team. At the end of every, either daily or weekly, I will repost the goals that we had for the week and just be like, here it is. Make sure you keep this top of mind, or as my next method is the tip of your tongue test, which is if you can't say what you want, if it's not at the tip of your tongue what you're going for, you're not clear enough about it. And like you are not giving yourself the best chance to succeed because you can't articulate your goal at the tip of your tongue. Ben, can I pick on you for a second? Ben, are you there? I know you're at the beach, so I may not have the best audio video.
Hey, I got kicked out of my last spot. I can try.
Okay, try. Ben, with your podcast, How to Take Over the World, what is the goal?
Goal is to be a top 100 podcast overall in Apple Podcast ratings.
Okay, sounds good. Sam, critique that real quick. He's missing one critical element. Do you know what it is?
It'd probably be input.
The input meaning what?
I think for goal setting, it's probably a little bit easier to be input oriented. So like what you're willing to
I'm going to do X.
I'm going to do X, because you can't exactly control the output. So like if people are input oriented, I would also probably say if for podcast, I'd put a download number on it, but I don't know. What do you think?
Right. Or a time box, right? Like by when?
Oh, a time box, right? By when?
Do you have 10 years to do this or 1 year to do this? That's a critical element to a goal. Is to be it should be pass fail. Like it should be easy to figure out did this happen or not. And if you don't have a time box, you can't ever judge it, right?
So do you have your computer open?
Yeah.
Go to my Twitter handle and what's my bio say? I have made this for the past month or two, and it's been working wonderfully, and it's exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, perfect. You go, I own the hustle, told it the HubSpot, I tweeted about this, I did a podcast, and then he said, losing another 5 pounds this month, parentheses August.
Yes, I've always, whatever the goal is, I put it up there in Twitter, so I see it every day. And the thing that you didn't mention that I love doing is I love shaming myself. I love shame. I think shame and rage are the two best fuel to like get something done that people never talk about. I still do things to make Erin Coyne, my 8th grade girlfriend, angry. Like I'm still in my head, I'm like, what's gonna prove her wrong? You know what I mean? Like, how am I gonna win and like prove that she was wrong for breaking up with me? So I think rage is awesome, but I think like shaming yourself or like guilting yourself where you put it publicly, you have to do it. The other thing that I do constantly that works wonderfully is you have to like set appointments or put something on the table. So for example, I have a couple bad tattoos I want to get fixed. And I've been wanting to do it, I've been so lazy. You gotta make the appointment. You make the appointment. It's like, fuck, I can't fail. I already put down money on this thing. Like I have to do this. You know what I mean? And I think that those things really, really help.
Yeah, like my Iron Man competition coming up. But shame and rage, that's a pretty good, I mean, I'm feeling the good name. Shame and rage would have been a great name for this podcast.
Like, shame and rage is such a good feel. I don't know, like people say like, don't be angry. I'm like, no, fuck that anger. I love anger. I love anger. Anger gives me so much goodness. Like I'm still like, what is the phrase? Chips on shoulders, but chips in pockets. I love anger. Anger is such a good, emotion to drive you.
I used to do that. I used to have a thing that I'd taken off this list, which was use your own psychology against you. So it'd be like, oh, if I state publicly what I'm going to do, then I feel the pressure to go ahead and do it. Or like, yeah, if I use kind of insecurity or anger, that could be like a fantastic fuel for accomplishing my goals. But I personally don't do that anymore because it makes the process of doing the thing kind of unpleasant. It is effective for hitting the goal. But
well, that's because you have this really big problem. You've got a huge problem. You know what your problem is? You are emotionally stable and happy. Yeah, that's a really big issue in your life is you're just too emotionally stable. So, you know, like, I'm sorry that your parents were wonderful to you, but that's just the price you have to pay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Sam goes around to his house just like shaving half an inch off every table, just trying to get it to have a little bit of instability in it. He's like, it's better. All the plates to slide, baby.
Yeah, you know, I had the advantage of, you know, having a problematic childhood. You have a disadvantage by having a perfect little life.
All right, I'm gonna finish my goal thing real quick. I got 3 more. All right, last 3, most important 3 are I don't move unless I actually believe that it's going to happen. Yeah. So a lot of people will say, and I would say, Ben, you don't have to come back on, but people will say things like Ben just said, and I would say at least half the time, if they're honest with themselves, I want to be a top 100 podcast in the world by in 12 months. If I say, what do you think are the odds that that's going to happen? They'll be like,
oh my God,
it is hard and it is risky. And they'll sort of like, if it comes down to it, their belief that it's actually going to happen is quite low. And I don't let myself move unless I actually believe that it's going to happen because there's a virtuous and vicious cycle. Belief drives action. If I really believe that some shit's going to work, if I really believe that this person's going to say yes and buy my product, I will pick up the phone immediately and call them. It's only when I don't believe they're going to buy my product that I'm like, well, I'll call them after I finish this PowerPoint. Actually, Friday's not a good day to call because of this. And hold on, let me just go clean my room real quick, because that's, I just want to get that done. I'm going to be in a better headspace. Like, it's your belief that drives the level of action you're going to take. Like, massive belief equals massive action. Massive action equals a good result. And a good result reinforces the belief. This is also what happens to people who have a lack of confidence. They don't believe, therefore they take timid action. Timid action creates shitty results, and that just reinforces to them. They're like, see, I knew it wasn't, like, I kind of knew it wasn't. I knew it wasn't too hard. I knew this wasn't like the odds were against us. And then it just happens again and again. So I don't move until I work myself into a spot where my belief is super high. Last 2, baby goals or giggle steps. So I've got to learn that, like, if you have a big goal, you got to set a baby goal or a giggle step. A giggle step is a step.
Is that a trademark? Giggle step and just a tip? Or you're too?
I know. I met this woman and she created this phrase. She was like, hey, you know that book, Atomic Habits by James Clear? I was like, yeah. She's like, it's all right. I was like, oh, you mean like the best-selling book that's like sold like 3 million copies this year? Like one of the greatest self-help books, in the last decade in terms of sales? She's like, yeah, it's okay. But it's the most important thing. I was like, what is it? She goes, he got it kind of right. That you need to set like a simple first step, but it's even his is way too hard. Like if you want to set a habit to floss your teeth every day, you actually want to start with something so simple, it'll make you giggle because it's so not a goal that it's achievable. You'll actually do it. So she's like, so all you would do if you want to floss your teeth every day is literally put one piece of floss next to your bathroom and like next to your sink and just floss a single tooth and then put it down and walk away.
It's
and
the same chart.
It's like, it'll literally make you laugh. It takes away a lot of the fear and the built up like scariness of going down this endeavor.
Who's this lady?
I hate that I forgot her name now. But
Oof.
yeah, I met her. I think it's Betsy something. I gotta find her last name. I don't remember her last name.
That sounds made up so far.
And it also might not be her first name. And I might be the worst person in the world, but like, it's good. Ben, if you can Google that, pull up her full name. I've only met her twice. Okay, last one is you got to revise up or abort down. So I think what a lot of people do is as things get hard, they start to compromise the goal and they'll start revising it down to the point where it's not even motivating anymore. It's like you sort of took the edge off the goal. And yeah, now you kind of don't fail, but you also don't really succeed. And so my rule is I either revise up, meaning I think this could be even bigger, right? This podcast, we've revised up. It's now bigger than I thought it could be. And so now I've revised up. Okay, it can actually be X millions of listeners every month. Hell, we're already at 1 point something, 1.3, 1.5, something like that million per month. Why can't this be?
By the way, last month we were at 1.7, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So that's bigger than I would have guessed, right? If one was my original goal, I'm revising up now. Or I'll just abort down. I'll say, you know what? This isn't going
to... That's a weird word to use to describe this.
Yeah, well, eject maybe is the better way to say it. I will just eject out of the plane if I feel like, you know what? Now that we have given it everything we've got at this, and we've learned new things, we have new information that tells us that this isn't going to work, rather than compromising down and getting stuck on something we're not even really excited about, if we're no longer excited about it, I'll change the goal completely, or I'll leave the goal aside. I'll just go do something else because the new information has kind of shown me something it's just a check to say, don't just continuously dial it down because it's very tempting to do and it's very easy to slip into mediocrity. So kind of by forcing myself with something harsh, which is, all right, when I just quit this, it's like so harsh that it forces me to like, no, stick with the real goal and find a way to make it happen, or change, based on what your new understanding of reality, change this completely. Don't just like take it down a notch, another notch. Now it's all of a sudden not even that special. So those are my how to hit goals. Those are the things I do to hit goals.
I remember years ago, when we were just we were coming up trying to make it happen, you said that I think $6 million is the number I need to feel financially like secure, or I don't remember what word, like stable, or like I need to never work again, free. Did that goal change as you got older? Were you right or wrong about that goal?
I think I was right, but I was wrong in one key aspect. And actually, I said it on the podcast early on, and our friend Narendra DM'd me. He was like, you're wrong. You're wrong. 6 is not enough for you. And I was like, well, no, I do the math. He's like, it's not enough. Like, first of all, maybe your target return, what you think you're gonna make on that 6, the idea is if you have a certain amount of money invested, what can you, it's gonna earn, it's gonna compound at some rate, 5%, 7% a year, whatever it is. Could you live off of that compound interest rather than, and the principal would never go down. You would never have to withdraw lower than the principal. So you'd be financially free. You don't need new net income coming in because the money you have is working for your money now and you don't have to go work for your money.
And you thought that was 6?
I thought it was 6 because I'd done some calculations. Now I think the number is like, the real number is probably closer to 10 or 11. And the aspirational number is like 25 and up, because then it's like, oh, it's not even close at that point.
So the reason why I'm bringing that up is the interesting thing about goals is I used to think if I achieve this thing, whether it's financial or body or whatever, that like I'm going to be changed. And I realized that pretty much across the board, every goal that I achieve, I'm like, oh, this was not as cool as I thought. I'm going to create a harder one. And at first I was bummed, but now I'm like, oh no, that's not like, because it's just a chase. Like I'm born to hunt. You know what I mean? Like I have to chase a goal, and I have to accept that when I hit my goal, it's not going to change much. It's just going to be a cool benchmark to go to the next one. And so with goal setting lately, or the last couple of years, I've been like, oh, but just know that this isn't going to change anything, but it will be exciting to chase after it. And so that's an interesting thing that I've learned a little bit as I've gotten older with goals.
Yeah,
You know
and typically with financial goals, your lifestyle creeps up. So like before, when I did the, let's say 6 million number, I was like, all right, 6 million, if I earn 5%, if I'm getting 5%, let's say I think the S&P like kind of average, return is 8% or something like that. I was like, okay, let's say I can get 5. What would be, that's 300K a year. Cool. At the time, I think I was spending under 200K a year in my burn. I was like, oh, that's good. And I have like 30% buffer. Well, now I spend nothing more than that. And so like if lifestyle creeps up, it's like, I started to pay for more stuff. I started to buy more things. I started to travel a little bit differently. Started to do all the things that people do. And now
You didn't travel differently. You don't do some travel.
but when I do, I travel a little bit differently. The point is lifestyle creeps up. And so I think that's the thing you have to do if you're not trying to be really disciplined in your lifestyle, which I'm not. I think life is pretty enjoyed and I want to enjoy it to the full extent I know. And so as I learn new things, new ways to enjoy, I want to do those things and not feel limited by money. I think you got to account for that. You got to like over buffer.
Are you looking to buy a house now?
I'm looking at either buying or renting a new house. Yeah.
Dude, renting's so awesome. I've been loving renting, man. Don't buy.
Me too. Yeah.
It's sick.
The only downside of renting is just like sometimes there's not enough inventory for like
that is a big
jump under the burbs. But like if you're patient, you can find it. And right now, the market seems to be, at least where I'm at, California and Bay Area, the market seems to be moving where everything's getting marked down. So everything's down 20, 30%, except for stubborn sellers who haven't realized yet that they need to mark down. And then even those aren't getting offers. And then they're pulling their thing off the market because they're like, okay, it's not selling now. This just looks bad. And they're like switching to, okay, we'll rent this or we'll just stay in it or whatever. Like the market is very quickly turning here to like a buyer's market is what I'm kind of seeing.
All right, I have something interesting to share with you. Have you heard of this company called Woot? W-O-O-T?
Of course, yeah. Woot was like an internet staple, OG staple. It was one of the cool websites where it was like, you go and there was daily deals, like buy this TV for like $22 or something.
So Ethan Brooks at The Hustle kind of told me about it, but I read about it for a bit because the founder interests me. He's this guy named Matt Rutledge, and Woot was like you said, one of the original like daily deal sites, and it was acquired by Amazon. And the story is really interesting. I remember reading this a couple years ago. So Matt Rutledge is this guy from Dallas, and he flies up to Seattle to meet with Bezos, like right when it closes, and they get a Sunday breakfast. And they're like, Rutledge, he's like, Bezos had like a weird energy this whole time, but whatever. I'm sitting in this meal, and I finally just say, so Jeff, why did you buy Woot? And Jeff had just ordered breakfast, and they have the meals in front of them, and he looks down at the meal, and then he looks at Matt, and like 15 seconds passes, and Matt's like, should I just ask him to move on, and we just skip this? And Jeff looks down at his meal again, and then looks back up at Rutledge, and he goes, you see, you're the octopus that I'm having for breakfast right now, because Jeff had just ordered like eggs and octopus for some reason, like a weird ass breakfast. And he goes, when I look at the menu, you're the thing that I just don't understand. Basically, he had never ordered octopus for breakfast before. He's like, this is weird. I'm going to order it. I've never seen it before. I don't get it. I'm going to order it. You're the thing that I've never had, and I must have for breakfast the octopus. And that's why he said he bought this guy's company. And this Rutledge guy was like, dude, you're fucking insane. Like, he didn't think about it my takeaway was Rutledge was
That
like,
is a fake story. That is a fake story. You either just made that up or
no, I read an article.
That is too hilarious to be real.
The exact quote.
incredible.
This is I'm gonna read it verbatim from the article, and this is Matt Rutledge telling the reporter, "You're the octopus that I'm having for breakfast. When I look at the menu, you're the thing that I just don't understand. The thing I've never had. I must have breakfast octopus." And and that was like a 20 seconds pause for him to say that, like just like this fucking weirdo, like Star Trek type of guy. And as you'd expect, as one would expect from what
there have been many great stories on this podcast, many great stories, thousands of great stories, I might say. This was the greatest story I've ever heard on this podcast. First of all, you told it great. I didn't know where you were going with this. The breakfast, the looking down, the looking up, the 15 seconds, and then that line is all-time weirdo. That is so weird. What do you expect?
What do you expect? I did a podcast today with someone, and they asked me about my successful friends, and like, what do they have in common? I was like, well, they all like work hard, they all like are smart, but they're all fucking weird. They're all weird. And like everyone I know who's successful is pretty fucking weird. So
someone do you know that would say that line, by the way?
No one. But that guy's like, Bezos is like the weirdest of the weird.
Maybe Moise,
yeah. Yeah, like I've heard him say like, your business is one Google away from me destroying you. Like he says something like that, but this guy says, I must have the breakfast octopus. But this company, Woo, it's really interesting because it's basically just a daily deal site, whatever. And like Matt is like, he said Amazon ruined it, as you'd expect. And like, but they did all this funny stuff. Like they would sell a daily deal, and then the deals that they didn't sell, they would create this feature called the bag of crap, which is a thing that like users would just buy blindly. And in the FAQs it says like, well, if you don't like it, just list it on eBay, but we don't take refunds. And anyway, he leaves and he starts another thing, and he calls it a mediocre corporation. That's originally what it's called. And the underlying premise is that we're building a store that you don't need to buy anything to have fun. So like their copy is really, really good. And he basically said in an article, he was like, I want everyone's expectations to be incredibly low with this business, so that's why we called it a mediocre corporation. And it's pretty hilarious. And I was reading their copy. So now a mediocre corporation, they basically own like 8 different websites. So and they're all like daily deal sites, and all of them have like $350 to $2 million visits a month. So I bet you it's actually a pretty substantial business. And if you read the copy, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful copy. And I was thinking about this. Basically, as I've sold my company to a big company, I've realized that basically for the longest time, I thought basically the only thing that a startup has that's better than a big company and why a startup can win is like focus. We can focus harder on stuff, and we can move faster. So we can move fast and have more focus. And then I started reading about this guy, and I started thinking about like, the hustle and what made it interesting. And the third thing that I'd add is that basically because there's less bureaucracy, you can have more soul. You can do more funny, interesting stuff. And the reason you can is basically the founder comes up with something and says like, we're just gonna do it. Whereas at a big company, there's like middle management, they're like, I don't want to lose my job, so I'm not taking this risk. I'm not gonna pitch the bag of crap like feature, even though that's hilarious and users love it. I ain't pitching it. I'm not gonna do it. I'll give you a good example. So I love AppSumo. AppSumo was started by my friend Noah Kagan, and Neville Medora was my best friend, and he like helped run it. And it was a daily deal site as well. Listen to this copy. So they ran a deal one time where you could purchase like fonts. I don't know how you buy fonts, but that was the thing. Listen to the opening paragraph from the daily email that he sent out. Neville wrote this. If the names Lusanda Sands Unicode, or Courier New don't mean anything to you, go ahead and close this message. You see, my friend, today we're reaching out to the community of people known as font whores. You know who you are. If your knees go weak when I whisper Garamond, you might be one of them. And I read this. I remember years ago before I met Neville, and I was like, this is beauty. This is beautiful. This turns off the people who want to be turned off, and it gets the people who want it. And I was just like in my head, I'm like, dude, you're writing about having sex with this font. That is so funny. That is awesome. You are making the most boring topic really cool. And you cannot do that at a big company. It's incredibly hard. And it's not hard because the company's bad or good. It's just that's the rules of the game, and it's just like you're playing the game in hard mode if you're trying to like make a big company cute. And I would just think this company Whoop. It's just a perfect example. You should go to some of their websites. They're the Mediocre Corporation. They own Casemates, Mediocrity. That's one of their things. They own this site called meh.com, Side Deal, Morning Save, and it's just deals. And I thought it was interesting, and the copy is hilarious. And I've been thinking about businesses that you can build, which you are building, and I did, where it's just like one or two people can kind of be the tastemakers, and that can scale and be leveraged really nicely, kind of like a daily email. You know what I mean? But as you get bigger, you won't be able to do it all. It's gonna get worse and worse, and I think that's just what's gonna happen.
Yeah, totally. By the way, the domain is mediocre.com, which is an amazing domain to have. This is such a cool story. I love that. And I love that email by Nicholas. Amazing copy. I think it's so true. Personality is, you said soul, I would say personality, because it's what you interact with. It is such a differentiator in life, in all aspects of life, but it also works in business. People go into business assuming you have to play some role. You have to like put on the suit and tie and be some character. And all you're doing is simply blending in with every other suit and tie that exists out there. And so I see this all the time. Founders will try to play the same game as the companies they admire, the big companies, the successful companies. They assume because they're successful that I need to act like them if I too want to be successful. What they forget was that before they were successful, early on, the way they got successful was through having personality, having a point of view, having some edges to them. And those edges, they keep some people away because it's too rough for them. It's not what they wanted. And for other people, they're like, wow, this is the handle I need to grab onto because I love this. And so, before Apple was Apple, they were, a homebrew. They were at the homebrew computer club, right? They had the two advantages you talked about. You said focus. I call it freakishly obsessive. And I use that word specifically because they are obsessed with some topic, whatever it is. It could be Raspberry Pis, it could be blockchain, it could be whatever. They're usually obsessed with something that's not mainstream. It's not that fun to be obsessed with something that's already totally mainstream. There's not much joy in that for this person. And the second is that they're freakishly obsessed, which is not only just an extreme form of obsession, but they're willing to go to a length that other people wouldn't. And they're willing to the topic is usually niche and weird. Fonts is a good example of one. Other things like that. The other part that you mentioned, which is personality, it just gets squashed out of a big company. Because imagine if at the beginning, when you're one or two people, the personality of the company is basically the personality of the founder or founders.
And it's typically like a room of people, they're like one-upping each other. It's like, that's funny. Like, all right, but check this out. What if we even harder? Like, you have that vibe because you're incentivized to do that. You want to grow, you want to do interesting stuff.
Totally.
You're not incentivized once the company gets bigger.
Imagine a room of one person. Okay, it's just whatever that person thinks is normal to them. You get two people, two co-founders. Maybe they're both a little bit weird, and so they riff off each other. It gets going. Now you have the third wheel. Even if that third wheel was totally vanilla, they're a total normal person. They're now outnumbered. So they join the thing. And they're like, all right, I guess that's how we get down here, right? You had a phrase, you need to let your freak flag fly if you're gonna work here. And so whoever came in, you indoctrinated them into your weird culture to do weird shit and do cool shit. And that was normal there. So the third person comes in, even if they're vanilla, all of a sudden they become flavored too. The fourth person comes in, same thing. But at some point, the next, I don't know where it is, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 people, somewhere in that range. I would say between 15 and 50 people. The person who gets hired typically will spend most of their time not with the founders anymore. And so now one vanilla person is spending time with a bunch of other vanilla people, and they're hiring other people who have a greater and greater percentage of vanilla, right? It starts with, they need to be 25, 30%. Okay, we need to be serious and get stuff done around here. Then you start hiring 50% vanilla. And by the time you get 50 or 100 people, you're hiring 100% vanilla people. And those people now, when someone says a weird idea, it's crickets in the room. It's risks come first. It's reasons why not rather than why we would. It's, oh yeah, that has this one extreme strength, but it might have some other extreme weaknesses, so don't take the risk.
That's going to offend certain people, or that's going to cannibalize this thing or that thing, or it's just bullshit excuses.
Right. What will they say? What will they think? And so what will they say?
Well, really what it comes down to, I've got a good gig. I don't want to fuck it up. Let's not rattle this. I don't want to shake this up.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not comfortable shaking it because I don't know that that's what we do here. Because a lot of time has passed. I don't hang out with people that are totally high conviction of being weird. And yeah, I have more to lose than I have to gain by doing this, because when I say this idea, I don't get respect in the room. I get sort of strange glances and nervous laughter, and then somebody tells me why my idea is a bad idea. So I learned to just keep that shit piped down. That my freak flag is now buried at the bottom of my trunk, and it's folded up and it's in its case. And so that's what happens at the end of these companies. Now some companies fight that off. So for example, this is why I think a lot of people like founder-led companies, because they keep that soul. They have one person in the company who has the gravitas. So I think this happened at Tesla and happened at Elon's companies. He is so publicly weird and big thinking and out there and willing to just go with it that he kind of sets the tone. Even if you don't on a day-to-day ever have meetings with Elon or work with him, or you don't get the culture from him inside the company, you get to see what he does on Twitter. So he kind of
did you see his new butthole feature?
Yeah, exactly. And so now if you're at Tesla, you're like, okay, the boss's boss likes that weird shit, and it gets a bunch of play on Twitter, and we've seen 5 things pay off by going overboard. Does a Cybertruck window really need to be bulletproof? No, but Elon would think that's fucking cool, so we're gonna do it. And I know Elon thinks it's gonna be cool because he lets the flag fly on Twitter, and so I see it even though I don't interact with it day to day. So that's one way to scale that personality, is to have such a strong personality and do it on blast. Another version, I remember when I was at
Dude, but he's got to put up with so much shit for that. And it's actually, to be in his position, I've been in this position, and I've weakened out a bunch of times. I'm like, oh, fine, I'll let you get your way this time. You're gonna quit if I don't give it to this. Fine, I'll let you have it this time. And in my head, I'm like, this is the wrong decision, but I'm only agreeing to go with this even though I don't like it, because I don't want them to quit, and I just don't want this headache right now. Whereas he's the type of guy, because he's on the spectrum, he's like, no, I don't pick up on the social cue. We're not doing it. This is fine. I'm okay being uncomfortable here. You know what I'm saying? And that's why I'm inspired by him a little bit.
The belief in himself and also just the lack of self-awareness is important there, right? You can't be like us. You can't be a self-werewolf and just have too much self-awareness. Right? You have to have a little bit of you don't give a fuck in your system in order to do this well. At Twitch, one thing happened. I remember that I was super, super proud to be there, working there at the time. I was I give a lot of shit. I just do sort of the stereotypical startup guy thing where you're startup cool, big company dumb, big company slow, big company boring, big company no risk, big company no innovation, right? It's the startup caveman who's just small startup good, even though small startups failing, no money and no users, no impact, no nothing. It's still in our head. There's something to be really proud of there. But sometimes at these companies, some really cool shit happens. And what I remember one was they released this campaign for Prime Day. So Twitch gets bought by Amazon. Amazon wants all of the Amazon companies to really push Prime Day. It's basically its own Black Friday that they created. Where it's yo, here's an excuse to go spend a bunch of money that you otherwise weren't going to spend. And Prime Day is huge for Amazon. So the memo comes down, Twitch, you need to support Prime Day. And everyone's at Twitch shit, what do we do? And Twitch has a user base that is so easily offended. It's anything Twitch does, any policy it creates, it's hey, we're increasing the safety and for women. It's why? Because women can't defend themselves? It's dude, we're just trying to help. We're not trying to offend anybody every step of the way, but you can sort of do no right. And so people were just dude, what are we going to do? How are we going to promote this Amazon Prime, go buy shit stuff? People are going to think we're just total sellouts. This is not going to be cool. It's not going to go over well. So I don't know who the genius is in this company, but somebody was imagine a TV show where God, everyone's think we're just a sellout. Everything's just a sellout. And you just cue the dream music, sell out. I got it. Twitch sells out, and they made it. They like turned it on its head. And they went self-aware. You know, like it's always like the gang. You know, the gang goes to a Trump rally or whatever. It's like the event was, come watch how hard Twitch will sell out today. And they basically leaned into it completely instead of trying to do it and then sort of like set themselves up to catch a bunch of arrows from fans. The users were like, God, stop trying to promote Prime Day. This is annoying. So, like, this is why I didn't want Amazon to buy Twitch. Like I knew it was going to sell out to this corporation.
I call that the 8 Mile strategy. Have you seen 8 Mile?
Yes, exactly.
Like this one, like the last scene, Eminem's like, yeah, I am white. Yeah, I am poor. Yeah, this guy did have sex with my mom. Yeah, this all happened. And then like he makes it entertaining, and then the other guys are like, oh fuck, I can't make fun of that. Yeah, like, I can't mock that. You just took it away from me. You know what I mean? I'm powerless here. It's the 8 Mile strategy, and I love it.
That's exactly what it is. And so, yeah, they went full swing shady. Basically, what they did was they created a QVC style set, like the cheesiest, salesiest set, and then they invited the big streamers. And it was like they created this, like, this neon 80s logo that was like Twitch sells out, and then people would jog onto the stage and like, today I'm gonna tell you this shitty blender, and they're like, and people found it so entertaining, and it was funny, and it was self-aware, and they just like, and it sold like crazy, like it was so successful. And I don't know who this was. It was somebody in like the creative marketing department. I think I met them at one point, but I was like, hey, you don't know this, but like that was the number one thing I respected, you know, that we did. Like, of all the features we shipped, of all the projects we tried, that was my favorite. It was my number one. I thought that was so well done. Whoever came up with that, you had guts, you had creativity, and you like turned a disadvantage into an advantage. Which is like, for me, that's the highest form of respect. When I see somebody who can take a disadvantage and flip it to an advantage, it's like, you're my person. You're everything that's right about business in my book.
I love that. I'm gonna look that up. I want to see. I want to see the content. I bet it's hilarious.
It's good. It was really well done.
We need to come up with a better way to end the show. If we're gonna come up with a way to start it. Yeah.
Hey, Sean, you never talked about the basketball game.
Oh yeah, you gotta talk about that. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's do it. I gotta be a little vague about it, but yeah, let's do it. You guys saw, I sent you guys the guest list for this thing. I guess I should explain what it is. So I went to a conference.
Smart, yeah.
I went to a conference and it was fun. It was a lot of fun. But I don't know about you, but I have this like feeling before I go to a conference, which is like, there's like a 48-hour period before where I'm like, what are the reasons I could not go to do this? Yeah, what are the reasons I could get out of this? I don't know why that urge comes over me. I think like just the idea in my head of what a conference entails, like a stuffy ballroom, like awkward handshake conversations with people who like, you know, nobody knows each other. And it's just like, just like the worst first day of college all over again, every day in my professional life now. And so I was like, yeah, I just hate that feeling. And I hate conferences, but like there is some magic at conferences that happens. I do like meeting new people. I do like learning new things. And I do like some of the like little side events that happen in the conference that are like not the speaker on the stage and not the like networking mixer where I have to like go barge into it. What are you guys talking about? Oh, you guys known each other 10 years? Cool. Well, I'm trying to, you guys like podcasts? You know, oh, you're really nice. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm just asking if you guys knew where the bathroom was. I was just waiting this whole time to barge in and ask that. I'm gonna go now. See ya. So,
dude, by the way, the best way to approach that I've learned is just saying, hey, I don't know anyone here. Can I join your conversation? I've learned that to be the best. It's the upfront method.
Yeah, exactly. So I just like conferences for that reason. And I was like, all right. And at the same time, I'm like, dude, I miss doing some stuff that was really fun that I just don't make a lot of time for nowadays. I was like, I miss just playing basketball. Just like, dude, I used to play 3 hours a day, just pick up. It was so fun. That was like the best time. Just me and my friends and just playing. You know, we used to meet a bunch of cool people doing that. And so I was talking to Ben, and I was like, not producer Ben, but business partner Ben. I was like, dude, what if, could we get like the magic of a conference combined with the magic of like just playing pickup? Like, is there a way to do this? And he's like, yeah, I got an idea. And so we came up with this idea, which was, we have a friend who trains some of the biggest like NBA stars, and he's been training them for years. And like these are like, you know, all-star Hall of Fame level players. And he's their personal trainer. Like he'll go to their house and work with them every day in the summer and things like that. And we've become friendly with him because he's an entrepreneur. We've got to know him that way and kind of helping each other out with our businesses. And so we were like, yo, there's Alex Basil. We're like, Alex, you know, you train Kyrie Irving, you train Trae Young, you train Carmelo Anthony, you train these guys. Like, dude, what if I just got a bunch of business dorks together who all love basketball? And like, would you just train us like you train them, like a fantasy camp? Like, can we just pretend for a weekend like we're those guys? And he's like, yeah, I'm down. Like, just, you know, pick a weekend as long as I'm free. Like, we'll do it. And I was like, okay. And that's like one side of it. And I was like, all right, so what if we just got like 10, 12 people who were.
You need your anchor though. You need your whale.
And we needed our whale. And I was like, how do I get people to come to this? Like, first of all, I don't know who plays basketball, who doesn't. I was like, who would I want? Who's like number one, a great hang. Number two, loves basketball. And number three, like successful enough in business where if I go invite the next person, the pull is that these other people are coming. Right? That's the key to any great event is these other people are going to be there. The people are the event. That way I don't have to be like great with the food and bev and like the environment. Like, all these logistics I'm not good at. Like the people are the event. As long as people are there to work. And so I won't say who, but we landed one big whale, famous person X, and then the Domino's
world famous, mainstream famous type of person.
Exactly. So mainstream famous type of person. And I was like, okay, cool. And I started getting a couple of friends in, and then I sent you the guest list because you're coming.
Yeah.
And producer Ben is coming. Or like I told you guys to come. I don't know if you guys are or not coming, but you should come. It'll be fun.
What's the date? Did you say the date?
It's next month, or it's 20 days. So it's 20 days from now. But you saw that guest list, dude. It's coming together. There's some pretty awesome people going now. And now it's way bigger than like 10 people. Like we got 20 people. This is like,
how many
this
people
person, their dad owns this NBA team. And this person, they just sold their company for all this money. And then this person, they're the CEO of this public trading company. Like I didn't even know that guy likes to play. You know, like, there's a whole bunch of really interesting people. I think this is going to be dope. And I think this is a way better way. I think this is a hack where I don't have to go to 10 conferences. Like
you should invite Lori, Jet.com.
I should invite him. Yeah, I haven't invited him yet.
That's a good one.
If he owns
a basketball team. Yeah,
I will invite him. But yeah, what do you think about this?
This is awesome. It's gonna be the best. I think it's gonna be really fun. I think you should invite even bigger, more famous people than just like internet dorks. Like Mark would be cool, or I don't know who else. That's actually the hard part is to think about who to invite. But yeah, it's gonna be awesome. I think it's gonna be really fun. I think it's a great idea. I think making yourself the center of these type of things is badass. It's a net win. There's no downside. Are you out of pocket any money?
I haven't even thought about cost yet, but like, yeah, like it'll cost money to do this, but it's not gonna be super crazy. And I think everyone will pitch in. Everyone pitch in. Nobody's trying to make a profit off this. I'm just trying to like cover all the costs and make it dope.
No, I think it's a great idea.
It's
it would be gonna look sick on social. Like it's work related. Let's tell Daddy HubSpot to pay for it.
Hey fellas, quick break between games here. Just like quickly talk to you guys about your CRM needs.
They'll be into it. I think they're trying to
gather around. I have a quick PowerPoint that I'd love to just run you through.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think they would. But no, make them pay for it. If we can record, yeah. We only need to record 1 or 2 things.
We should record each day. We could probably record 2 or 3 like things. We can have like 2 people on at a time, so it's not like.
Dude, and we should get couches and have people playing in the background.
Yeah, David's just running in the background. His audio sucks. It's just so much screaming from that.
The Full Send guys did the Full Send guys. They had a wedding. I think it was like Post Malone's manager or some like famous person was doing a wedding, and they set up a studio off to the side of the reception area, and they were in there recording a podcast for an hour. And like Logan Paul popped in for like 10 minutes, and the other person popped in for like 5 minutes. And it was really cool. It was a great pod. We should do something. And they're like, all right, you guys can go back. Like, I think dessert's at our table. And they like, went back. It was pretty awesome. Yeah, it was a really good. It was like if you explained it to me, I was like, oh, this isn't cool. But I saw them pull it off, and I was like, oh, this is actually really neat. We should totally do that and ask HubSpot to front the bill.
All right, great. All right, done.
All right, well, good idea. That's a pod. That was a good one.
I feel like I can rule the world. I know I can be what I want to. I put my all in it like a day's off. On the road, let's travel, never looking back.
And robust and retentive. And so that's the obvious part, though. So the less obvious part is this idea that I call billboarding. And billboarding is some type of product-led growth. That is my favorite because anyone can do it. You don't have to be a software company. And I'll give you the OG example of billboarding. If I sign up for Hotmail and I send an email, and you know where I'm going with this, which is there's that Hotmail signature
That I didn't even know was possible. And so now as a leader, I have the privilege, and I think a lot of folks who are in leadership positions have this privilege, to bet on people and to invest in them and push them in ways that maybe get them uncomfortable, give them responsibilities, perhaps try something that's never been tried before, and see them thrive and grow. And so for me today, a big part of where I get my energy and passion and my why is not just building great businesses, but creating other leaders who can then go on to thrive and with coaching and guidance and trial and error, do things that maybe they didn't think were possible.
Hi, I'm Jubin, operating partner at Kleiner Perkins, and I'm excited that you're tuning into Grit. The goal of this is not for it to be a highlight reel of how successful my guests are, rather a candid exploration of how hard it is, both personally and professionally, to create, build, and scale world-class organizations. If you're a fan of the show, please subscribe, leave a review, and make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks.
When I'm in the car these days, it's typically with kids, so I feel like my kids have gotten to know you. And your guests, by the way. They're 13, 14, and 18, so I'm not sure,
They're like, oh my God, Jubin again?
I think they listen without me. I'm not sure I've quite gotten there, but
Yesterday, someone on my team was flying from New York to the Bay Area, and he's like, dude, you're not going to believe this. The guy to my left, I just looked at his phone, and he's listening to Grit. And I'm like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah, legit. I would have interrupted and be like, I know that guy.
I told the team, I'm like, hey, just given the way that your hair looks versus my hair, should we do no camera for this one?
There's a lot of product in that hair.
The juxtaposition between you and I feels really stark sitting across the table from me, and I knew it. I was like, oh, man. Well, dude, I appreciate it. Have you been here before?
If I had, it was probably 2 decades ago, and it didn't look like this. This is a beautiful office.
Yeah, it's nice, right? When you were doing your search for the next jobs, did you ever go through the venture thing? Like, did you ever approach a investor or a GP and be like, hey, anything in your portfolio that's interesting or exciting? Or did you go mostly through the network of folks that you've already worked with in your operating past?
Yeah, I've been here in Silicon Valley, Bay Area for over 2 decades now. And through that, you naturally build a lot of great relationships. And so typically when I found my way to Sand Hill Road, it is because I want to really tap somebody for some advice. And oftentimes it's, hey, you know a few things about this company, you've invested in them, or you know the space. And so that's often what finds me coming to Sand Hill Road. And absolutely, I mean, there's a lot of really incredible technology investors here, but I find that the investor has a very unique perspective on a company.
Yeah.
Now, what's fascinating is typically if they're trying to recruit me or anyone, it's a slightly biased perspective. Yeah. So, but I really value kind of the view from.
How do you synthesize through that bias? Because it's true. It's always, I mean, of course, it's like talking about your kid in some respect. Like you're going to say nice things about them.
Yeah.
You're going to kind of have the veneer on.
Introspection for me works really well, which is, look, I want to be told the best possible version of a company's narrative. But I find that oftentimes when you're listening to yourself and your own intuition about the people, the strategy, a company's product, most importantly for me, the purpose and mission, and does that align with what I believe? That's where my truth tends to come. And so sell me. I want to talk to employees. I want to talk to alumni. I want to talk to folks who've invested in the company. I love to talk to the founders when exploring opportunities or thinking to even partner with the company. But at the end of the day, that core essence of what does a company stand for and does it align with what I believe, whether I'm going to work for them, whether I'm going to work with them, it doesn't really matter. But I find that quiet time to myself to reflect on the purpose of an organization. And if that's something that I'm passionate about, my answers typically come from there.
Yeah. One of the things that has really surprised me when I was going through your background was you would go do a startup, then you'd go to a sexy logo like an eBay, then you'd go to another company that I'd never heard of, then you go to Atlassian, right? You become the CMO of Atlassian, then you become the president of DocuSign. The thing that I kept asking myself was, when you make the jump from, let's say, eBay to Spring, or McKinsey to starting Monkey Bin, right? Is any of your identity or ego attached to the job that you're leaving? Meaning, why I don't see these type of jumps very often is because it's often really hard. Once you have the kind of gold-plated logo on your resume, once you have the stamp that you've done it somewhere that's credentialed socially in the Valley, it's difficult to then kind of give all of that up, all of that kind of goodwill that you've been building towards, and it's a cushy job. To then go, maybe it seems to me like you're relatively unaffected by that.
We're touching something very personal. The truth is there has rarely been, probably never, a company or a team that I wanted to leave. This is something that is defining of my journey. Look, you go back to McKinsey. I was there for 3 years. There was a great opportunity for the consulting firm to pay for business school. I come from a very traditional South Asian Indian family where success is defined in very specific ways. And imagine my parents' reaction. They were immigrants in the 70s who came to the US, and it's a story many others will see themselves in, which is very limited resources, had to work really hard. You talk about grit. Immigrant parents are typically the definition of true grit. And I said, hey, listen, Mom and Dad, I was maybe 21, 22 years old. This whole consulting thing in McKinsey and business school, and it felt great. I realized that. I want to start a company, and I don't have any funding. I don't know anybody in San Francisco, but I have a great co-faunder, and I have an aspiration, and I'm going to call it Monkey Bin. Right? You can just imagine the reaction. And the truth is, I didn't want to leave McKinsey because I love the company. I love the learning. I built my startup. We ended up selling the assets. I didn't want to leave that. I went to eBay. I was there for 12 years. I didn't want to leave that. And I believe that the things you do in life and the teams that you work with, if it's easy to leave, then something was wrong. But what pulls me through is a desire to build. And oftentimes when I feel like my time is done building and the organization or the team is better served by somebody else who can come and take it to the next phase, I try to do a lot to create that next opportunity. And this isn't just between companies, but even within organizations, finding ways to have, I call it my side hustle, which is what can I work on that goes beyond just the scope of my day job? And it might turn into something and it might not, but it's this entrepreneurial energy, whether it's in an early stage company or an established company, to constantly be thinking about what's next and how can I create value there? And oftentimes that means letting things go that you don't want to let go of, but it's a way to reinvent yourself.
Yeah. And so how do you know when you're at McKinsey that time's up? How do you know when you're at whatever job that your learning has started to asymptote?
Yeah, that's a hard thing that takes a lot of self-awareness and self-reflection. I believe one sign for me, and everyone's journey is different, is when you start solving the same problems over and over, right? Or a different version of the same problem. And so, a lot of learning comes from getting uncomfortable. And for me, there's a certain, I wouldn't call it anxiety, but a discomfort that comes from getting too comfortable.
Almost like an itchiness.
Yeah, an itchiness, because I know that there's, not that there's more to do, but comfy feels good. But oftentimes when you're on that plateau, you're not growing. And I really believe that, I call it the zone of healthy anxiety. When you jump into something and you feel like you're just in a little bit over your head and you don't know exactly how to solve the problem or exactly what you're going to do, that's a good place to be, because that's where the best learning comes from. And so for me, when I had that intrinsic feeling for months or sometimes even longer, that maybe I've seen this problem before and it's getting a little bit too straightforward and clear as to how to solve it, it's time to get uncomfortable.
Yeah, but you also seemingly are able to separate what the job is and the role from the company, if that makes sense. Meaning, it seems like you're so focused on the learning and really, I don't know, it doesn't seem like you care much about going to a company and starting a company called Monkey Bin and then going to eBay, where you're the CMO of North America at eBay. Life's good. You're probably traveling nice. You're staying at the nice hotels. Everyone panders to you. And at that point, eBay was a great company. Yeah. To then go be the CRO and CMO of Spring. Do you not think about what most people would think about in these decisions? Does that make sense?
I absolutely do think about those things. And it matters. And oftentimes this is that time to really look deep within. Look, I'm fortunate.
Like a big comfortable salary, as an example, right?
Yeah. No, look, we're in Silicon Valley. This is the home of where creative destruction and reinventing yourself is really, at least in the realm of technology, it's really the temple for how to think about learning and reinvention. And frankly, I draw on that energy, and I ask, I call my personal board advisors, many of us have this, which is the 3 to 5 people you look to and turn to say, hey, here's what I'm thinking about, here's what I'm feeling. I would love to get your perspective. And you get a lot of different opinions. In fact, for me, having a good personal board of advisors means spectrum of opinions and knowing that I'm going to hear different points of view from different individuals. But then at the end of the day, it has to come down to a decision that you make, right? One that's very personal. So just to give you an example, I was at eBay for 12 years. I love that company. Never before had I really gotten so deeply connected to a business where you have this intersection of technology, a marketplace, and a community. And I had 7 or 8 different roles over 12 years within eBay. And almost every single one of those positions I created. I mean, it didn't exist. It was a side hustle, and then it became my next thing. And through that journey, you really fall in love with the company's purpose and mission. And so what was that at eBay? It was this belief that it doesn't matter what language you speak, what country you're from, or what your economic status is. Everyone around the world is exactly the same in one regard, which is we want to create a better life for ourselves and for our families, right? This idea of getting access to opportunity. And so if somebody at eBay said, hey, I know you're running marketing, but we'd love for you to go run customer support, or we'd love for you to go figure out problem X, Y, or Z. Wouldn't matter what that was. I was so in love with the company's purpose and mission that I would have done it. And so for me, the why I do things is so important because it unleashes a lot of energy within me. And so when I was thinking about, well, why would I transition? Why would I leave a company that I love so much? And what I saw at eBay, this is in 2015 or so, is for the first time in the company's history, a pretty big departure between the strategy of the company and its purpose and mission. It started to really divide. And that's a very difficult place, I think, for a lot of people to operate. Well, look, eBay was founded on this principle of community and empowering individuals to gain access to a global marketplace. Really invented a lot of the things that other business models have thrived on. The idea of community, global trade, payments, feedback, and trust and safety. 25 years ago, you can imagine sending money to a stranger and getting something in return. Like, we take a little bit of that for granted, but that concept just didn't exist. And what eBay was moving towards is chasing growth through fixed price, new in season retail products, and really moving away from this idea of people-powered commerce. And for me, I really believed in that model. There's a big push, the original model. There's a big push at eBay to bring Macy's and Target and Best Buy and ASOS and these global retailers onto the platform. And look, there's a place for that, but I didn't think at my core that was going to help the company succeed. In fact, what I felt was needed was the company needed to get back to its origins of really supporting sellers and creating access to demand that eBay could uniquely bring. And you see business models like Shopify and Etsy and others who've really built incredible businesses off of that. And I tried to change that. I worked really, really hard to influence some of the decisions that were being made, but I realized that it was probably going to be really challenging. And instead of building, I was sort of optimizing at the edges. Look, I was the CMO of the North America business, talking about $35, $40 billion in transaction volume, $500, $600 million in marketing spend. I mean, it is a machine, right? So even bigger than that today. And that's a hard thing to let go of, to go to a untested, early stage, venture-backed company. But what I saw at Spring was a business model where really it reminded me of the early days of eBay, which is empowering creators and entrepreneurs to build their businesses. And I said earlier, I really love this intersection of people, community, technology, and sort of technology in service of humanity, where a platform can be built to empower people to do great things. That's my thing. I was really get excited about that. And so letting go of eBay was difficult because I didn't want to leave, but I knew that the business was going in a direction that deviated from who I was and what I loved.
Yeah, that makes sense. How long from the first seed of doubt? How long did you live in the gray area in your head? How long were you conflicted for from that first seed?
Yeah, I would say about 4 to 6 months. And Jubin, I'll tell you, there was a moment, and I'll never forget this, which was January 2015. And like many companies that are going through transformation, eBay had to make some tough calls on letting people go. And I was running the marketing organization at the time. And in January 2015, eBay was going through a number of leadership changes. They had just announced the separation of PayPal and eBay. Fantastic team led by John Donahoe and others who were driving that change. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And I was deciding whether I'd be in for the next chapter or not. And in January 2015, there was about a 5 to 7% staff reduction that had to happen at eBay. And of course, that affected hundreds of people in my organization. And as any leader should do, it's important to lead with empathy through those times. And I was in a room in San Jose, on the second floor of one of the buildings that is on the eBay campus. And we had just announced and gone through those changes. And I had to bring the rest of the team together in a room and tell them why I was so passionate and committed about the future of this company. I owed it to them to let them know why we were not only going to survive, but why this company was going to thrive. I stood in front of this room. There's hundreds of people in this room. And I had to communicate to them why I believe so deeply in this company. And it was one of the first times in my life that I felt inauthentic and dishonest. Because on one hand, I love this business so much. And I had to rally those who were left, who were feeling really guilty about the changes that were just made, to commit to the next chapter of this company. And it's a really difficult place, I think, for any leader to say one thing and feel something different. And that was the moment where I realized that I couldn't do this anymore. Because I fundamentally didn't believe in the direction the company was going. And that's really hard when you love a place a lot. And I couldn't even finish that session. And there was Griff, who was the head of our community at the time, kind of the founder of the eBay community, and he was in the front row. And I said, Griff, if you could, tell the room why you believe in this company so much and what we stand for and why you believe we are so positioned to fulfill our purpose. I couldn't finish. I had to have him get up and tell his story because I just felt that disconnect. And that's when I knew it was my time.
can you find purpose in company building beyond the mission of an individual company? Meaning, one of the things that I think a lot about in my role at Kleiner Perkins is we are investing in what aspires to be very high growth companies. And in high growth companies, this beautiful thing happens where if you're growing fast enough, there is more jobs that need to be done than people to do the jobs.
Right.
And so if you take that as true, then you need to put people into responsibilities that they're otherwise not really fit for in a larger company. Let's just say, okay. And so now you're giving people incredible amounts of responsibility. You're creating net new additive jobs at a compounding rate. And I believe that that level of upward mobility through your career is the number one way to change your life.
Absolutely.
And I think I learned that from my parents who immigrated here and used that as their lever or mechanism to change their life. Can you find meaning as a leader of people in creating those types of opportunities, not dissimilar from the opportunities that you had at eBay having 6 or 7 jobs, rather than focusing more myopically, I guess, on the task at hand for that specific company? Does the distinction make sense?
It does. Look, I think as leaders and as individuals, we all trade our time in exchange for something, right? Whether it's money, whether it's notoriety or visibility, oftentimes it is the opportunity to shape something and create something that didn't exist. And I have been the beneficiary of people who have bet on me and saw potential in me for things that I didn't even know I was capable of doing, right? I'll use another eBay example. A leader named Henry Vogel who said, hey, this is going to be your new role at eBay. You're going to help lead the search engine optimization team. That was back in 2004, 2005, where it was a very new concept. And I said, hey, that's great, Henry, but I think you have the wrong guy. I'm not a marketer. And then you have that moment where you realize you're not really being asked. You're being told. It sounds like you're being asked. And I went on to do something and create something with the team where we created a couple $100 million in value within 24 months. And we did the unimaginable because somebody saw in me the potential to solve problems or do something that I didn't even know was possible. And so now as a leader, I have the privilege, and I think a lot of folks who are in leadership positions have this privilege, to bet on people and to invest in them and push them in ways that maybe get them uncomfortable, give them responsibilities, perhaps try something that's never been tried before, and see them thrive and grow. And so for me today, a big part of where I get my energy and passion and my why is not just building great businesses, but creating other leaders who can then go on to thrive and with coaching and guidance and trial and error, do things that maybe they didn't think were possible. I wrote a purpose statement that I even carry around with me, and now it's in my phone and my notes app. I wrote this with the help of a coach 15 years ago, maybe longer, and it hasn't changed. And it has a couple parts, but my purpose is to build meaningful businesses that create hope and opportunity in the world, and to do so with high-performing teams. And the second part of that around high-performing teams is a chance to build not just great individuals and leaders who can do things that maybe they didn't think was possible, but to create an organization or a team for sustainable success and see that thrive. And the great thing is, no two teams are alike. And so there's something really rewarding beyond just what a company sells and what a company creates and what a company does. There's something really rewarding about building a powerful, enduring culture comprised of individuals that reflect an organization's values. And that's what I'm doing at DocuSign. That's what I did at Atlassian. That's what I did at eBay. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I think if you speak to most leaders, I think they'll tell you they find that really rewarding.
Yeah, I think well said. Your personal mission statement, how old were you when you...
I was in my probably late 20s where that, I could have betted, I put it away for a while and I brought it back out.
Was there a catalyst?
Yeah, there was. While I was at eBay, I had the privilege of meeting a fantastic coach through some of my mentors, a guy named Vance Caesar. He's down in Southern California. Vance was maybe in his late 50s or 60s, but when you're in your mid-20s and you meet somebody, who's 40 years your senior, you're like, wow, this is a wise sage. I better listen to everything he says. And he would just ask me these really profound questions, which is, why do you do what you do? Or what creates energy for you? And all of that ultimately led to this moment where I decided it was hard for me to figure out exactly what I wanted to do next, because I had in my mind a very clear sense of linear progression. And I think a lot of folks in their 20s, this is normal, which is you have a blueprint in mind for what a career trajectory looks like. Or oftentimes we look to our left and to our right for our, to our friends or people we graduated with, and we sort of calibrate, how are we doing relative to these folks? And am I working on the right things? And in McKinsey, we used to call this highly anxious overachievers, right? Where you're doing really, really well, you're thriving, yet you're still questioning yourself. And for me, I was in one of those moments where I was like, well, what's the right next move to make? What should I do next? And Vance sort of slowed all that down for me and said, well, think about the why. And for me, that was a really difficult exercise. But once I was able to codify and clarify my why, which is this idea of building meaningful businesses, creating, and then hope and opportunity. And I realized, well, that's what eBay is ultimately about. And I'm in an environment where I get a chance to do things I love with the companies whose purpose and mission I believe in. But the piece around doing this by building high-performing teams is where I realized I get to go create not just a good business, but a culture and an organization that can help navigate that company. Now, once I had kids, I sort of evolved that purpose statement. The second half of that is to serve as a role model for my family by being a great husband, father, and son. And so now what I have is this effectively North Star for me that has two parts, one around my professional life, one around my personal life. And then the more I can do to disintegrate those boundaries between the two, that's where I feel like I really can be who I am and my authentic self.
Growing up when you were a son, where were you raised?
I was raised in Chicago. So my parents came, my father first came to San Francisco from India, quickly moved to Chicago because he was told that that's where you could find a job. And he pursued wanting to save money so that he could save up for graduate school. And he was married at the time. And my mother was still in India. And then within a couple of years, she followed him to Chicago. I think she arrived in winter, right in the middle of winter from India, for the first time traveling internationally. There's these great photos of my parents in the early 70s with these great broad collared shirts and bell bottoms, standing in the snow, in the middle of a cold Chicago winter. Those were some hard times, but they stayed there. And I was born and raised in the Chicago area.
When you were growing up, what was the conversation like for you? Was it spiritual in nature? Because it strikes me that you almost carry the spiritual aura about company building. I cannot explain it. But there's something almost religious about the way that you talk about leadership in companies and all the work that I've been doing.
Oh, that's so fascinating. I would say my mom is always been a very spiritual person. She has incredible, like many moms, this emotional intelligence and energy. And my dad had a lot of hustle, grit, and entrepreneurial edge, always sort of creating and thinking about what's next. And I think a pretty good blend of both.
What did they talk about? What, did they talk to you? Did they talk to each other? Did they talk about work?
We came from very modest means, and I grew up in a very simple suburban lifestyle where my parents always made sure that my brother and I were provided for, but they worked all the time. And my dad was in finance. He ultimately became an entrepreneur and opened retail businesses. My mom worked in a printing factory for decades. And what I saw and observed, I think, was that there's really no substitute for hard work. That's one of the lessons I took away from them. So they would talk a lot about schedules and making sure that between my brother and I, we were getting picked up and dropped off from schools. I was raised a lot in the early years by my neighbors. We lived in a really small community in a suburb of Chicago. Everyone sort of pitched in because if they'd be working late, my mom worked night shifts a lot. My dad did as well. And so I really felt safe, protected, part of a community. And a lot of my lessons and learning came on the weekends when I would go to work with my dad, or just from watching how they built their life in the US and understanding and observing how they did that. And indirectly, I think you
were close to your dad, really close.
I was.
Yeah. When did he pass? Do you mind me asking?
Yeah, he passed in, I think it was 2010. So.
And I'm curious, bringing it back to, that was like mid-eBay for you. During that time, when you think about your personal mission statement, hearing you talk about how it shifted when you had kids, did it shift at that point with your dad as well? Meaning, did you have a newfound perspective on the things that were important, similar to what happened when you had kids?
I think the powerful thing about losing a parent, or even seeing parents go through struggles, at a certain point in life, whether it's financial struggles or health struggles, is we all try to figure out how to do it all. I think in Silicon Valley, this is one of these challenges that we have, is like, how do I build a great company, or how do I build a great career? How do I take care of my family, and how do I do both of these things? And it was probably when my dad had a stroke and later was diagnosed with leukemia. And as I was helping the family navigate that, first I moved him from Chicago to the Bay Area. And that was a really smart decision in retrospect, not knowing that he would fall ill. But he passed away within a year of that move, and that was a really important time. So making those bold decisions to get the family in one place, but balancing that with work, I think I benefit a lot from mentors and leaders at eBay who said, listen, you do what you need to do, right? Like, if you need to take time for your family, then do it, because guess what? Somebody on your team is going to need your help at some point, and you'll be able to pay that favor forward. And so that moment with my father when he fell ill and wasn't doing well, and I had to spend more time with the family, I was fortunate to have a really fantastic team who would lean in and step up, and I didn't have to worry about that. And so that really, I think, reinforced this power of doing as much as you can to integrate your life and being the same person in every dimension of your life. My dad was always really good about that. Like, who he showed up as, the person at work versus with the family and with the kids versus with his friends, he was exactly the same person all throughout. I learned the importance of that at eBay when I had to take time away for the family, whether it was for the kids or for my dad's health, and that's always stayed with me.
Yeah. Do you feel like maybe before that you weren't totally the same? Meaning you are at Monkey Van, you're the co-founder of Monkey Van, and you're trying to play the part of co-founder?
Yeah, you're trying to be an entrepreneur, we're raising money. In fact, I was up and down Sandal Road back in the day. You're too young to remember this, but we would have paper printouts of our business plans, and we would number them, right? Thinking like, if we number them, they're going to be secure, and we'll be able to track back if one weeks. So we raised a lot of our money here around Sandal Road, and you're the persona of an entrepreneur who has hustle and grit, and didn't talk about our personal lives, right? And back in the early days of eBay, I was about being the best marketer or product person or whatever role I was doing. I built a few businesses inside of eBay. It takes a lot of energy to kind of keep those walls up. And we had a couple of just truly remarkable CEOs at eBay who I was able to learn and observe. Meg Whitman was one of them, later John Donahoe. And in fact, John wrote about this.
Now CEO of Nike, John.
John is the CEO of Nike for eBay service now, the Nike, truly a servant leader. And I remember he gave me a copy of a book. And he said, Robert, I think you need to read this. You'll enjoy it. And it was a book called True North by Bill George, who's now, I believe, still a professor at Harvard Business School. And I opened the book, and it was like John's personal copy. It had a signature and autograph from Bill. And I was like, whoa, John, like, I promise I will read this and give it right back to you. He was like, oh, no, just keep it as long as you need to. And it's a fantastic book. In fact, I want to go back and reread it, but there's a chapter in there about John and his leadership style. And he starts with a story. And as soon as I read this, it resonated with me, which is he uses a metaphor of a house. And imagine that every dimension of your life is a different room of this house. So your family life is your family room. Your friends are in the living room or in the garage. You get it, right?
Yeah, in the kitchen, whatever.
Yeah, in the office, in the kitchen, anywhere. If you could tear the walls down across this entire house and bring every wall down, can you be the same person in every room? Right? Can you show up exactly the same in every dimension of your life? And he talked about how this is something that he worked on because it allows him to be a very authentic, real leader. And that's what I've learned, which is like, just be the same person in every dimension of your life. Whether people like it or not, you are who you are. And that for me unleashes a tremendous amount of energy. And I'll be honest, I often find myself coming to DocuSign, wait a second, like, does my team really know me? I need to slow down and go faster and spend time building trust and getting to know each other. Because guess what? There will be plenty of problems to solve, but that foundation of getting to know each other at a very personal, very human level, I think unleashes a huge amount of potential in teams.
Meaning, can you walk, using that home metaphor, can you walk around the different rooms of the house without context switching, without changing some version of what you are into all those different rooms?
Exactly.
I'm curious, when you thought about that metaphor at that time in your life, was there a shining part of the house that obviously stood out for you relative to the others, whether that was son, boss, employee, parent? Was there some part of that room that was, friend, that was very clearly different from the others? Was it work?
Yeah, I think for sure, for work.
Yeah.
Look, I have a pretty rowdy and fun group of friends in my personal life. We celebrate birthdays, bachelor parties, and that's me, bachelor parties these days.
Yeah.
And we let loose a lot. And I was like, at work, I take work very seriously. And I show up as probably somebody who prides myself in having the answer or having an approach to solving problems. And I try to chip away at as much of that as possible. And I think what one happens is it requires some vulnerability, which is, you know what? I did just come back from Vegas. I'm going to share these photos and my stories with people at work because I'm a little sleep deprived this Monday and I want them to know why. And it's going to be a way for me to share my story and for them to share their stories. And I try to do that as much as possible. One, because we spend a lot of time at work, right? And finding ways to build bonds and be vulnerable and just be human, I think is really important. And for me, it's unlocked a lot of great conversations and great relationships. And one of the things I get so excited about is when those relationships transcend any workplace and the relationships that last and stay with you. And so I would say, in my 30s, that's probably something I spent a lot of time focused on is like, just tear those walls down and just be the same person in every aspect of your life. And you'll attract individuals who appreciate and enjoy that. And in some cases, that's not always the outcome, and that's okay.
Yeah. Is there something that you've done independent of kids? Because that's the obvious answer that you're the most proud of.
Oh, that's a great question. I think what I'm most proud of is my ability to reinvent myself in service of others. And so what I mean by that is, we talked earlier about this idea of writing the future that has not been defined yet, or creating and doing what's next, trying things that you haven't done. And I believe that creates for me, a lot of personal energy and a lot of pride and excitement. And then that also affects the folks around you. And so I think for me, having my kids watch me let go of things and start something new because I believe in an idea, coming into an organization and building or rebuilding or reshaping teams so individuals can do their best work and unlock the potential that's often a result of just questionable leadership or poor ways of working. I love going into environments and just tapping into what's possible. And I'm proud of my ability to do that. So rather than kind of look back and all those key moments when that's happened, I get excited about, well, what don't I know about the future? Like, where will I be in 5 years? I don't know, right? But I know that it'll be around creating something that didn't exist or trying something that hasn't been tried before. And there'll be a lot of value that gets unlocked and I think a lot of fun along the way.
What ended up happening at Monkey Bin? Did you sell to eBay?
What was Monkey Bin? So Monkey Bin, my co-founder, Samir Bhatia, who was at Stanford, I met him in Chicago, and we're best friends, we got along. We said, hey, we don't know what we're gonna do, but we're gonna start something together.
You knew it.
We knew, as soon as I met Samir, we knew we were gonna do something together. And I think this is the powerful thing about a lot of co-founders. It's like, hey, I don't know exactly what problem we're gonna solve yet, or maybe we do, but chances are it's gonna change. But this is working. We're vibing. We're getting along. There's a set of shared values. And so I left McKinsey. He left his job in consulting in Chicago. We moved to California. No funding. Shared a one-bedroom apartment in South of Market in the city. Slept on the floor. Didn't have any furniture. And we said we're going to build this business. And so what was it? It was a marketplace for barter and trade. And back in the day, it was for college students who wanted to trade video games and DVDs and music and CDs and movies. And it was a community tied to it. And so eBay came knocking because they were really interested in this alternative format to auctions, which is trading and barter. And we had sort of the challenge in this environment was you go in and you list things you have and you shop for things you want. The chances of a double coincidence of somebody wanting what you have and you having what they want is very low. So we created this technology to build trading circles. It's a community-based trading. Anyway, eBay looked at it, we're in our early 20s, we're like, this is amazing. Like, eBay's going to buy this business. This is great. And if anyone's worked in corp dev, you'll know that you try to do as much as you can to learn about a company without necessarily making any commitments. That probably lasted for like 4 months. Yeah. We were raising money at the time. We're like, guys, don't worry. Like, this is going to be a good outcome. eBay's really interested. eBay didn't buy us. We ended up pivoting the company to be a B2B technology business, and we ended up selling assets to a Japanese customer. But I fell in love with the team at eBay because I got to know them over that period of time. And when I was thinking about what's next, they said, hey, we're trying to do something inside of this company that really hasn't been done, which is opening up the platform to third-party developers. And I got to know the team there. And I joined. It was a manager of platform strategy. And again, for me, it was not about what I was doing as much as it was about this passion I had for technology and people and community and a marketplace business.
And did you not want to start? Did you and Samir not want to go start another one?
We talked about that. Yeah, trust me. So I was enamored with the idea of building something in the context of the birth of commerce online, like global trading, and to be able to get into that sandbox and try things that haven't been done before. And I said, hey, Samir, let me go do this for a year or two, and then I'm coming back to do what you're going to do. He goes, great. I'm going to start another company, and we get to a point where it's going to be so obvious to you that you shouldn't be doing that. You should be working with me. I said, great. And that's what he did. Now, he ended up building his company. I fell in love with what I was doing at eBay. Effectively started building businesses inside of that company and just really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's incredible. You said side hustle. The thing that came to mind with the most preeminent side hustle that I think of you doing, with what you ultimately ended up doing for Samir. Can you tell that story? Do you mind?
No, I'd be happy to. Okay. I'd be happy to. Thank you for asking. Yeah. It's not one I share often, but it's a very personal one. So in maybe 2008 or so, Samir got diagnosed with leukemia, and he had AML, a type of leukemia that in many ways is often treatable. And he called me from India, and he said he wasn't feeling well, so he was getting a checkup and getting some doctor's reports, and he got his blood test back, and the physician in India said, hey, listen, you need to get back to the United States as soon as possible. Now, Samir was an entrepreneur. He's in his early 30s, building a second, or maybe he was in his third technology company at that point, recently married, right, was out of Stanford. A lot of us at that stage in life could see our story in his story. He got to New Jersey, where his wife's family was. He was building his business between India and San Francisco, and he landed and went to see a doctor, and they wouldn't let him leave, and he got admitted to Robert Wood Johnson Hospital because they said that the diagnosis was leukemia. He ended up going to Seattle, where he grew up, at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Care Center, and there's a very clear treatment protocol for leukemia, but it got to a point where they realized that traditional treatments weren't going to work, and he needed to get a bone marrow transplant. Now, we didn't really know what that meant, right? At the time, I was at Berkeley, I was in business school, also at eBay, and we're like, what does this actually mean? And it turns out that there is a national marrow donor program. There's a registry in the United States where you could search and look for a bone marrow donor. And it had at the time close to 8 million people in the registry. We're like, okay, great, now you just have to look for a donor. Well, the problem is, if you're South Asian, the chances, if you're Caucasian, the chances of finding a donor at the time are about 80%. So pretty high, 4 out of 5 get a very close match, and you get a donor, you get your bone.
When Caroline Ellison walked into the Jump and Java coffee shop in Berkeley, she was hoping to get some friendly advice from an old colleague.
I asked her if she wanted to get coffee, and she canceled a few times.
Caroline told this origin story to the FTX podcast years later. In truth, Caroline was in a really raw moment in her life. It was February 2018. She'd been at Jane Street for over a year, but she wasn't happy. On top of that, she was going through a bad breakup. She wrote about some of it on a blog she occasionally posted on under the self-deprecating name Fake Charity Nerd Girl. I don't know what happiness and life satisfaction are, or if they're real things, or if they have anything to do with what people answer to survey questions, or which one, if either, actually matters. Maybe she was hoping Sam could help. But when Sam arrived and sat down across from her, he seemed distant. Maybe distracted.
And I was like, oh, so what are you up to? And he's like, oh, I can't tell you.
After some back and forth, Caroline pulled it out of him.
I was like, okay, don't you don't need to tell me anything you're not comfortable with. If you're like, you have some kind of secret thing going on this side. He's like, no, okay, I'll tell you about it.
Sam had found something incredible, a way to make millions of dollars a day. It was complex and risky, but he was doing what they had both talked about doing, earning a lot of money with the eventual goal of giving it all away. What's more, he was doing it with a bunch of people who believed in the same thing, and he wanted Caroline to join them. It probably sounded like just the kind of thing Caroline was looking for. There was one complication, as Caroline told me in our interview.
It was kind of like very crazy time. Everything was kind of like in chaos.
Caroline would come to realize Sam had big plans for his new company. There was a lot of money to be made, and he wasn't about to let anything or anyone get in his way. From Wondery and Bloomberg, I'm Hannah Miller, and this is Spellcaster, the fall of Sam Bankman-Fried. This is episode 3, deleted from reality. Sam Bankman-Fried sat at his desk, staring at a bank of computer monitors. It was Christmas Day 2017, and Sam's new company was buzzing. Alameda Research looked like some combination of an artist squat and a war room. 20 people were tapping away in front of their 6-screen workstations. Beanbags everywhere. Beyond burgers for sustenance. Low ceilings, fluorescent lights. Millions of dollars in crypto were pinging through their accounts all over the world. And then, all the screens went black.
We were drawing so much power because everyone has 6 monitors and we have these really powerful computers. So we blew a fuse.
Naya Buscow was working in the Berkeley office when the lights went out. At a normal company, someone might have looked for the fuse box or immediately called the landlord, or maybe even gone home and enjoyed Christmas.
We had to keep trading because we couldn't stop trading. So we plugged everything into a different outlet that worked, and we blew that fuse too. So then we ran extension cords to the bathroom and blew that fuse too.
Eventually, she says, they gave up and called the building manager.
The landlord flipped and was kind of screaming about fire risk and blah, 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 which is pretty reasonable to be fair.
It was all down to Sam. He couldn't bear to stop trading.
He cared a lot about this idea that there would be this really good trade that we would miss out on. Risking making a bad trade, that was less than motivating.
Alameda was only a few months old at this point. Sam's efforts to get a new company off the ground had been boosted by his influential co-founder. She was a brown-haired Australian in her 20s who had switched careers from being a pharmacist to running nonprofits, and who shared Sam's interest in effective altruism.
Please welcome Tara McCauley.
Today, I want to talk about the ecosystem of EA and how you can identify allies and find the niche within the community that best suits your skills and expertise and the things that you care about most.
Tara wasn't just any effective altruist. She was the CEO of the Center for Effective Altruism. This is her giving the sales pitch a few years earlier on stage at an EA event.
We are attracted to this community because we share these same core values, the same set of 3 things. So first step is identify our allies. Identify, does this person I'm talking to share these 3 core values? Or which of them do they share? And which of them is sort of, not really their cup of tea? And then think about what role do you play? What role do they play? And how can you cooperate together to create more value?
Luckily, effective altruism was definitely Sam's cup of tea. Together, they convinced some of the wealthiest EA followers to lend tens of millions of dollars. People like Jan Tallinn, the billionaire co-founder of Skype. By the way, Jan told me the loan was his only connection to Alameda and Sam. In his previous job at Jane Street, Sam had been working to make profits based on tiny price differences. Now he was trying to do the same with crypto, where some of the price differences were huge. His first really big trade was in Japan. At the time, the price of a Bitcoin in Japan was higher than the price in the US, way higher. If someone, like Sam, could find a way, they could buy Bitcoin in the US and immediately sell it in Japan for 10% more, over and over again. So each day, the team sat at their computers buying Bitcoins in America and sending them to Japan. By 10 p.m. in Berkeley, Sam and his team would be logged onto their bank in Japan. They put on the song Monster Mash, and then they begin furiously mashing the buttons.
Basically like clicking a button over and over.
Turning their newly made yen profits back into dollars as fast as they could. As Sam later told the Blockworks Empire podcast.
We saw software doing all broke out on our computers, just like, clicking through. It was like a minute-long prompt that you had to click through, like mini screens that loaded very slowly. And eventually, like when we were like 1 minute left, we were like, all right, guys, time.
Meanwhile, in Japan, Sam had a contact at the bank, a grad student who was standing in line and keeping his spot at the teller's window. His job was to transfer the converted dollars back to the US at the last moment before the bank shut. 1 minute before closing time, Sam would pick up his phone and call him. Sam was working round the clock. He would stare, weary-eyed, at a series of digits on his screen. Read them out correctly, and he'd make money. Screw them up, and the money's stuck in yen. And Sam doesn't have the dollars to do the whole trade again the next day.
There's like reference numbers Q, 7, T, like, no, it's a G, not a T. I'm like, no, you gotta cross that out as a G, not a T. And then eventually, hopefully, they submitted before the cutoff, and you lost 24 hours. That was the trade.
It was high intensity, high reward work, and very complicated, which was why not everyone was doing it. But Sam made it work. On the first day, he managed to move $200. And at the peak, he said he was moving $10 to $15 million a day. It had been hard even getting a Japanese bank account. Sam boasted about this on one of his first media tours. He told the Blockworks Empire podcast how he had tried to explain to Japanese banks what he was going to use the account for.
And then you're like, all right, can we send this to the US? Like, what are we doing with it? And you're like, it's crypto trading. They're like, can you repeat that?
Sam told them he would be wiring millions of dollars from Tokyo to the US every day in order to buy Bitcoin in the US and sell it there. The Japanese bank couldn't compute.
This is sketchy fucking that I've ever seen, right? Like, in order to get a banking license, you have to take tests and if someone does exactly this, what are they doing? Circle money laundering.
Sam sounded proud of how close to the edge they were. That was a running joke in the office. Now I remember the Slack thread that Alameda employees used to store information for the company's accounts on crypto exchanges. It was called identity theft. Sam and Alameda were making money, but it came at a cost.
It was very stressful. We wanted 24/7 trading coverage. So people had changing shifts, night shifts some days and day shifts other days. People were working very, very long hours.
Money was moving in and out of Alameda accounts so quickly that nobody knew which trades were profitable and which weren't. Nobody made sure that the money actually arrived where it was supposed to go.
We didn't have accurate data about all of our transfers or our balances even.
While the Japan trade was working, none of this mattered. But then crypto markets crashed and mistakes became hard to ignore. Mistakes like Sam's decision to bet all of one donor's money on the price of the cryptocurrency Ethereum.
Which went very poorly and lost us millions of dollars.
Or the massive transfer of another crypto token that nobody bothered to check on. By the time they realized that the transfer hadn't made it to the correct destination, the price of the token had collapsed.
So we lost, I want to say $3 million, maybe $4 million.
Like many of her colleagues, Naya had also joined because of her interest in effective altruism.
When we made tens of millions on this Japan arm, we were all experiencing that as, that's like tens of millions that can go to effective charities. That's really motivating. Once we started losing money, especially losing money for foolish reasons, that motivation became a lot more difficult to sustain.
Sam showed no signs of
all in about 10 minutes or less. But first, let's hit it up with the little news items. Ben, what do you got for us?
Okay, today the ChatGPT subreddit now has 2,020,000 members, so we crossed the 2 million person barrier. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman says he is not interested in taking the AI startup public because he wants to maintain full control over the technology as it becomes more powerful. We'll see if that changes in the future. I'm guessing dollars are going to talk pretty strongly. Google Bard is now 30% better at math. This is according to Google, so take that with a grain of salt. I don't know how they're measuring that, but I guess it's 30% more accurate. We'll see.
And to be fair, too, the only reason we mentioned Bard is because I think they're trying to keep it relevant because ChatGPT is still just so much superior to Bard, at least in what we're seeing in that regard, even though Bard is connected to the internet, but ChatGPT-4 is as well.
Yep.
So,
all right, here we go, Ryan. Why don't we get into the main topics today? Hit us off with the first one.
Yes. So Meta has developed an open source AI model called MusicGen, which can generate new pieces of music based on text prompts and can be aligned with existing melodies. Now, the model based on a transformer architecture predicts the next section in a music piece, similar to how a language model predicts the next characters in a sentence. Now, the audio data is decomposed into smaller components using Meta's encodec, audio tokenizer, making MusicGen fast and efficient. The researchers trained the model on 20,000 hours of licensed music, including a data set of 10,000 high-quality music tracks and data from Shutterstock and Pond 5. Now, MusicGen it performs well in terms of objective and subjective metrics and is considered comparable to Google's Music LM. Now, Meta has released code and models as open source on GitHub, allowing for research and commercial use. Now, in addition to the efficiency and speed, MusicGen stands out for its ability to handle both text and music prompts. The text sets the basic style, which is then matched with the melody in the audio file. However, precise control over the orientation to the melody is limited, and the text prompt serves as a rough guideline rather than an exact reflection in the output, which is what we've been seeing a lot with AI. Now, the researchers tested out different versions of the model and found that the larger models produced high-quality audio, but the 1.5 billion parameter model was rated the best by humans compared to other music models such as RiFusion, Mosaic, and Music LM, as well as Noise to Music. Now, MusicGen performs better in terms of how well the music matches the lyrics and the plausibility of the composition. Now, Meta's open source approach and the availability of a demo on Hugging Face provide accessibility to the MusicGen model for further exploration and use. And we'll link, there's a video about all of this on Twitter and LinkedIn, just a quick minute of how it works. It's definitely worth a listen, and Meta's really coming out here with some pretty cool stuff. So I was pretty impressed with at least the demo versions of it.
Yeah, and we'll put that on our website, the chatgptreport.com. All right, our next item here, Carbon Health is introducing an AI feature. Carbon Health has introduced a feature called hands-free charting, powered by artificial intelligence, and it's in its exclusive electronic health records or EHR platform across all of its clinics and providers. This makes Carbon Health the first to implement AI-assisted charting on a large scale within its EHR system. Hands-free charting begins with obtaining patient consent at the start of the visit. They're basically saying, can we record you? Once consent is granted, providers can simply press the record button in the Carbon Health EHR. The audio is captured and then transcribed using AWS Transcribe Medical. The resulting transcript is combined with other patient information such as the demographics, vital signs, lab results, and manually added notes by the provider. Within minutes, a visit summary is automatically generated in the patient's chart, allowing for providers to review, adjust, and finalize it as a primary decision maker, all within the EHR. By eliminating the screen barrier, doctors can allocate more time to patient care rather than typing, which I think if we've all been to the doctor and you've noticed, like when they're talking to you, asking questions, they're always focused on their screen, usually not facing you. So this is kind of a way that they can just interact with you, and then the transcription is then cleaned up with like GPT-4, and it's actually cleaned up, and it's it's given more relevant information. So it's not just like I'm here stumbling over my words. If I'm stumbling over my words, it's going to clean that up in the actual summary there. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Now,
and to be fair too, I mean, then the doctor doesn't have to multitask either. You know what I mean?
right. So here's kind of some of the initial reactions to it. The initial data indicates immediate advantages for a provider. On efficiency, on average, the system generated a complete medical chart in less than 4 minutes compared to 16 minutes on average doing manual charting. So we're, 25% of the time there. Accuracy, 88% of the AI-generated text is accepted by the providers without even requiring edit. So that's a pretty high percentage there. Obviously, it all has to be kind of approved by the provider. And completeness, the generated charts are 2.5 times more detailed than those created through manual entry. I don't know exactly how they're measuring that, but obviously there's some parameter there. And I think part of the reason is that if you're typing, you're going to reach a point where either you can't type fast enough or you don't.
Of MethBot, an army of hundreds of thousands of bots programmatically viewing thousands of advertisements on thousands of made-up websites in order to siphon away millions of dollars worth of ad revenue. The scheme was picked up by a security firm and then the FBI, earning a hefty jail sentence for one Russian national, Alexander Zhukov, and some of his colleagues. But even the giant MethBot scam was just a drop in the ocean, that is, ad fraud. Putting Zhukov in jail made hardly any difference at all because of how many other people just like him are still out there today. What makes ad fraud so successful and so prevalent, and why can't we stop it? The answer isn't technical at all. It's not hard to understand, but it's a harsh reality that many people are simply not willing to face. Cyber criminals use all sorts of methods to defraud advertisers, but often, in the end, it's quite simple. Individuals and other low-level actors can use stacking, placing multiple ads on top of one another, or pixel stuffing, squeezing an ad into even just one pixel on a computer screen. In each case, you're effectively registering an ad without actually having to show it to the user. One method of maliciousness we're all familiar with is pop-up windows. Websites can rack in profits while annoying you and providing no value to the advertiser, since you're almost certainly just going to close the window as soon as you notice it. If you want to defraud major corporations, you figure the bar is probably going to be a little higher. MethBot created a ghost army of fake users fitted with their own locations, browser histories, and demographic profiles, who seem to be browsing and interacting with spoofed web pages. But you'd be surprised at how little you can do to get away with a whole lot in this business. In 2017, BuzzFeed broke a story about a scheme affecting over 100 of America's biggest brands: Disney, Chase, Citi, Geico, Ford, Nissan, Hershey's, and on and on. Researchers estimated the scheme could have been costing those companies up to $20 million a year, though remarkably, all of this was happening on just 40 fraudulent websites run.
Welcome everyone to How to Build and Succeed as a Technical Founder for this Startup School Talk. Quick intro, I'm Diana Hu. I'm currently a group partner at YC. And previously, I was a co-founder and CTO for Azure Reality, which was a startup building augmented reality SDK for game developers. And we eventually had an exit and sold to Niantic, where I was the director of engineering and heading up all of the AR platform there. So I know a few things about building something from was just an idea to then a prototype to launching an MVP, which is like a bit duct tapey, to then scaling it and getting to product market fit and scaling systems to millions of users. So what are we going to cover in this talk is 3 stages. First is what is the role of the technical founder and who are they? Number 2, how do you build in each of the different stages where all of you are in startup school? Ideating, which is just an idea, you're just getting started. Building an MVP once you got some validation and getting it to launch, and then launch, where you want to iterate towards product market fit. And then I'll have a small section on how the role of the technical founder evolves post product market fit. I won't cover it too much because a lot of you in startup school are mostly in this earlier stage. And I'm excited to give this talk because I compiled it from many conversations and chats with many YC technical founders, like from Algolia, Segment, Optimally, Way Up. So I'm excited for all of their inputs and examples in here. All right, the technical founder. Sometimes I hear non-technical founders say, I need somebody to build my app. So that isn't going to cut it. A technical founder is a partner in this whole journey of a startup, and it requires really intense level of commitment. And you're in just a dev. What does a technical founder do? They lead a lot of the building of the product, of course, and also talking with users. And sometimes I get the question of who is the CEO or CTO for a technical founder? And this is a nuanced answer. It really depends on the type of product, the industry you're in, the complete scale composition of the team to figure out who the CEO or CTO is. And I've seen technical founders be a CEO, CTO, or various other roles. And what does the role of the technical founder look like in the early stages? It looks a lot like being a lead developer. Like if you've been a lead developer at a company, you were in charge of putting a project together, building it, and getting it out to the finish line. Or if you're contributing to an open source project and you're the main developer, you make all the tech choices. But there's some key differences from being a lead developer. You got to do all the tech things. Like
I'm Ashley Lorenz with Microsoft Research. I've spent the last 20 years working in AI and machine learning, but I've never felt more fortunate to work in the field than at this moment. The development of increasingly powerful, large-scale models like GPT-4 is accelerating the advancement of AI. These models are exhibiting surprising new abilities like reasoning, problem solving, and translation across languages and domains. In this podcast series, I'll share conversations with fellow researchers about our impressions of GPT-4, the work we're doing to understand its capabilities and limitations, and ultimately, how innovations like these can have the greatest benefit for humanity. Welcome to AI Frontiers. Today, we're talking with Emery Kitchiman and Amit Sharma, 2 Microsoft researchers who have been studying causal reasoning with AI for many years. Determining cause and effect relationships is critically important across many domains, such as law, medicine, and the advancement of science itself. Emery and Amit recently published a paper that explores how large language models can advance the research and application of causal reasoning with AI. Emery joins us from our lab in Redmond, Washington, and Amit is on the line from Microsoft Research India in Bangalore. Emery, Amit, let's jump right in. I'm so excited to speak with you both about causal reasoning. And this is such a timely conversation because we're living through the rise of generative pre-trained models, specifically large language models. And when I've engaged with GPT-4 in dialogue, depending on what I ask, it can appear to be doing something resembling causal reasoning. And as a machine learning person myself, I have to say, this is not something that I'd expected to see from a neural network that works based on analyzing and generating statistical patterns. This is something that before this time last year, I thought of as a uniquely human skill, as I think maybe many others have as well. Now, both of you do this for a living. You study causal reasoning for a living. And so where I'd like to start is with your first reactions to GPT-4, your first contact. What did you find surprising, and how did you feel as a researcher in this area? I want to go to Emery first on this.
Sure. Well, I went through a process. Right now I am surprised how much I'm depending on functionality from GPT-4 and how much I expect it to work. And yet I also don't quite believe that it can do the things that it's doing. It's really a weird mind space to be in. I think the moment when I was a bit astounded by like what might be possible was actually before I got my hands on GPT-4 directly. I've been hearing that people were very impressed with what I was doing. But the thing that made me reconsider my preconceptions was actually some of the academic research looking at how transformer models and architectures could actually represent Turing machines, Turing complete computational machines. And once I saw that the transformer architecture could represent that type of program, that type of thing, then I figured, well, all bets are off. We don't know whether it's learning this or not, but if it can represent it now, there really is a chance that it might be learning that. And so we have to really keep an open mind. The second moment when I changed my mind again about what GPT-4 might be doing. So I'll give a little background. So once I saw some of the work that we'll talk about here coming to play, where we're seeing GPT do some sorts of very interesting causal related tasks, I was like, okay, this is great. We have our causal processes. We're just going to run through them, and this fits in. Someone come with their causal question. We'll run through and run our causal analysis. And I thought that this all makes sense. We can do things that we wanted to do for so long. And it was actually reading some of the vignettes in Peter Lee's book, where he was quizzing GPT-4 to diagnose a patient based on electronic health records, explain counterfactual scenarios, think through why someone might have made a misdiagnosis. And here, all of a sudden, I realized our conceptualizations of causal tasks that we've worked on in the academic fields are kind of boxes where we say we're doing effect inference, or we're doing attribution, or we're doing discovery. These like very well circumscribed tasks are not enough. They're not flexible enough. Once you have this natural language interface, you can ask so many more things, so many more interesting questions, and we need to make sure that we can correctly answer those questions. And this GPT-4 is basically a bridge to expressing and meeting people where they want to be. That really opened my eyes the second time.
Thanks, Emery. First impressions. My experience was back in December. I think it was when a lot of people were talking about ChatGPT. And me thinking that I work in causality, I was quite smart. Right? I knew that causality requires you to have interventional data. Language models are only built on some observations. So I was quite happy to think that I would be disrupted. Right? But it was just that every day I would see, perhaps on Twitter, people expressing new things that ChatGPT can do. And one day I thought, okay, let me just try it. Right? So the first query I thought was an easy query for GPT models. I just asked it, does smoking cause lung cancer? Right? And I was surprised when it gave the right answer. But then I thought, maybe, this is just too common. Let me ask the opposite. Does lung cancer cause smoking? It gave the right answer, no. And then I was really struck. And I thought, what else can I test? Right? And then I saw all the causal relationships that we typically talk about in our field. And I started doing them one by one. And what I found was that the accuracy was just astounding. And it was not just the accuracy, but also the explanation that it gives would almost make you believe that as if it is a causal agent, as if it is doing something causal. So for me, I think those few days in December with sort of partly sleepless nights on what exactly is going on with these models and what I'm going to do as a researcher now, I think that was my initial foray into this. And I think the logical next step was then just to study it more deeply.
And stemming from both of your reactions, you began collaborating on a paper which you've recently released called Causal Reasoning for Large Language Models. And I've had the pleasure of spending some time with that over these last few days and a week here. And one of the things you do in the paper is you provide what I think of as a helpful overview of the different kinds of causality. And so, Emery, I want to go back to you. What is causality, and how can we think about the space of different kinds of causal reasoning?
Causality, it's the study of cause and effect relationships, of the mechanisms that drive what we see happening in the world around us. Why do things happen? What made something happen? And this is a study that's spread out across so many disciplines: computer science, economics, health, statistics. Like everyone cares about causality to some degree. And so this means that there's many different kinds of tools and languages to talk about causality that are appropriate for different kinds of tasks. So that's one of the first things that we thought we had to lay out in the paper was kind of a very broad landscape about what causality is. And so we, I think, talk about a couple of different axes. One is data-driven causal analysis, and the other is logic-based causal reasoning. These are two very different ways of thinking about causality. And then the second major axis is whether we're talking about causal relationships in general, in the abstract, like a smoking normally called or often called cancer, versus causality in a very specific context that's called actual causality. And this is something like Bob smoked, Bob got lung cancer. Was Bob's lung cancer caused by Bob smoking? It's a very specific question in this very, in a specific instance. And so those are the two axes: data-driven versus logic, and then general causality versus actual causality.
I want to go to you now, and I want to dwell on this topic of actual causality. And I actually learned this phrase from your paper. But I think this is a kind of causal reasoning that people do quite often. Maybe even it's the thing they think about when they think about causal reasoning. So Amit, let's go deeper into what actual causality is. Maybe you can illustrate with some examples. And then I want to get into experiments you conducted in this area with GPT-4.
Sure. So interestingly, actual causality in research is sort of the less talked about. As Emery was saying, I think most researchers in health sciences, economics often talk about general phenomena. Right? But actual causality talks about events and what might have caused them. Right? So think about something happens in the real world. So let's say, I'll take an example of, let's say you catch a ball and you prevent it from falling down. Right? And I think people would reasonably argue that your catching the ball was the cause of preventing it from falling onto the ground. Right? But very quickly, these kinds of determinations become complex because what would have been happening is that there could be multiple other factors at play. And there would also be sort of questions about how exactly you're even thinking about what is a cause. Should you be thinking about necessary causes, or should you be thinking about sufficient causes, and so on.
So I think actual causality before sort of these language models was kind of a paradox in the sense that the applications were kind of everywhere, going from everyday life to even thinking about computer systems. So if your computer system fails, you want to understand why this failure happened. Right? You're not really interested in why computer systems fail in general. You're just interested in answering the specific failure it causes. The paradox is that even though these sort of questions were so common, I think what research had to offer was not immediately systemizable or sort of deployable, because you would often sort of tie yourself in knots in defining exactly what you mean by the cause, and also sort of how do you even get that framing without sort of just having a formal representation. Like most of these tasks were in English, right? Or in the case of computer systems, you would just get a debugged log. So I think one of the hardest problems was how do you take something in vague language, human language, and convert it into sort of logical framing or logical systems.
In the paper, you explore briefly, kind of actual causality that deals with responsibility or fault, and this connects with things like reasoning in the legal domain. And so I want to explore that with you. I know I jumped to the back of the paper. I just find this particular set of topics pretty fascinating. And so tell me about the experiments that you've conducted where you ask the model to do this kind of actual causal reasoning around assigning blame or responsibility for something.
So one of the important challenges in actual causality is determining what's a necessary cause and what's a sufficient cause for an event. Right? Now, if you're familiar with logic, you can break this down into some simple predicates. What we are asking is, if an event happened, was some action necessary? It means that if that action did not happen, then an event would not happen. Right? So we have a nice but-for relationship. Sufficiency, on the other hand, is kind of a complement. So there you're saying, if this action happens, the event will always happen, right? Irrespective of whatever else happens in the world. Right? And so far in actual causality, people would use logic-based methods to think about what's the right answer for any kind of event. So what we did was we looked at all the sort of vignettes or these examples that causality researchers had collected over the past decade. All of these are very challenging examples of situations in English language. And I think the purpose was to kind of elucidate the different kinds of sort of gotchas you get when you try to sort of use the simple concept for real-world applications. So let me take you to one example in our data set that we studied and how we're finding that LLMs are somehow able to take this very vague, ambiguous information in an English language vignette and directly go from sort of that language to an answer in English, right? But in a sense, they're kind of sidestepping the logical reasoning. But maybe in the future, we can also combine logical reasoning and LLMs. So let's take an example. It's like Alice catches a ball. The next destination on the ball's trajectory was a brick wall, which would have stopped it. And beyond that, there was a window, right? So as humans, we would immediately think that Alice was not a cause, right? Because even if she had not stopped the ball, it would have hit the brick. And so if you're asking if Alice was the cause of the window being safe, the negative answer might be no, right? But when you analyze it to the necessary and sufficient length, you would find that Alice was obviously not a necessary cause because the brick wall would have stopped it. But Alice was a sufficient cause, meaning that if Alice had stopped the ball, even if the brick wall collapsed, even if other things happened in the world, the window would still be safe, right? So these are kinds of interesting examples that we tried out. And what we found was GPT 3.5, which is ChatGPT, does not do so well. And it actually fails to identify correctly these causes. But GPT-4 somehow is able to do that. So it gets about 86% accuracy on this task. And one of the interesting things we were worried about was maybe it's just memorizing again. These are very popular examples in textbooks, right? So we did this fun thing, we just created our own data set, right? So now instead of Alice catching the ball, Alice could be, dropping a test tube in a lab, right? So we created this sort of a lab setup, a completely new data set. And we again found the same results, that GPT-4 is able to infer these causes.
Now you're getting into experimental results, and that's great because one of the things that I think required some creativity here was how you actually even structure, a rigorous set of experiments. And so, Emery, can you take us through the experiment setup and how you had to approach that with this, kind of unique way of assessing causal reasoning?
Well, one of the things that we wanted to make sure we had when we were running these experiments is construct validity, to really make sure that the experiments that we were running were testing what we thought they were testing, or at least that we understood what they actually were testing. And so most of these types of tests over large language models work with benchmark questions. And the biggest issue with many of these benchmark questions is that often the large language models have seen them before. And there's a concern that rather than thinking through and to get the right answer, they've really only memorized the specific answers to these specific questions. And so what we did was we actually ran a memorization test to see whether the underlying data sets had been memorized by the large language model before. We developed some of our benchmark data sets we developed as novel data sets that had never been written before, so clearly had not been seen or memorized. And then we ran additional tests to help us understand what was triggering the specific answers. Like we would redact words from our question to see what would lead the LLM to make a mistake. So for example, if we remove the key word from the question, we would expect the LLM to be confused, right? That's fine. If we removed an unimportant word, maybe a participle or something, then we would expect that should be something that the LLM should recover from. And so this was able to give us a better understanding of what the LLM was paying attention to. This led us, for example, to be very clear in our paper that in, for example, our causal discovery experiments, where we are specifically asking the LLM to go back to its learned knowledge and tell us whether it knows something from common sense and domain knowledge, whether it's memorized that some cause has a particular effect. We are very clear in our experiments that we are not able to tell you that what the odds are that the LLM has memorized any particular fact. What we can say is, given that it's seen that fact, is it able to transform it, and combine it somehow into the correct answer in a particular context. And so it's really important to know what these experiments really are testing. So I really appreciate the opportunity to go a little bit deeper into these studies.
I find this concept of construct validity pretty fascinating here, and it's you stress the importance of it for doing this kind of black box testing, where you don't actually have an explicit model for how the model is doing what it's doing. And you talk about memorization as one important test where you want to have a valid construct. But I think even deeper than that, there's an aspect of your mental model, your beliefs about what the algorithm is doing and how relevant the testing you're doing would be to future performance or performance on future tasks. And so I wonder if we could dwell on this notion of construct validity a little bit, maybe even one level deeper than the memorization. You and your mental model of what's happening there and why that's important.
My mental model of what the large language model is giving us is that it's read so much of the text out on the internet that it's captured the common sense and domain knowledge that we would normally expect only a human to do. And through some process, maybe it's probabilistic, maybe it's some more sophisticated reasoning, it's able to identify, like Amit said, the most important or relevant relationships for a particular scenario. So it knows that when we're talking about a doctor washing his or her hands with soap or not, that infection in a patient is the next, and it is something that's really critical. And maybe if we weren't talking about a doctor, this would not be the most important consideration. So it is starting from capturing this knowledge, remembering it somehow in its model, and then recognizing the right moment to recall that fact and put it back out there as part of its answer. That's my mental model of what I think it's doing. And we are able to demonstrate with our experiments that it is transforming from many different input data formats into answers to our natural language questions. So we have data we think it's seen that's in tabular format or in graphical formats. And it's impressive to see that it's able to generate answers to our questions in various natural language forms.
I want to go now to a different kind of causality, causal discovery, which you describe in your paper as dealing with variables and their effect on each other. Emery, we'll stick with you. And I also think that this is a kind of causal reasoning that maybe is closer to your day job, closer to the kinds of models maybe that you construct in the problems that you deal with. And so tell me about causal discovery and what you're seeing in terms of the capabilities of GPT-4 in your experimentation.
Yeah, so causal discovery is about looking at data, observational data, where you're not necessarily intervening on the system, you're just watching. And then from that, trying to figure out what relationships, what the causal relationships are among the factors that you're observing. And this is something that usually is done in the context of general causality, so trying to learn general relationships between factors. And it's usually done in a database way, looking at the covariances, statistical covariances between your observations. And there's causal discovery algorithms out there. There are, this is something that's been studied for decades. And there's essentially testing statistical independent relationships that, if something isn't causing something else, then if you hold everything constant, there should be statistical independence between those two factors, or different kinds of statistical independence relationships, depending on what type of causal structures you see among the relationships. And what these algorithms are able to do, the classical algorithms, is they can get you down to a set of plausible relationships, but there's always some point at which they can't distinguish things just based on data alone. They can, there's going to be a couple of relationships in your data set where they might not know whether A is causing B or B is causing A, vice versa. And this is where a human comes in with their domain knowledge and has to make a declaration of what they think the right answer is based on their understanding of system mechanics. There's always this reliance on a human coming in with domain knowledge. And what we're seeing now, I think, with LLMs is for the first time we have some sort of programmatic access to this common sense and domain knowledge, just like in the actual causality setting, we have it provided to us again in the causal discovery setting. And we can push on this further. We can, if we want, run our data analysis first, then look at the LLM to disambiguate the last couple of things that we couldn't get out of data. But we can also start from scratch and just ask the LLM to orient all of these causal edges and identify the right mechanisms from the beginning, just solely based on common sense and domain knowledge. And so that's what we did in our experiment here. We went through lists of edges and then larger graph structures to see how much we could recreate from just the common sense or domain knowledge that's captured inside the LLM. And it did quite well, beating the state of the art of the data-oriented approaches. Now, to be clear, it's not doing the same task. If you have some data about a phenomenon that's never been studied before, it's not well understood, it's never been named, the large language model is not going to be able to tell you, I don't think it's going to be able to tell you what that causal relationship is. But for the many things that we do already know, it beats looking at the data. It's quite impressive that way. So we think this is super exciting because it really removes this burden of that we've really put onto the human analyst before. And now we can run these analyses, this whole data-driven process can be built off of common sense that's already captured without having to ask a human, to type it all up correctly.
Amit, one of the things I found fascinating about the set of experiments that you ran here was the prompt engineering and just the effect on the experimental results of different ways of prompting the model. Take us through that experience and please do get specific on the particular prompts that you used and their effects on the outcome.
Sure. This was an iterative exercise for us as well. So as I was mentioning when I started in December, the prompt I used was pretty simple. Does change in A cause a change in B? Right? So if you're thinking of, let's say, the relationship between altitude and temperature, it would just translate to a single sentence. Just changing the altitude to change the temperature. As we sort of moved into working for our paper, and as we saw many different prompt strategies from other works, we started experimenting. Right? And one of the most surprising things, actually shocking for us, was that if you just add in these GPT 3.5 and 4 class of models, there's a system prompt, right? Which sort of you can give some meta instructions to the model. And we just added a single line saying that you are an expert in causal reasoning. And it was quite shocking that just that thing gave us a 5 percentage point boost in the accuracy on the data sets that we were testing. Right? So there's something there about sort of prompting or conditioning the model to be generating text more attuned with causality, which we found is interesting. It also suggests that maybe the language model is not the model here. Maybe it's the prompt plus a language model, meaning that GPT-4 with a great prompt could give you great answers, but sort of there's a question of robustness of the prompt as well. And finally, the prompt that we went for was an iteration on this, where instead of asking 2 questions, because for each pair we can ask does A cause B or does B cause A, we thought just making it one prompt and asking it, here are 2 variables, let's say altitude and temperature, which direction is more likely? And so we just give it 2 options or 3 options in the case of no direction exists. And there were two benefits to this. So one, I think somehow this was increasing accuracy even more, perhaps because choosing between options becomes easier now. You can compare which one is more likely. But also, we would ask the LLM now to explain its reasoning. So we would ask it literally explain it step by step, I think, going from the chain of thought reasoning. And its answers would be very instructive. So for example, some of the domains we tested, we don't know anything about it. Right? So there was one neuropathic pain data set, which has nodes called radiculopathy, DLS, lumbago. We have no idea. Right? We're just looking at the responses from the LLM. You can both sort of get a feel of what it's doing at some high level maybe, but also understand the concepts and think for yourself whether those sorts of things, reasoning is making sense or not. Right? And of course, we're not experts, so we're very fooled, right? We might think this is doing something. But imagine a doctor using it, imagine some expert using it. I think they can both get some auxiliary insight, but all these explanations help them debug it, right? So if the explanation seems to be off or it doesn't make sense, that's also a nice way of sort of knowing when to trust the model or not.
One of the things that we noticed with these prompts is that there's more to do in this space too. Like the kinds of mistakes that it's making right now are things that we think might be resolved, at least in some parts, with additional prompting or thinking strategies. For example, one of the mistakes was about when we asked about the relationship between ozone and levels and radiation levels. And it answered wrong. It didn't answer what was expected in the benchmark. But it turns out it's because there's ambiguity in the question. The relationship between ozone and radiation is one direction if you're talking about ozone at ground level in a city. And it's the other direction if you're talking about ozone in the stratosphere. And so if you want, you can ask it, is there any ambiguity here? Is there any additional information you would need that would change the direction of the causal mechanism that you're suggesting? And it'll tell you. It'll say if we're talking about the stratosphere, it's this. If it's on the ground, it's this. And so there's really, I think we're going to see some really fun strategies for improving the performance further by digging into these types of interrogations.
The model is a kind of generalist in a way that most people are not, or I'm just going to go for it, in a way that no person is. With all this knowledge of law and culture and economics and so many other code, so many other things. And I can imagine showing up and a little bit of a primer on a briefing on, well, here's why you're here and what you're doing, and that's helpful for a person. And I imagine, and as we see, it's helpful for these generalist, general purpose reasoners. And of course, mechanistically, what we're doing is through the context, we're inducing a different probability distribution over the tokens. And so I guess that's what's happening here. This is the primer that it gets before it steps into the room and does the Q&A or gives the talk, as we do. But I want to get into a little bit now about where you see this going from here for the field and for you as a researcher in the field. Let's stick with you, Emery. Where do we go from here? What are some of the exciting frontiers?
What I'm most excited about is this opportunity, I think, that's opening up right now to fluidly, flexibly go back and forth between these different modes of causality, going from logic-based reasoning to data-based reasoning and going beyond the kind of set tasks that we have well-defined for us in our field right now. So there's a fun story that I heard when I was visiting a university a couple of months ago. We were talking about actual causality and connections to database causality. And this person brought up this scenario where they were an expert witness in a case where a hedge fund was suing a newspaper. The newspaper had run an expose of some kind on the hedge fund, scared off all of their investors, and the hedge fund went belly up. And the hedge fund was blaming the newspaper and wanted compensation for this. Right? But at the same time, this was in the middle of a financial crisis. And so there's this question of, wouldn't the hedge fund have failed anyway? A lot of other hedge funds did. Plus there's a question of, how much of an effect do newspaper stories like this usually have? Could it possibly have killed the hedge fund? And then there's all the questions of normality and morality and stuff. Maybe this is what the newspaper is supposed to be doing anyway. It's not their fault. What the consequences were. So now you can imagine asking this question, starting off in this logical, framing of the problem. Then when you get down to this sub-element of what happened to all the other hedge funds, what would have happened to this hedge fund if the newspaper hadn't written the story, we can go look at the data. What happened to all the other hedge funds? And we can run the data analysis, and we can come back. We can go back and forth so much. I think that kind of flexibility is something I'm really going to be excited to see us able to automate in some fashion.
What do you think? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, I think I'm also excited about the practical aspects of how this might transform the causal practice. So, for example, both Emily and I have worked a lot on this problem of estimating the causal effect, right? And one of the challenges that has been in the field for a long time is that we have great methods for estimating the causal effect once we have the graph established. But getting that graph often is a really challenging process, and you need to get domain expertise, human involvement. And often that means that a lot of the causal analysis does not get done just because the upfront cost of building the graph is just too much, or it's too complex, right? And the flip side is also that it's also hard to verify. So suppose you assume a graph and then you do your analysis, you get some effect, like this policy is error, let's say. It's very hard to evaluate how good your graph was and how maybe there are some checks you can do, the robustness checks to validate that, right? And so what I feel the opportunity here is that the LLMs are really being complementary to what we're already good at in causal inference, right? So we're already good at giving a graph, giving you an estimate using statistics. What the LLMs can come in and do is help domain experts build the graph much, much faster, right? So now instead of thinking about, what is my system, what do I need to do? Maybe there's a documentation of your system somewhere, and just feed it to an LLM, and it provides you a candidate graph to start with, right? At the same time, on the back end, once you have estimated something, a hard challenge that researchers like us face is what might be good robustness checks, right? So often these are, one example is negative control, where you try to think of what is something that will definitely not cause the outcome, right? I know it from my domain knowledge. Let me run my analysis through, assuming if that was the action variable. And then my analysis should always give an answer of 0, right? But again, sort of figuring out what such variables are is more.
For marketing texts, they have things like an hour after someone signs up, you should send them an email because they might have signed up and forgotten about your tool. That doesn't work with developers. They're just annoyed that you emailed them twice within the hour, like once for signing up and then a little later for, hey, do you still remember me?
Hi everyone, you're listening to Scaling DevTools, the show that investigates how DevTools go from 0 to 1. I'm joined today by
have to resize my browser all the time. But since then, it has really grown into an app that still deals with responsive design, but also with like different media queries, like developing for dark mode and light mode, for reduced motion, forced colors, etc. For accessibility testing, to make sure you have the right color contrast, the right site structure, the right meta tags, and like just general quality, like web vitals, HTML validation, stuff like that. So it really nowadays is a tool for everything related to building really good websites. And that's what ambitious web developers want to do. They always want to be or get the most out of the work they do, and Point really helps with that.
Yeah, it makes so much sense when you think about it. It's like everyone building websites is using their browser all day long, and yet using a tool that's not designed with developers in mind so much, primarily designed for internet users rather than the people making the websites. So
yeah, definitely.
And you're 100% bootstrapped as well, right?
I'm 100% bootstrapped. Yes.
Yes, amazing. So everyone go support Killian on this journey and go get Polyplane. Killian, so today we're going to dive into onboarding, and particularly onboarding developers, because I know that's something that you have a lot of expertise in and that you've spent a lot of time thinking about. So I wondered if you could maybe introduce us to the journey that you went on in terms of learning how to onboard developers.
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey is as follows. I did everything wrong, and now it kind of works. So the neat thing about developers is that they're very aware of like when they're being marketed to, but also what they want and what's like the app or the company wants don't align. And that makes sense because like all the companies lie to them and they know better. You know this, I know this. Whenever like you have to deal with some organization and they're like, I'm sorry, the system won't let me do that. They're like, that's not how it works. Yeah, they're like hypersensitive to the truth in a way. And that also goes back to like literally every tool out there promises developers they'll be like 10 times more productive. And that's just never true. So whenever we as developers see that, we like automatically dismiss it. So those are all things that you don't have to explain to developers. But if you're like me and you need to, for better or worse, market an app, what you're going to do is like listen to all the marketing experts and do as they say, because they're the experts. So that's what I did with my initial onboarding, specifically talking about like the email onboarding flow. And we can talk about like in-app onboarding a little later. But like if you look at all the marketing texts for how should your email onboarding flow look, they have things like an hour after someone signs up, you should send them an email because they might have signed up and forgotten about your tool. That doesn't work with developers. They're just annoyed that you email them twice within the hour, like once for signing up and then a little later for, hey, do you still remember me? Also think like, you have to keep emailing them throughout their trial period, which Polyplane has a 2-week trial period. And you have to keep mailing them like at least once every 2 days so they don't forget that you exist. And I'm sure it works for a lot of tools, but it just ends up being very annoying if people are engaged anyway. Or if they don't suffer from short-term memory loss and they know what they did 2 days ago. Which all makes sense if you say it out loud, but I still had to discover that on my own through many annoyed emails from many developers. But yeah, so that's just like a journey that you have to go through. And I figured, it's better to start with like the defaults, what most marketing experts say, like this is the type of email flow you should use. And then just essentially what happened was like cutting half of it and ending up with something decent. So that's what I've been doing. And in terms of like the content of those emails, there's 2 types of emails I sent during the trial. One is sort of like status updates, like you're halfway through the trial, you have a few days left. And then the other is information gathering, which is where most of like the useful feedback comes from. Like, how are things going? Like after a few days, send an email. You've been using Polyplane for a few days now. Can you let me know what you like, what you don't like? Really helps me out.
It's okay, okay.
I feel like I can rule the world. I know I can be what I want to. Put my all in it like days.
To bring generative AI to the healthcare industry. And finally, back to school with Google, all in about 10 minutes or less. But first, let's hit it with the news. Ben, what do you got for us?
All right, the ChatGPT subreddit now has 1,970,000 members, so we're closing in on 2 million members there. Apple, in its recent WWDC conference in 2023, did not mention AI, and this is also where they announced the Vision Pro that you might be seeing around the internet. But instead of mentioning AI, they used the words transformer models / machine learning, so they're kind of beating around the bush. But remember, Apple is not feature-focused, they're more like experience-focused, so that's probably why they're not really showing capabilities, they're just wanting to focus on the products itself. Now, the last one here is a big thank you all to you all. That is, we've hit 10,000 subscribers, and we are on the episode 50 that you might have caught earlier. So 2 big milestones, and we really appreciate it. Thank you all for tuning in.
Yes, thanks, I really appreciate that. And let's get on with the first topic then. So Google introduced 10 new generative AI learning courses to help individuals prepare for future job opportunities. And the courses aim to provide a comprehensive understanding of AI and machine learning. And most of them, the classes include a video followed by a pretty heavy document text and then a quiz at the end. By offering free courses, Google is addressing the need for upskilling and ensuring that people are equipped with the necessary knowledge for AI-focused careers. Now, this move is significant for investors as it demonstrates Google's long-term commitment to AI and its potential for future growth in the industry. And you notice Google used AI there, but transformer models, machine learning, one and the same there. Now, the generative AI learning path includes courses that cover topics such as Intro to Generative AI, Intro to LLMs, Responsible AI, Image Generation, Transformer Models and BERT Model, Create Image Captioning Models, and Intro to Gen AI Studio, just to name a few. Now, these courses serve as a starting point for users to grasp the fundamentals of generative AI and its role within the broader AI ecosystem. The courses also encourage users to explore additional learning materials to facilitate their retraining in AI-focused profession. And as the demand for data scientists is predicted to increase by 36% by 2031, which in my personal opinion, I think they're lowballing it there. And these courses hold practical value for companies like Google that require a substantial number of AI-focused data scientists in the future. And they look really cool. And to be upfront with you guys, we have not taken these courses yet, but we are going to get into them and take a couple of them just to test it out. We'll report back on you with what we found out.
Yeah, really excited about it. And we will link to these courses on our website, thechatgptreport.com, under this episode's page.
And we'll link that on LinkedIn and Twitter too in the comments.
down below too.
All right, the next one is also about Google. Google's cloud division is expanding its utilization of advanced AI in the healthcare sector. Now, Google Cloud announced that the Mayo Clinic is utilizing a newly introduced service called Enterprise Search on Generative AI App Builder. This move enables medical professionals at Mayo Clinic to swiftly access patient information by employing the same tools that power cutting-edge chatbots, so the LLMs there. Now, this tool empowers clients to develop their own chatbots, leveraging Google's technology to efficiently sift through vast amounts of diverse internal data, especially if it's like your own patient information. In the healthcare domain, this translates to faster and simpler interpretation of data, such as patients' medical history, imaging records, genomics, and or labs through a straightforward query. Now, even if the information is stored in different formats and locations, healthcare workers can benefit from the capabilities of this technology because AI is pretty good at cleaning data, at least we've seen that so far. Now, for our listeners outside of the US, the Mayo Clinic is renowned as one of the leading hospital systems in the United States with numerous locations, so that kind of tells you the scale there. Now, Google emphasized its commitment to privacy, assuring customers that they retain control over their data because within the medical field you have the HIPAA laws. Now, the newly introduced service, which is what we're talking about here, is also compliant with the HIPAA laws, which is Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, further reinforcing data security in the healthcare context because we have to have secure information, especially inside of healthcare. Google Cloud and the Mayo Clinic forged a 10-year partnership in 2019, with Mayo Clinic selecting Google Cloud as the central component of its digital transformation efforts. And this recently announced collaboration marks the first step in the expanding the agreement between the two organizations. So focusing on the development of AI applications within healthcare. So it's kind of one of the first things they've done that's at least to this scale. Excited to see how that goes because I know that medical history and medical records can be sensitive, but also something that can see massive amounts of improvement within the US healthcare system, could be improved in that way. So
yeah, and I think what's funny here is they forged a 10-year partnership in 2019. Have we not been saying the decade of AI? They've got a decade deal there.
There we go.
I love that. Okay, here we go. I got some resume prompt help now. So I got a prompt asking for help with resumes on Twitter. And someone was asking about an AI that can assist with resumes. And this is when a Twitter user named Zach Wright chimed in and offered an impressive idea that I hadn't thought of before. What he does is he uses ChatGPT as an assistant in his job search. Here's how he does it. First, he gives ChatGPT the job description and then his resume and asks it to score him on how well he would fit the job on a scale of 0 to 100. In his first example, he got an 80. Then he asked ChatGPT to explain why and where he's strong and where he falls short. And then he asked, and this is in quotes, asked me a series of questions about the problem areas to identify any relevant experience, end quote, to help him fix the issues. And he mentions that it reveals part of his work history that he didn't think to include. And then he asked it to turn those experiences into bullet points for his resume. From there, he feeds the resume back into ChatGPT and sees if the score went up. Guys, this is a brilliant little idea that can save you time with your resume. It's a really smart concept, and I would have never thought of the quote, rate me approach, right? It's smart, and it's a better prompt than just saying, hey, ChatGPT, rate me a resume for an engineering job. So take your current resume and jazz it up with these techniques. Definitely thank you for on that one to Zach.
Yeah, and I really think it's a good idea because
Rankin and show it can be interpreted in algebra geometric terms. I have no idea what that means, but Michael Thaddeus does, which is to say that when it comes to numbers and statistics and things, he's someone to take very seriously. So one day not long ago, he hears something that doesn't seem right.
So I saw that Columbia had risen to number 2. I think, in fact, this was even mentioned by our own dean at a faculty meeting. I think that's how I found out about it.
The dean announces to everyone, I have amazing news. Columbia has just risen to number 2 in the U.S. News College rankings, just a hair behind Princeton. Everyone basks in the glow of the school's extraordinary achievement, because you know what a high U.S. News rankings means. More alumni dollars, more prestige, more applications, more excitement and desire from neurotic upper-middle-class suburban parents. For anyone with Ivy League dreams, it's the holy grail. I mean, if you have a kid in high school and your kid said, Mom, I just got into Columbia, you would be over the moon. And why would you be over the moon? Because Columbia is number 2 in the U.S. News rankings. So the dean makes her big announcement, but Michael Thaddeus, the numbers guy, isn't buying it.
And that just piqued my curiosity too. Is pretty high ranking. In particular, we were tied with Harvard and MIT, which are institutions that objectively have certain big advantages over us. They have much larger endowments. They have much more space than we do. And I just, I've also, over the years, I've taken a greater and greater, perhaps almost obsessive interest in facts and figures about the university. I look at a lot of websites where the numbers are cute. And I just wondered, how could Columbia have performed so well on this ranking as to be tied with institutions that have these objective advantages over us? How do the numbers break down?
Columbia started in these rankings at 18th, then began a steady, dramatic climb past Cornell, Washington U, Rice, Vanderbilt, Brown, Dartmouth, Northwestern, Duke, Caltech, Penn, Johns Hopkins, University of Chicago, Yale, Stanford. In the past 5 years alone, they've gone from 5th to 3rd to 2nd, shooting like a shiny asteroid past their glittering peers. And in the running world, the tell for whether someone's doping is an unexpected improvement. When the 27-year-old miler suddenly lops 3 seconds off their personal best, you say, aha.
A sudden improvement is the tell.
Sudden, out-of-context improvement. Oh, my. The first thing Thaddeus did after the faculty meeting is buy a subscription to the U.S. News rankings. He downloaded the data Columbia submitted for his application, and his eye falls on class size. Columbia reported to U.S. News that 82.5% of its classes had less than 20 students. Thaddeus looked at that number and thought, huh?
Anyone who has taught here, as I have for the last 25 years, knows that our class sizes are not particularly small for an elite university and that they have been steadily growing. I'm teaching calculus, or I have just finished teaching a calculus course that had about 76 students, and that's typical for a course of that nature. Reporting to U.S. News said that, what was it again? I think 82.5% of all classes enroll below 20 students. And that just did not square with my experience at all.
So he decided to fact-check Columbia's claim. He went to the university's class catalog and pulled out the data.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Copyblogger Podcast. My name is Tim Stoddard. Thank you so much for joining me. This week we have a special guest, Nathan. It's great to finally meet you. I feel like I know you, but here we are at CEX at the conference. Sitting down for a shot. I'm really looking forward to this. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on. We've exchanged so many Twitter DMs, so many emails, all of that. We've got some mutual friends, so it's fun to actually meet in person.
Yeah, likewise. All right. I'm really excited for this chat. I have to start off with just an expression of gratitude. Other than probably WordPress, I'd say ConvertKit has been the most beneficial and useful tool that I've had in my life, for my companies, for my businesses. I really wouldn't be where I am doing the things I'm doing without ConvertKit. So I generally appreciate it. It's great to meet you, and I'm very grateful for the work that you and your team are doing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That means a ton. I think as a creator, the thing that you want most is just people to use and enjoy the things that you make. Yeah. And so seeing in the wild, seeing businesses like Copyblogger run on it, hearing the stories is just great.
All right, let's jump right into this thing.
you got a lot going on. You know, like I was trying to prepare for the conversation. I was like, where do I even start with it? So we'll just start with the Creator Network. I know that you've been working on this thing for a while.
Yeah.
It's not quite out into the public yet, but for those that have heard about it or maybe seen the beta version and getting notifications, what are you building? Like, what is this Creator Network and how's it going to help people?
Yeah. So the first thing is, you know, everything you do with a creator is better when you bring in other creators, right? Like all the advice you hear, if you're a YouTuber, like YouTube is telling you, do like collaborations. You know, that's the best way to grow your channel. We're going to conferences, you know, we're meeting up, doing podcasts, doing all this stuff of just like meeting and working with other creators. But what's interesting is nothing in email is built around those collaborations. Like email is very much a single player experience. You know, when you think about it. So the Creator Network is really, how do we systematize that? How do we build software that fosters connection and makes these partnerships, collaborations easy to do? And so the first thing we're rolling out with it is recommendations. And so that is when someone subscribes, like for example, if someone subscribes to my email list, a modal will come up afterwards and say, hey, thanks so much for subscribing. Why don't you also check out these 3 other creators that I recommend? And so if we imagine like a little group, if we have our mastermind group where we're all giving each other advice, helping build audiences, then we can all recommend each other. And so then when someone subscribes to you, it's going to come up and you're going to be recommending me and 2 other people. And so what happens is you end up just driving all of this growth for other creators. So I got a great testimonial from Ryan Holiday the other day because he's in it with Daily Stoic. And I just texted him, I was like, hey, how's it going? You know, and he just said, like, the Creator Network is driving more subscribers for Daily Stoic than every other traffic source combined. Jeez. And so, and Daily Stoic is a big email newsletter business.
Yeah.
You know, so I was like, I was blown away by that. And it's just because of, like, if you think of the math, you know, if you're partnering with people at a similar size to you, then it's going to drive really huge results. So it's still very new. It's time to we're recording it. I think the alpha was out for a couple of weeks, and then now we're 3-4 weeks into the beta. So there's only about 500-600 creators in it, and we're rolling out another 200 to 300 creators a week that we're giving access to it, and just really keeping it like a tight curated network with people who are really invested and over time overall the whole converted customer base.
Why do you think that's been? That email has always, for the last 10 years, experienced content marketers, creators always say the same thing, right? Email, build your email list. Everything should drive the email. But now that you mention it, I guess I never even had that realization that email has remained so isolated and secular and let's call it autonomous to the person. Like, why is it that we've never used email as a way to collaborate with each other? And as opposed to that, it's been just a one-on-one like networking tool and just a one-on-one relationship. Like, how did that realization come to you? What was the light bulb moment that you had?
Well, I think the first thing is that the market is so fragmented. And so even if you look, if you were to talk to someone who knows the software as a service industry, we talk about a lot of industries like maybe CRM functionality or, I don't know what else, but a bunch of things in the startup ecosystem are like winner take all or winner take most, where you get like a Salesforce that just completely dominates the space. And yes, there's other smaller players, but they're, I don't know, Salesforce maybe is 70% market share or something like that. Email, MailChimp is the biggest player in the space. They're $1 billion a year in revenue. They sold into it for $12 billion. They're only like 35% market share. You know, if you think about ConvertKit versus MailChimp, ConvertKit's 35 million a year in revenue. So not 35% of MailChimp's size, it's 3.5%. And so we're tiny in the space, but there's tons of other players. You know, if you think about Campaign Monitor, Next Campaign, context around forever. So it's a very fragmented space. And so these like network type features only work once you have scale, right? Because if I'm on ConvertKit and you're on MailChimp, well, that can't work, you know? And so like we were only able to build this functionality at ConvertKit as we achieve scale. We're just about to pass 50,000 paying customers on ConvertKit. And that gives, because it's all in a focused niche, right? We're just creators. Whereas other email tools are like all small business or something else. We can build these tools just for creators. And so I think that's the reason that's happening now is that like we're finally reaching scale with ConvertKit. And this is just the first thing we plan. There's a lot of other people like, wait, why are you calling it a creator network rather than recommendations or something else? And like we're in search of ideas of how does your entire mastermind group being on ConvertKit make it better for everyone else in your mastermind group, you know? So like example of the things we're playing with is let me sell and share email templates and designs. You know, let me share automation. So if I design something like that's amazing, or I build out automation for my business, like that's amazing. I should implement that. You're like, hey, no problem. Here's the link. And you just import it in your account, right? That's live now. Another thing that we want to do is like, what if you share segments across accounts? Like, what if I'm going to do a promotion for Copy Blogger? And I'm like, hey, will you share a segment with me? I don't need to see who's in it. But will you share a segment with me of everyone who's currently a paying member? You know, and I will exclude that segment from my promotions. No exporting CSVs and importing any of that nonsense. Like, do it in real time. In the same way that we let you share a segment with Facebook custom audiences, or, you know, customize your retargeting. So you're not, you know, pitching people with Facebook ads who have already purchased your products. And so it's the Creator Network is really how do we make it so that we're building tools for creators to connect. And this is just step one.
I get it totally. And I get the analogy where, I hate to be so buzzwordy, but when you create that network effect, it makes it much easier to pass data back and forth from accounts, so to speak. But so, okay, like you, I hear.
Low check size, meaning that you can cover really big amounts of people with your product. What else was there that you did specifically well that you think contributed to the success? Because like I said, there's a million other startups in the email industry that died or didn't make it to your level.
Yeah, so I think that there's a number of factors that were helpful, but it might be helpful to split them into which factors are absolutely necessary and which ones are more sort of nice to have. I think that in this particular space, email, and in probably several, many other spaces where the same properties for the user experience are true, i.e. the user has really high expectations because they have some preconceived notions from previous products or experiences. It's a really mission critical workflow, right? It's not some toy, it's not some tool that they use for fun, but it might be something they're using for critical day-to-day work. If those things are true, then I think the most important factor really is a very high quality product and user experience. That has to be in place. Once you have that, then you can get quite creative and you can do quite a lot on top of it. In our case, what we did early on was sit down and work through the full list of channels that we could spend time on from a growth and marketing point of view. We did it by going through the book Traction, which many founders are familiar with.
Brill Weinberg, yes.
Yeah, a great book. I find it to be a very rewarding but also exhausting exercise to go through the full list of channels because you're sitting there finding yourself evaluating something like in-person events and you're like, why or how would my startup ever need in-person events?
Hopefully not, right?
If it's like PLG, SaaS, like maybe, I don't know, maybe in-person events are sort of a small part of the strategy to build local communities, but really you should be going for a large audience. In any case, we went through that book. It was a fun exercise. It was a hiring exercise. Probably took us about 4 hours locked in a room, and we went through all of the possible strategies and tactics that we could deploy against all of the different channels. And then what we did was we picked a subset of channels that worked really well with one another. So we created a package of channels that kind of jived with the core premise of a really high quality product that had some natural word of mouth. And to your point, email being something that you do with other people has surface area. That means that the brand is continually being shared outwards with people who you communicate with. So for us, that package of channels early on was thought leadership, particularly from our founder and founding team. So really establishing a credibility and an authoritative voice in the industry. PR, i.e. presenting to the press, tech press in particular, but also the wider press where it's achievable, a new and remarkable story about what we're doing. Social media, and engaging with our community in a real, authentic way. And then, of course, the virality, kind of word-of-mouth piece, both, like I said, engineered as well as more organic. The cool thing about picking channels like this, and I will sort of share this as something that I think is really important for early teams to think about, is that's a set of channels that work really well with each other. They complement one another. They make each other more effective. For example, if we have a really big PR moment, it is all the more effective because we have thought leadership out in the market, so the PR has something to talk about. We can then be on social media and actually talk about it with the community. And of course, because there's word-of-mouth happening.
Okay, so if you're still watching, you're a champion or hero, or you just joined. But I think that's the end of my session. I have tried it out. And I think I know what I want to say. So that's the end. Thank you. And tune in tomorrow.